Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Had the Powers of Light and Darkness and Meet Daredevil Part 2. Before we start, please go support the salary per 301 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Issei is a male in this story. Chapter 3. The Leaders' Conference. Author narrates. Silence reigned in the back of Kuo Academy. The reason was simple: the revealed identity of the masked man who participated in the battle against Kakabiel and his subordinates. Although the vast majority did not know him, there were some who did. In the case of Haruko Nomura, he was her classmate; for Asia Argento, he was her friend; and on the part of Tsubaki Shinra, he was nothing more than the transfer student who helped him register. After that, they did not know anything else about the brown-haired boy. As for the Citri and Gremory heiresses, he was the spitting image of his childhood friend, which was also the case with the Haidu twins, except that they saw their younger brother in him. To which, everyone was waiting to hear his answer after the question that Kurumi had asked him earlier. "Kurumi? You still haven't answered my question. Is it really you, Ice?" she asked hopefully, feeling her heart beating agitatedly. "Issei? Have you ever cared about that, Kurumi?" he questioned sternly, causing the aforementioned to widen her eyes in shock. She wasn't the only one. The rest of those present were the same, mainly Sona, Riaz and Takeda, who did not expect such a sudden revelation, not after having spent years believing that Issei, the Issei they knew, was in front of them. Meanwhile, Kurumi felt a whirlwind of emotions inside her. Happiness, nostalgia and sadness were what stood out the most in said whirlwind. Still, with a smile on her face, she began to advance towards her younger brother with an outstretched hand. However, with a sour expression, Issei took a couple of steps back without abandoning his defensive stance. As a result, Kurumi stopped walking, looking at her brother in surprise. "Issei. No, don't even think about doing it," he said seriously, controlling his hostile impulses. At the same time, Kurumi despaired at his words. "Kurumi. We didn't mean to do it, Ice." We tried to stop, but she was forced to stop speaking when she was interrupted by Issei. "Issei. Don't make up excuses, much less in front of me," he said angrily, clenching his fists tightly. "Kurumi. I'm telling the truth, you have to believe us," she said with some distress, while Issei just shook his head. Aware that talking would lead nowhere, Issei turned around heading to leave. Before that, Kurumi became alarmed and tried to go to her brother so that he wouldn't leave. But before she could take a step, Sona grabbed her by the back, exalting her horse that tried to free itself from her grip. "Kurumi. Ice," she called pleadingly as she watched her brother slowly walk away. "Ice," she called again as her eyes began to get wet. "Don't go, brother," she begged as Issei's figure faded away as the seconds passed. Falling to the ground, Kurumi cried completely inconsolably. After years of incessant dreams in which she heard her younger brother's cries for mercy and his blood staining her hands red, she thought she could say sorry. She was not the only one. Her parents, her twin and her friends also wanted to say those words and let off steam. However, it seemed that this simple action was going to be complicated and even impossible to achieve. Issei didn't seem like he was going to forgive them, and they couldn't blame him. They felt that way too. Just getting up and seeing their reflections in the mirror only made them remember their greatest sin. However, everyone involved, that is, the Haidu, Sona, Riaz and Arena, were sure of one thing: no matter how much they wanted to stop, they were unable to do so. It was as if an external force had controlled them like puppets back then. Or maybe, in truth, it was just an excuse they unconsciously invented. Meanwhile, having already traveled a good distance despite having continued his path with difficulty, Issei advanced somewhat slowly in order to prevent his broken bones from hurting any organs. It was already enough that the tissues inside him were cut. His main objective was to get to his apartment, but when he stopped to reflect on his poor condition, the fact that he was in the middle of the street without his face covered, and that he was basically wearing the attire of the vigilante that appeared in the media, it was enough for the identity that he had been hiding for a while to end up being revealed. So changing destination, he set his sights on Stan's house, which was much closer than his apartment, and he could also use the alleys to cut across the route. However, halfway through the walk, Issei ended up kneeling on one leg. Luckily for him, he was in an empty alley, and from what he could hear, the people who lived nearby were sleeping. Still, with the mind that his goal was close, Issei stood up to continue his way, although in the end, he ended up tripping and falling face down. "Issei. Damn. The damage inside me is greater than I thought," he thought with some frustration as he remembered that Kakabiel left him in the state he was in with a couple of blows that were not intended to kill him. Hearing the sound of footsteps approaching from ahead, Issei raised his face in surprise at not having noticed that just now. But instead of it being a person, it was a beagle dog, which looked filthy and malnourished. A small animal approached Issei's face, beginning to lick him, cleaning all the sweat he had. On the other hand, Issei moved slightly, preventing the canine from licking his mouth. "Issei. "Dude, stop, come on, stop," he said in a low tone so as not to attract anyone's attention. As the dog didn't stop, Issei had no choice but to push it away by himself, being careful as he did so, being watched by the animal that happily wagged its tail. Meanwhile, Issei realized the state the animal was in thanks to his senses, letting out a sigh at that and raising his head. "Issei. You are stronger than me, friend," he said with a light smile, while the dog tilted his head curious about his words. Proceeding to get up, he slowly did so until he was completely standing. Following that, he headed toward Stan's apartment. But stopping for a moment, Issei turned to the dog, clicking a couple of times to get its attention. Which he quickly obtained, and without objection, the dog approached Issei, who was followed by the animal as he moved forward. After a few minutes, Issei arrived at Stan's apartment as stealthily and unnoticed as he could, something that the dog did not make easy for him, but it was a risk that he accepted the moment he brought it with him. Once in front of Stan's room, Issei knocked on the door about 3 times while the beagle stayed on his left side. Moments later the door was opened by Stan, who was quite surprised by the state Issei was in. "Issei. Hey Stan, I'm sorry to interrupt you at this time of night, but could you help me?" he asked in a very tired tone. After those words, he fell unconscious at the entrance. Stan, for his part, seeing this didn't know what to say, although his gaze went to the dog who only barked. The next day. In the main room of Stan's apartment, an Issei with bandages around his torso in addition to the wounds that Asia could not finish healing. But waking up abruptly, Issei sat on the sofa with a scared expression, breathing heavily. Turning his head in different directions to know where he was, after a few seconds, Issei sat up remembering that he was in Stan's apartment. "Issei. Damn," he expressed somewhat pained as he removed his legs from the sofa, while Mio made an appearance. "Mio. Don't get up, your body must still be assimilating what happened last night," she commented worriedly, while Issei stayed in place. "Issei. Where's Stan?" he asked curiously as he didn't notice the aforementioned's presence nearby. "Mio. Today I had to go to the rehabilitation center," she answered calmly, sitting next to Issei, who didn't comment anything. Instead, he had his head fixed on the ground. "Mio. Issei, do you want to talk about it?" she asked in a soft tone, touching her protege's back. "Issei. I want to believe them, Mio, but I can't not after what they did to me," he answered with a distressed voice while drops fell to the ground. "Issei. 3 years, it's been 3 years since I had a dream about them, but now. I remember everything," he said, raising his head with tears running down his cheeks. "Issei. What should I do, Mio?" he asked with pleading eyes. After all, even when he said bad things about them, they were still his blood family, which wasn't bad at first, they were like a normal family, so the change in their attitudes was completely sudden. Even today he wanted to know why they did that to him. But a part of him couldn't forget what they did to him, a part filled with hate and resentment that he forged to find Matt and Karen's killer, and now, that part wanted to pay back his family and his friends, twice as much as they did to him. It was indecision, most likely yes, but being aware that perhaps he would meet his brothers and possibly his parents more often at the academy, he had to make a decision and prepare until that moment arrived. Although with what just happened, it didn't matter what he said or what he prepared, in the end, he would end up succumbing to his emotions. "Leo. Issei," she called with a comforting tone to caress the aforementioned's face, "that is something that only you can decide, whatever you choose, I will be there to support you. But if Matt or Karen were here, I would be sure that they would tell you that it is not worth crying for them, just play dumb. And if they talk to you, calm down and be quick and concise in the conversation," she expressed with confidence in her words, while Issei nodded. "Issei. Okay, thank you," he commented, proceeding to wipe his tears with his hands. With Mio's help, Issei proceeded to get up with some difficulty. Once standing, he began to walk slowly towards a table with chairs, sitting on one of the pieces of furniture. But at the same time he sat down, a bark caught Issei's attention, who turned in the direction it came from, noticing the dog that accompanied him last night. "Issei. Hey, hello friend," he said with a slight smile, to which the dog proceeded to approach in his direction, and once close, Issei began to pet him. "Issei. It seems that they treated you better than me," he commented without erasing his smile, noticing how the animal was bathed and even fed. "Leo. Stan gave me this for you to wear," he informed, leaving a gray sports outfit and a pair of tennis shoes of the same color on the table. "Issei, thanks Mio. Could you get me some paper and a pencil? I'd like to leave Stan a note before I leave," he requested while still petting his new pet. "Leo. Right away," he said, proceeding to go in search of both objects. Walking out of a pet store holding a paper bag while in the other hand he held a leash that was connected to his new pet's collar, Issei had purchased everything necessary to maintain his new pet. But that done, Issei set off towards his home, and thanks to the hood of his sweater to hide his face, he was free to walk around like a normal citizen. Although that normality ended the moment Ryu made an appearance, something that didn't go unnoticed by his dog who started barking at him until Issei calmed him down. Ryu. Hey, are you better, kid? He asked curiously after hearing what happened at Stan's house. Issei. What's wrong? Ryu here returned the question, or rather changed it, being aware of what Ryu was least interested in was his personal life. Ryu. Nothing. I just wanted to congratulate you for last night, he expressed happily, simulating a thumbs up. Issei. Do you mean having finished off the fallen angels or surviving? He asked curiously, continuing on his way normally. Ryu. Both. Do you have any idea how many humans without the need for a sacred gear were able to defeat supernatural beings? Very few, I dare say they can even be counted on one hand, he answered somewhat animatedly, something that Issei didn't seem to be. Issei. Of those humans, how many had spirits and magic in their arsenal? He asked somewhat seriously, turning his face slightly towards Ryu. Ryu. Hey, don't belittle yourself. If that Kakabiel guy held back, it's his problem. On the battlefield you have to take advantage of any element to survive, he explained eloquently. Issei. It doesn't bother me that he held back. What bothers me is that despite that, he left me in the shit, he said, somewhat annoyed by the internal and external damage he received. Ryu. You have a good point. But changing the subject, someone is following you, he warned before disappearing out of nowhere in a black smoke. Issei. Yes, I thought so, he thought with a serious face, feeling the presence of a fallen angel several meters behind him. Continuing his way normally until he reached a corner, instead of crossing, Issei turned around the block. Meanwhile, the fallen angel who was chasing him was Rainer, who was wearing a trench coat that covered much of her body, her pants were brown, and she wore a common pair of shoes. Heading back to the matter at hand, the fallen angel saw how Issei turned the corner, quickly quickened her pace, but the moment she arrived and turned around, her target had disappeared along with her dog. Something that shouldn't be possible, since the street was already long, and assuming that her body suffered the consequences of the battle, the chances of her disappearing like that out of nowhere were impossible. Although noticing a certain alley on the street where she was, Rainer continued on her way until she reached said place, being surprised to find that Issei was not there either. Still, Rainer proceeded to walk further into the alley to make sure of her conclusion, seeing nothing but garbage bags and noticing the smell of urine, which she found quite unpleasant. And as much as she wanted to give up her quest, she didn't have much choice, or rather, she didn't have any. She should be grateful that she was saved from the brink of death, and that despite her decisions, she was going to stay alive unless she betrayed her faction again. Anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, Rainer was upset at having lost track of her target, who was nothing more than an injured human along with a dog. He couldn't have gotten very far. However, Rainer was grabbed from behind, which made her extremely excited, and since she was unable to see her attacker, she was about to create a knife of light to kill whoever was holding her. But she was forced to stop her action when she found an ice dagger near her right eye, immediately recognizing the only one who could do that. Issei. Try to kill me and I'll make sure to leave with you, he warned sternly near Rainer's ear, who shuddered a little at that. Rainer. Okay. I come with intentions of peace, she said confidently in her words, raising her hands, and although Issei realized that she was not lying, he still did not trust her words. Issei. Who assures me that? He questioned with clear distrust without reducing his grip strength and bringing the knife even closer to Rainer. Can I do it? A male voice asked calmly while holding Issei's hand that was holding the knife. Issei for his part was paralyzed. At no time did he perceive his presence or hear the footsteps of the person next to him. Instead, he had only heard the breeze of the wind before he spoke. But holding firm, Issei sharpened his gaze at the being nearby, aware that he was way out of his league to try to fight him. So without many options, he slowly moved the knife away from Rainer's face until he removed it completely and pushed the fallen angel towards the man. Annoyed by such treatment, Rainer remained silent due to the presence of the man, who looked at Issei from head to toe, although said person let out a smile as he glanced quickly at the young human's lower half. Bewildered by what the man did, Rainer lowered her head, looking at Issei's feet, surprised to find that the brunette was wearing his sneakers. Rainer. This human, even with his shoes on, didn't make a sound when he caught me, she thought in surprise, observing Issei more completely, who despite having his hands near his hips, maintained a defensive posture. Excuse my subordinate for following you, in fact, I was the one who gave her the order to do so, the man said in a friendly tone, while Issei continued to be on guard. Issei. What do you want from me? He questioned seriously, wanting to end the conversation as soon as possible. Azazel. First of all, my name is Azazel, leader of the fallen angels. I guess you must have heard it from Kakabiel, he said calmly, receiving a serious face from an Issei at his introduction. Azazel was a man with black hair except for yellow in the front, and his eyes were violet. His clothing consisted of a long maroon-colored coat with straps, gray pants, and a pair of brown shoes. Issei. I understand, he said seriously. That explains why I couldn't feel it until just now, he thought, somewhat alarmed, completely ignoring Rainer and focusing on this Azazel. Azazel. I see you are a man of few words, he muttered, somewhat disappointed, bothering Issei for the turns he was taking, but before he could say anything, Azazel spoke up. Azazel. Before I answer your question, don't you think we're in a bad place to talk? He asked, stopping to look around, focusing on the trash and the smell of urine in the air. Well, he agreed with Azazel regarding the bad smell, that was the least of it for him. Still, having the suspicion that he was going to continue insisting on going somewhere else, Issei decided to leave everything to the luck of what could happen now. Issei. Okay. But first I have to go get my things, he commented, receiving a quick confirmation from Azazel. But that done, Issei proceeded to climb onto a nearby trash container, which he used to propel himself towards the emergency stairs in front of him. After that, Issei climbed the stairs normally, trying not to make too much noise to attract the attention of the tenants who were in their homes. On the other hand, Rainer was surprised by how Issei moved naturally, as if he was not affected by the damage from the battle the night before. Meanwhile, Azazel looked curiously at the brunette. After a few minutes, Issei approached Azazel and Rainer with his dog and the shopping bag he had packed. Issei. Whenever you want, he said calmly. Azazel. Make yourself at home, he said in a friendly manner as he entered his luxurious apartment. Although from his perspective, Issei did not notice anything luxurious, the only thing he could notice was the exorbitant amount of liquors of all kinds, most of which were of very high quality, therefore, they must be very expensive. Leaving that aside, Issei just walked into the house with his dog, locating every exit he could have, be it doors or windows. Once he had them in mind, he sat in front of Azazel, who was relaxedly crossing his legs with a table in between them. And without completely lowering his guard, Issei had not taken his attention off of Rainer, who had taken off her trench coat, revealing her battle attire, and was standing behind a minibar serving whiskey in a glass with ice. Azazel. Very well, back to what concerns us. Yesterday's battle was not a simple fight between sides, but rather the beginning of a war, he informed calmly, surprising Issei with the unexpected revelation. Issei. War. What exactly do you mean by that? He questioned a little excitedly as he leaned forward. Azazel. Several decades ago, in the 15th century approximately, a dispute occurred between God, the fallen angels and the demon kings, a dispute that ended in a war. In this war, God and the 4 demon kings who would be Lucifer, Leviathan, Asmodeus and Beelzebub died, ending the biblical war that lasted almost a century, he said, leaving Issei more than shocked by his words. Issei. God, he's dead, he said, shocked by such a revelation. While he was not a fervent Catholic, Matt on the other hand was, having taken him to church every Sunday to the point where it was routine, and eventually, he began to believe in God. So finding out that he had been dead for centuries was like being doused with cold water. Issei. How is there no record of that? He questioned, still not completely out of his shock. Azazel. We altered their memories with magic, we did the same to rebuild the damaged areas. It was the least we could do after having used the world as a battlefield, he answered calmly, while Issei was just getting back up. Issei. I understand, he said, now a little more reintegrated, not wanting to imagine what would have happened if Kakabiel won. Rainer. Here you go, Mr. Azazel, she commented helpfully, leaving a glass of whiskey and one of water on the table that separated Issei and his leader. Issei. Why are you telling me all this? He questioned without diverting his attention from Azazel, who simply grabbed his glass of liquor. Azazel. Believe it or not, your intervention prevented a second biblical war from taking place. And believe me, despite the time that has passed, none of the 3 factions are prepared for that. The only thing we would achieve is to go to extinction and take you humans with us, he answered with confidence in his words. After that, he took a sip of his drink and continued. Azazel. As for the reason I sent you to watch, it was to know your identity. Well, you do not represent a danger, it is better to keep you in the system just in case, he explained calmly, taking another drink from his drink. Issei. I have already lost the intention of getting involved in a world that I do not belong to, he stated, proceeding to get up from his seat, followed by his dog who was lying on the floor. Azazel. That's a pity, then I prepared this for nothing, he commented with false regret, stopping Issei before he moved, which, he noticed as Azazel left some kind of paper on the table. Azazel. In 3 days there will be a meeting between us leaders to discuss what happened with Kakabiel, and if everything goes well, who knows, maybe we will go to peace, he said with some doubt, but still maintaining his calm attitude. Issei. Do you think I'll be welcome? He asked with some hesitation, focusing his attention on Azazel. Azazel. If you go with me, nothing will happen. At most, Michael or Serziches will ask you some questions and look at you carefully to remember you in a possible future, he answered calmly, to which Issei approached the table to grab the pamphlet. Issei. I'm not sure about going, he said with some seriousness while Azazel shrugged. Azazel. It's your freedom. But if you go, do it before 8 o'clock at night, apply magic to the pamphlet and you will appear here, he said calmly, while Issei put the pamphlet in his pants pocket. Issei. Goodbye, Azazel, fallen angel, he said goodbye, heading towards the exit accompanied by his dog. Rainer. My name is Rainer, she said, somewhat annoyed by Issei's attitude. Issei. Whatever, he commented disinterestedly without stopping his walk. 3 days later. In the living room of his apartment, Issei was lying on the couch with his head lost towards the ceiling. During the days that passed he has done nothing but rest. He even skipped school, although he did it more to avoid his brothers and parents, since it was conveniently school visit day. But leaving that aside, Issei felt better than in previous days, so getting up, Issei headed towards his room under the gaze of his dog, whom he named Stein. Returning to Issei, the aforementioned began to remove the clothes he was wearing, revealing his body free of bandages, yet he still had bruises and sutured wounds, also exposing the scars of the past. Making an appearance, Mio witnessed as Issei began to put on his trusty black sports outfit, which he had previously washed and knitted for this or any other occasion that might require using it. Mio. Are you sure you want to go, Issei? She asked somewhat uneasy as she watched Issei finish putting on his black coat. Issei. I'll only go as long as they don't take me as a threat, even if I don't represent anything to them, he answered calmly, proceeding to put on his pants. Issei. I'll make sure not to expose them, but I also need them to be hidden in case I need help, he commented, turning to see Mio. Mio. Although it may not seem like it, we spirits are only the weakest link in the entire supernatural world. For some reason she stopped speaking, until Ryu appeared. Ryu. You'll say that for yourself, I'm above your level, he expressed somewhat haughty while Issei walked past both spirits, heading towards his nightstand. Issei. What's the reason for that? He asked curiously, sitting on his bed, holding a Glock 17 pistol with his left hand, so he could proceed to disassemble it for safety reasons. Ryu. You see, my friend, I have a set of skills, not for nothing am I above any spirit, including the one over there, he explained, pointing in Mio's direction. Ryu. And while she can use magic, it's not quality. An example is Kakabiel and you, no matter how hard you tried to cut him you couldn't, and not to mention that you have cracks in your right hand from hitting him, he said, getting Issei to stop halfway through the process of assembling the weapon. Ryu. If you had asked me to finish off Kakabiel, I would have done it without any problems. But since you are so determined to get stronger and win on your own merits, I decided not to interfere and just support you, he said with confidence in his words, while Issei finished assembling the gun, inserting the magazine he had carried from the beginning. Issei. I understand, he explained with some calmness, proceeding to put the pistol behind his hip along with 2 full magazines. Mio. We can locate you no matter where you go in case you need help, she assured, completely to what Issei decided to grab the pamphlet that Azazel gave him. Issei. Thank you, he said honestly. After that, he turned his attention to Ryu. I will take into account what you said, he said confidently, so he could focus on the pamphlet. Feeling that it was not necessary to bring his handkerchief to cover his face, Issei was more than prepared for what might come, so without wasting any more time, he proceeded to apply magic to the pamphlet, managing to perceive a slight heat beneath his feet. Appearing in Azazel's apartment, Issei felt somewhat disoriented when teleporting, although after a while, he got back up and immediately recognized that he was in Azazel's house, thanks to the liquors that the latter kept, being able to locate the aforementioned in his rear. Azazel, hey Issei. It's good that you came, he expressed, somewhat pleased with a bottle of sake while standing behind the minibar. Issei. I had my doubts, he commented monotonously, turning towards Azazel. Azazel. Would you like something to drink? He asked, spreading his arms to show his large repertoire of liquors. Issei. Water. Alcohol distorts my senses, he requested, approaching the small sample that Azazel had. Azazel. Have you had any before? He asked again, this time somewhat curiously, as he took a bottle of water out of a mini fridge. Issei. Only when I need to relax, he answered, grabbing the bottle of water, which he opened to drink. Azazel. If everything goes well, maybe we can have a small celebration, what do you say, Vali? He asked somewhat excitedly, directing his gaze towards a young man who was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Vali. You know I'm not interested in parties, Azazel, he answered disinterestedly from his place. Vali was a boy who appeared to be 2 or 3 years older than Issei. His hair was an unusual silver color, and his eyes were light blue. His clothes were like those of a gang member, wearing a dark green shirt, black leather jacket and burgundy jeans with a chain hanging from them. Azazel. Sigh Issei, this is Vali. Volley, this is Issei, he introduced both young men, who didn't even deign to turn around. Volley. Hello, I greet with disinterest and a raised hand. Issei. Nice to meet you, he said neutrally as he continued drinking water. Azazel. Great, the emos got together, he thought pessimistically at the antisocial attitude that Volley and Issei seemed to have. Rainer. Lord Azazel, I have returned and brought what you asked for, she commented as she entered the room carrying some books. Issei. What's that for? He asked bewildered while Rainer left the books on the table. Azazel. It's so you understand what's around you. As an example, Volley is the White Emperor, he calmly explained, to which Issei, somewhat surprised, turned to Volley who remained seated. Issei. That guy? He asked surprised, not believing the word of the governor of the fallen angels. Azazel. Yes. You may think that wielding a sacred gear like the celestial dragons only means raw power. And while you wouldn't be so wrong, over the years the boosted gear and divine dividing have also transcended into politics, being much more complex than it seems, he commented with a slight smile as he walked towards the center of the room. Azazel. This is our world. Show even a hint of ignorance, and you can be used and discarded, he informed, taking a seat and crossing his legs. Issei. Why are you helping me? He questioned bewildered without diverting his attention from Azazel. Azazel. As the saying goes, today for you, tomorrow for me. Although I may need you sooner than you think, he answered still with his smile on his face, to which Issei proceeded to take a seat on an individual sofa. Issei. Do we have time? He questioned, making Azazel's smile grow. Azazel. Alright, it's almost time. First of all, could you give me your hand, Issei, he requested, extending his hand towards the brunette. Issei. May I know why? He questioned, somewhat unsure, making Azazel sigh. Azazel. I'm going to put a temporary seal on you. With that, not only will you be identified as part of my faction, but you'll also be able to teleport with us, he informed, so without having many options, Issei stretched out his hand towards Azazel, who immediately made a seal appear on the back of Issei's hand. Azazel. Very well, let's go, he said calmly, snapping his fingers. After that action, magic circles appeared beneath everyone present, and as the seconds passed, the glow emanating from the transportation spells became more and more powerful until they illuminated the entire apartment. After that, the glow gradually faded away, and by the time it disappeared, those in the residence did so as well, leaving no trace. Emerging from different magic circles, Azazel and his companions appeared in front of a huge building, which was guarded by soldiers from the three factions, that is, angels, fallen angels and demons. Although these soldiers kept their distance from each other, eyeing each other with suspicion and distrust, they still did not neglect their main job. Meanwhile, Azazel, Volley and Rainer waited for Issei to rejoin because despite being prepared for teleportation and it not lasting more than 10 seconds, it was enough to distort his perception of reality. The good thing is that it didn't last long, the bad thing is that he was able to notice that more magic circles appeared a few meters away, from which multiple individuals emerged. But among all of them, only 4 were the most relevant as they were in charge of directing their respective factions. On the demon side, there was the one who headed everything and everyone, Satan Lucifer, who was a man with long crimson-red hair and blue-green eyes. As for his clothes, he wore a violet-gray tunic with golden edges and decorations, underneath he wore a white suit mixed with gray with violet edges and a belt. Even with the demons, the other person was the Satan Leviathan, a beautiful woman with long black hair tied in 2 tails on each side, tied by fuchsia ribbons, the color of her eyes were a purple similar to amethyst. Her clothing consisted of a dark green shirt with long sleeves, a pink scarf tied around her neck and a black dress. Now moving on to the angels, Michael, the leader of the angels, was a tall handsome man, his long hair was a color similar to gold, his green eyes radiated a certain kindness. He wore a red robe with a gold cross on the front of his white alb, on his shoulders were golden sandals with a white band and a golden halo above his head. At her side was her sister Gabriel, a woman with long dark blonde hair arranged sporadically with a large portion behind her neck, her brown eyes radiated a certain hardness. Her clothing consisted of a black blouse that went over her waist, over it a white vest with blue details, on the bottom she wore a dark blue pleated skirt with a blue-gray lining and blue boots. As for the rest, behind the demon kings were Riaz and Sona accompanied by their peerage, who were surprised to see Issei again after a while, mainly Takeda who misunderstood that his brother was on the side of the fallen angels. On the angels' side, they only had one individual who did not belong to the high hierarchy, being none other than Arena Shidu, who, not being informed about Issei, saw the image of her childhood friend in the boy who was with the fallen angels. But leaving that aside, the representatives of the angels and demons began to advance in order to get closer to a smiling Azazel. Azazel. Serziches, Michael, Seraphol, Gabriel. It's good to see you after a long time, he greeted with a friendly smile as he approached his fellow officers and those who were once his brothers. Michael. I would have preferred it to be under more peaceful circumstances, Azazel, he said, not very happy, stopping Azazel halfway. Surziches. I agree. You're very relaxed even though the meeting is due to the rebels of your faction, he stated with a sharp look, while Azazel acquired a blank expression. Azazel. Gosh, they're more upset than I thought, he thought, somewhat surprised that the leader of the angels and demons had cooperated to instigate him. Seraphol. It seems you have nothing to tell us about it, she said in an annoyed manner, crossing her arms, making her breast stand out. Gabriel. Don't expect much from him, Miss Seraphol, he commented with a sour face directed towards his brother. Azazel. Those two too, he thought, a bit depressed, wanting to know since when the demons and angels conspired against him, but getting up, Azazel spoke up. Azazel. I'm glad you're okay. How about we go inside? Unless you want to have lunch outside. He asked with a smile, being glared at by his brothers and the demon kings. Either way, the main biblical leaders began to walk with their respective groups behind, although unfortunately for Issei, the group of demons were at his side, so he was close to his brother Takeda. Takeda. Rumi was in bad shape after you left that day. That's why she couldn't come today, he warned, but he didn't receive any response or words from Issei. Takeda. Since when did you choose a side? He said without taking his gaze off the front, just like Issei. Issei. You're wrong, it's temporary, he said calmly in his words without stopping his walk. Takeda. Are you doing this to make me feel bad? He questioned, glancing sideways at his younger brother who was keeping up appearances. Issei. It depends. Do you care what happens to me? He returned the question, turning his head towards Takeda, then turning it back to the front. Takeda. Issei, what Rumi said is true. We tried to stop you, in fact, we didn't want to. Do you really think we were capable of doing that to you? He questioned, looking at his brother who didn't answer. Issei. Let's put our family dispute aside, Takeda. Right now the world depends on this going well, he dodged the question in order to get away from his brother, positioning himself near Vali. Being aware that Issei was right and that if they continued talking they would only get the attention of the leaders, which would be counterproductive, Takeda kept his distance from his brother, approaching Riaz who seemed to be fine. As for Issei, the aforementioned only continued on his way without diverting his gaze forward. Thanks to that, he was able to notice that Vali was looking at him for a few moments and then returned his attention forward. Vali. Are they close? He asked, somewhat curious after having witnessed the conversation of both chestnuts. Issei. That's none of your business, he said with a serious expression, something that Vali didn't take badly. Even so, he confirmed his gaze. Vali. You still have time to leave, human, he warned this time with a somewhat serious tone, catching Issei's attention. Issei. What's that about now? He questioned, bewildered as Vali pointed in the direction of the leaders who were having a somewhat friendly chat between the three of them. Vali. You see better than all of us in this place. You can see the tension in the air, you see that no matter how much they seem like comrades, every step they take is the countdown to something good, or also, something bad happening, and being in the middle would not be good, he said suspiciously, lowering his finger to put his hands in his pockets. Vali. Don't be ashamed of yourself for wanting to leave, it's more than a human can bear, he expressed with a slight glance at Issei, who had a neutral face. Issei. In the hypothetical case that I wasn't here and a dispute broke out, it's most likely that they would continue it out there and it would end up in the middle, no matter what, he commented with some calm, but he didn't finish his speech there. Issei. I've already gotten into this. Besides, when I start a job, I make sure to finish it, he declared with a firm tone, making Vali snort. Vali. We have the same thought, he said with a slight smile, watching as the leaders stopped walking. At that, the rest also stopped in front of a huge double door, which was opened by Azazel, so that everyone could enter the room. The interior was huge, enough for everyone to fit without problems, apart from some chairs arranged in a row. Although what stood out the most was a round table with 5 chairs around it, which were taken by the leaders and their seconds in command in the case of Surziches and Michael. On the other hand, the leaders' companions took seats separately, except for Vali, who leaned against a wall while remaining standing. Azazel. Okay, we're all here now, he said, trying to hide his enthusiasm, letting out a part of his emotion. Representing the demons were Surziches, Lucifer and Seraphol Leviathan, who brought the Gremory and Citrierises along with their respective nobility to one of the main objectives of Cacabiel and his subordinates. On the side of the angels, the Seraphim Michael and Gabriel represented said faction, their presence due to an attack that happened in the Vatican that resulted in the theft of the fragments of the sacred sword Excalibur by Cacabiel. While their companion, Irina Shidu, was attacked by a stray exorcist subordinate of Cacabiel, and in the process the Excalibur mimic, which was under his possession, was snatched from her. As for the fallen angels, the only one who represented them was Azazel, who, instead of bringing one of his cadres, chose to gather those involved in the attack. Raynor was one of Kakabiel's most loyal subordinates and carried out most of his orders. Issei intervened on the battlefield, giving him enough time for Vali to arrive and finish everything. No matter how you look at it, they were even more relevant than Shemhazai, Azazel's second in command and vice-governor of the fallen angels. Azazel. How about we get started? He suggested with a carefree smile, being looked at sharply by his fellow employees. Sona. This ends our report, she declared with confidence in her words, standing next to Riaz. Serafal. Thank you very much, Riaz, Sotan. You may take a seat, she said somewhat cheerfully, to which Riaz and Sona, without saying anything or making a face, took their seats. Surziches. Do you want to speak, Azazel? He questioned, trying not to appear so serious. Azazel. I don't have much to say. Kakabiel acted on his own, as did his subordinates, even the one next to me and some friends of hers who participated in the same way, he answered calmly, pointing in the direction of Raynor, who became nervous upon receiving the stares of the vast majority of those present. Michael. Don't you think you're giving him too much freedom? He questioned somewhat sternly, shifting his gaze toward his brother. Azazel. I did it to expose potential traitors. If I had taken care of Kakabiel earlier, I would only have gotten more people to join his cause, he answered with his head resting on his hand. Gabriel. Don't you think that what happened only increased the number of rebels? She asked seriously and somewhat annoyed by Azazel's disinterested attitude. Azazel. Not at all. I made it public that I sent Kakabiel to Cocytus, and to make his image worse, I showed that his plans were thwarted by some children and a human, he answered comfortably. Also, Shemhazai and Barakwil are carrying out a protocol against those who try to betray Grigori, he finished answering, but that didn't seem to be enough to make the majority happy. Serafal. What about the fallen angel? He questioned, somewhat hostile at the idea of Raynor not being punished for her actions. Azazel. For now I need her to find out things that Kakabiel kept secret. When I'm done, she'll receive a punishment just like her friends, he said calmly, while Raynor lowered her head in shame. Michael. Changing the subject. Do you have any idea why Kakabiel wanted to start another war? He questioned sternly as he recalled the events and what the first biblical war entailed. Azazel. I was unhappy with how the previous war ended, he answered calmly, receiving an inquisitive look from Surziches. Surziches. Are you satisfied? He asked curiously with a raised eyebrow. Azazel. Why wouldn't I be? Even if I wasn't, I'm aware of the lack of power in my faction. Carrying out another senseless war would only destroy this planet, he said relaxedly, but after those words, he sharpened his gaze. Besides, I don't understand this brawl against me, he said this time with a somewhat serious tone, alarming both the young people and the adults by his sudden change of attitude. Azazel. Surziches, from your faction I have not yet heard if they have hunted down the descendants of the original Satans and their followers, he said somewhat seriously, and then looked away at his brother Michael. I will refrain from talking about the god system. But as for your forces, instead of increasing, they are only declining. In fact, among the demons and the fallen, the angels are the ones with the most deserters. How does that end? They become subjects of big fish like Kakabiel, he said, angering Gabriel to such an extent that he got up from his chair. Gabriel. Yes, but she was forced to stop speaking because Michael raised a hand, aware of what it meant. The seraph only calmed down. After that, she sat down, still looking angry. Michael. You always save everything for the last minute, Azazel, he said, looking quite calm compared to his sister, being aware that getting angry would not prove Azazel wrong. Azazel. Did I mistake something, Surziches, Serafal? He asked inquisitively, observing both Satans, who, on the one hand, Surziches kept up appearances, while Serafal did not hide her indignation. Surziches. Not at all, he declared with a neutral expression with his eyes closed, at the same time Azazel gave a winning smile. Meanwhile, the rest of those present who were nothing more than simple spectators were impressed by the turn of events. Azazel, the one who had everything to be against the sword and the wall, in the end, balanced things as if nothing had happened. Now they understood why he acted so relaxed. As if he had already anticipated this, Vali let out a light smile, while Issei changed his way of thinking regarding Azazel, having the feeling that the governor of the fallen angels was always 2 or 3 steps ahead of him, no matter what he did. Azazel. Now that we are aware of our fallacies, how about we make peace? Tensions between us only harm the world, he commented with some calmness, observing his colleagues at the post. Michael. Even if you say it like that, God and the great demon king Lucifer, who were the centers of the biblical war, are no longer among us, he said, somewhat severely, causing some to feel bad at the mention of God, in the case of Asia, Zenobia Quarta, Irina, Gabriel and to some extent Isay. Azazel. Then let the White Emperor and the Red Emperor decide, he commented, taking those mentioned by surprise, as they thought they would not be involved in the present issue. Azazel. Although they are not related to what happened in the war centuries ago, due to the immeasurable power they possess, it gives them a say in this discussion, he stated, to which attention was quickly divided between both bearers of celestial dragons. Ali. Azazel, you know very well that I am only interested in testing my power with strong subjects, he said in a carefree manner, causing Azazel to put on a blank expression at his unethical response. Azazel. Well, there will be strong subjects who will want to avoid peace, don't you think? He asked, receiving nothing more than a snort from Vali, to which the leader of the Fallen chose to direct all his attention towards a standing Takeda. Azazel. Red Emperor, what do you choose? He questioned, although deep down he knew the answer, but preferred to hear it. Takeda. Peace. I choose peace, he answered with confidence in his words, observing Issei for a few seconds before sitting down. Azazel. Wow, you are really determined, he said with an amused expression without receiving a response from Takeda. On the other hand, Issei opened his eyes as if he had noticed something. Issei. Bastard. You knew that, that's why you brought me, he thought, somewhat annoyed, believing that Azazel discovered that Takeda and he were brothers. Azazel. Excellent, any questions? He asked animatedly, stopping to observe each individual present equally. Gabriel. Before continuing, what about the young human who is with you, Azazel? She asked curiously, inquisitively looking at Issei, who upon hearing his name had no choice but to calm down. Azazel. Oh, him. I brought him here thinking that you wanted to ask them a couple of questions after what happened with Kakabiel, he answered calmly, disconcerting many with his response. Seraphol. Isn't he from your faction? She questioned, confused, as Azazel shook one of his hands disdainfully. Azazel. For bitter people I already have my cadres and Vali, he answered condescendingly. On the other hand, Issei got up from his seat, getting the attention of most of those present. Issei. Nice to meet you, my name is Issei Murdoch, he said, accompanied by a slight bow. Surziches. Murdoch. He questioned immediately after hearing Issei's name, which surprised the aforementioned a little. Issei. Yes, he answered calmly while trying to listen to the heartbeat of the Satan Lucifer, finding that he was calmer than him. Surziches. Can I call you Issei? He asked in a somewhat friendly manner, receiving a nod from the brown-haired boy. Issei. Go ahead, he replied without giving much importance to the matter. Surziches. Well, Issei. What brought you to Kuo Academy? He asked curiously, observing the young human closely. Issei. I could sense that something was haunting the place. At first I found it strange, since until that day I hadn't noticed anything similar before, he answered, or rather, he lied, wanting to keep the spirits who were with him a secret. Michael. Since when do you know about the supernatural? Besides, magic is something that is difficult for humans to learn on their own merits, you know. He asked, looking at Issei for a few seconds. After that, he turned his gaze towards his sister, who had a stern expression. Issei. I honestly had no idea about the existence of the supernatural until recently. In fact, before I got here Azazel had to give me a few lessons about the supernatural world, so I would be up to date, he said, half lying this time. Even Azazel nodded in confirmation of what he had to do. Takeda, for his part, was surprised by Issei's answers. If it weren't for the fact that he revealed his identity a couple of days ago, he would have thought that he was not his blood brother, and that his name, the opportune blindness and his kinship were just pure coincidences. But seeing him lie so blatantly and so naturally, there was a moment when he bought into these lies, believing two things. First, his brother was a great liar and actor who didn't show slight tremors from nervousness or stuttering when speaking. Second, he had anticipated exactly what he had to say. Whatever it was more than clear that he didn't know his brother, and that filled Takeda with frustration, until he felt someone grab his left hand. When he turned around, he realized that his master, Riaz, intertwined her hand with his in order to calm him down. Seraphol. What do you plan to do with everything you know? She questioned with sharp eyes, to which Issei shrugged. Issei. What can I do? If I go out on the street and shout everything, they'll just see me as a crazy blind man. Besides, I don't gain anything by revealing the supernatural world, it would do more harm than good, he explained calmly, being the first time he was being honest. Surziches. Well, he expressed calmly, forming a light smile, we appreciate your intervention, Issei. If it weren't for you, our factions would be in chaos, and instead of being here talking, we would possibly have already taken up arms, he commented kindly, receiving a nod from Issei. Issei. You're welcome, he said, proceeding to take a seat once he lost the attention of the majority. Azazel. Now yes, how about making peace now? He questioned somewhat excitedly, and although they did not show it, his colleagues shared the same feeling. However, before she could do anything, the atmosphere suddenly changed, feeling somewhat heavy. Meanwhile, a purple aura surrounded Sona and her peerage, who remained motionless as if frozen. As for Ria's peerage, the only ones who remained frozen were her queen Akeno Himejima, Yudo Kiba, and Asia. And oblivious to them, Irina and Raynor also ended up frozen in their places. The rest were conscious. Ria's Zenobia Quartonite was holding her holy sword. Durandal, Volley and Takeda had their holy devices released, while Ria's Gremory was holding the hand of her only pawn. On the other hand, the leaders and their seconds in command in the case of Gabriel and Seraphil maintained somewhat stern expressions. Ria's? What's happening? She asked, dismayed, watching as her friend stood still. Azazel. This is a product of the half-vampire you have as a servant, Gremory, he answered calmly, getting up from his seat. Takeda. Gasper. He asked, surprised, watching as the leader of the Fallen positioned himself in front of a window. Serziches. He is the only one who possesses this kind of power. Most likely someone with bad intentions must be using it, he commented with some suspicion in his tone of voice, holding a hand under his chin. Issei. Excuse me, can you explain to me what's happening, he requested with an outstretched hand, being watched by everyone present. Issei. Did I say something wrong? He asked curiously as he felt watched, as if he was being judged. Azazel. Nothing, actually it makes sense coming from you. We're just surprised you didn't end up frozen like the rest, he commented as he approached Issei, and once close to him, he began to look at him from different angles. Issei. What? It only affects the weak? He asked, feigning bewilderment. After all, he already realized where this was going. Azazel. That's right. We leaders have great power. On the other hand, that girl possesses Durandal, a sacred sword that has stored energy over the decades, not to mention the celestial dragons inside Volley and Takeda, he answered at the same time that he did not look away from Issei. Azazel. The only exceptions are Ria's Gremory, who is holding on to Takeda, and you. And since you weren't in contact with anyone, you must have some hidden power, he said curiously, reaching to grab Issei by the face, causing the latter to push him for his action. Issei. I don't have to give you explanations. Besides, don't you think we should take care of this situation before something happens? He reproached, somewhat annoyed, making Azazel sigh with disappointment. Azazel. You're right, we must make the half-vampire regain control of his power. If we don't succeed, we'll end up frozen without exception, he commented in a dejected manner, slightly exalting Issei. Issei. And what are we waiting for to act? He questioned, even more annoyed than before by Azazel's carefree attitude. Volley. I agree with the human. If you ask me, I can go finish off the damper quickly, he said in a relaxed manner, taking an upright posture, surprising Takeda and Riaz with his words. Azazel. We are trying to form a peace alliance, Volley. Not force a war, he said with some displeasure at his subordinate's words. Gabriel. We must act quickly, we have guests, he warned with a serious face, while observing the outside through a window. Outside the establishment, a gigantic magic circle was located in the sky, from which emerged dozens and dozens of magicians. And as if that were not enough, monsters also fell in the form of basilisks and cyclops, which were ridden by the same magicians mentioned. Returning to the meeting place, those who remained conscious were in front of the windows, witnessing how the magicians attacked the angels, fallen ones and demons that guarded the place. On the other hand, Issei turned his attention to the lower levels of the establishment after hearing an explosion on the top floor below. After that, he noticed how more magicians entered and began to advance, facing the guards who were in the way. Without saying a single word, Issei headed out of the room, something that was noticed by Takeda, who quickly watched his brother open the door. Takeda. Issei, what are you planning to do? He asked worriedly, getting the attention of a few. On the other hand, he received no response from his brother. Azazel. Issei, he called, making the brown-haired boy stop as he turned in his direction. Catch, he said, throwing a kind of flask towards the brown-haired boy, who caught it without problems. Azazel. It's called Phoenix Tears, it will help you recover from your wounds in your battle against Gabriel. The bad thing is that they don't heal broken bones or give energy, he informed, raising the jar as a form of gratitude, and Issei left the room. Issei, for his part, once outside proceeded to open the bottle, managing to perceive that its aroma was neutral, that is, it was like water. So without wasting any more time, he proceeded to drink the contents, feeling his body fill with heat while all his wounds healed. After that, Mio made an appearance. Issei. Mio, did you make sure it doesn't end up frozen? He asked, throwing the empty flask. Mio. You're not wrong, we transferred enough magic to you so that doesn't happen. But I didn't stop to think that this would put you in the sights of the leaders, she said, somewhat embarrassed. Issei. It doesn't matter. Likewise, this will be the first and last time I meet with the leaders, I've already gotten involved enough in this. For now, help me survive, he requested, being aware that he couldn't do it alone. Mio. Take it for granted, he declared with firmness in his words. Returning to the meeting room, the leaders witnessed Zenobia Quarta, the Seraph Gabriel, and Volley in his balance breaker state fighting against the magicians. Although fighting was a piece of cake for the most beautiful angel and the White Emperor, the magician's attacks had no effect on them and they were easily eliminated. The only one who had some difficulty was Ria's horse. Azazel, you know Surzich's. I don't distrust your sister, much less her servant. But don't you think you gave them both a great responsibility? He questioned curiously, observing the Satan Lucifer. Surzich's. Castling can only be done with one's own peerage, even if Ria's and I share blood that is impossible. Besides, as a demon king and an adult I cannot leave young people with a promising future unprotected, much less if subjects from the ancient demon faction appear, he said, raising his head, fixing his eyes on a woman holding a staff in the skies. At Surzich's words, Seraphil along with Michael and Azazel turned their eyes to the sky, managing to easily spot the person, whom they recognized immediately. But before they could even process it, an explosion occurred in the place where they were located. A huge, extensive blanket of smoke covered that part of the establishment. At the same time, the figure of that woman was descending from the skies, without looking away from where the explosion occurred, letting out an amused smile. Who would have imagined this? The false Satan Lucifer, the genocidal angel and the aberration of God working together, the woman said mockingly. Meanwhile, at the site of the explosion, the smoke slowly dispersed, revealing a magical barrier created from the three biblical leaders in order not to waste energy and thus avoid freezing in advance. Seraphil. Kateria, she called with a stern expression, looking at the descendant of the original Satan Leviathan. Kateria was a tanned woman, her long brown hair was tied back in a bun, her blue-gray eyes were protected by a pair of glasses. Her clothing consisted of an extremely low-cut dress, having a high slit that left a large part of her breasts and the sides of her hips exposed, revealing that she was not wearing any underwear. Kateria. Good evening, leaders, Seraphil. It's been a while since we last saw each other, she said in a relaxed manner, as if having the three biblical leaders in front of her didn't mean anything. Surzich's. Kateria, it seems that centuries of peace did not work to make you change your ideals, he commented somewhat seriously, observing the first descendant of Leviathan. Kateria. How do you expect me to be at peace when they betrayed me and usurped the throne that belongs to me by inheritance? She questioned angrily, pointing her staff at Surzich's. Surzich's. You, like the other descendants of Satan, wanted to continue a war that we could not win. It was either prevail or extinction, he stated without abandoning his stern attitude. Kateria. The only thing you have achieved with that decision is to give my companions and I enough reasons to finish what our ancestors could not, she declared at the same time that a blue aura of power surrounded her. Realizing that words would not do, Azazel was about to take a step forward to confront Kateria, but, spreading her demon wings, Seraphil spoke up. Seraphil. Surzich's, take care of Sona and her peerage for me, she requested with a neutral expression, proceeding to take flight towards Kateria. Azazel. Interesting, the Blood Princess Seraphil goes into action, he commented with a slight smile, observing Seraphil carefully. Kateria. I was wrong to think you would avoid me, Seraphil, she said with a mocking smile. One Seraphil stood in front of her, who maintained her impassive expression. Seraphil. Kateria, I never intended to take the throne of Leviathan from you. In fact, if you had reconsidered and changed sides by now, I would have given you everything that belongs to you, she commented as her clothes began to shine. Seraphil. But since you still maintain that ideology and threaten to destroy everything, stopping her speech for a moment, Seraphil's attire changed to a somewhat revealing black battle suit with golden details. Seraphil. I will make sure to eliminate you, she declared firmly, and sharpening her gaze at the same time she manifested a water spear in her hand, although said weapon acquired a more reddish tone until it became similar to blood. At the words, expression, and power that Seraphil exuded, Kateria changed her attitude to a more serious one, realizing that the false Leviathan was serious and was going to fight. Meanwhile, with Issei, the aforementioned was breathing somewhat agitatedly while leaning against a wall. Meanwhile, in the hallway there were a total of 30 magicians, who were being eliminated by demons, fallen and angels, in order to ensure that none would be left alive. Issei. Thank goodness Asia and Azazel helped me recover. I wouldn't have gotten far at the rate I was going, he thought, somewhat exhausted while sitting on the floor and leaning his back against the wall. Although he no longer had any wounds, he still had his broken bones, which were not as bothersome as in previous days, but he still could not escape the pain. As if that were not enough, the atmosphere was becoming increasingly heavy, which affected him more than the guards he helped against the wizards. Hey, kid, called a demon approaching Issei, who only limited himself to raising his head. Demon? Do you still have energy? He questioned somewhat severely while standing in front of the brown-haired boy. Issei. I can do this all day, he answered without hiding his tiredness, making the demon who extended his hand smile. Demon. Get up, this isn't over yet, he stated, and without having any other options, Issei shook hands with the demon to get up. After that, the remaining guards and Issei proceeded to advance, stepping over the dead mages. Once outside, the small group was greeted by chaos, hearing explosions everywhere as all sorts of spells were thrown. As if that weren't enough, Seraphol Leviathan and Kateria Leviathan fought from afar, yet the power they both emanated along with the spells they threw at each other caused more destruction than the pitched battle itself. Likewise, regardless of the races they were, demons, angels and fallen ones were divided into groups, some went to attack the magicians, while the rest focused on the creatures present. For his part, Issei preferred to go to the group that rushed against the magicians, unholstering the pistol he carried, which he impregnated with magic to make sure to kill the magicians. Even though the noise in general affected his hearing badly, Issei was still able to hit the target with every shot he fired, focusing more on hitting the head. The small group that was with Issei was surprised by the aim that the brown-haired man possessed. It was an event that they had never seen, and much less that a human could carry out. However, that small advantage that Issei had ended the moment he used the 3 magazines he carried, still without completely wasting his weapon. Issei casually threw the gun towards the face of a magician, who calmly dodged it by moving his head to the side. But before he could summon a magic circle, Issei appeared in front of him with 2 ice daggers, managing to cut his abdomen and finally slash him in the neck. At that, the small group of supernatural beings were not very surprised. In fact, when Issei helped them against the magicians in the building, he demonstrated the same ability. Confidence and coldness, as if he was already used to killing and what that act entailed. They had no doubt that Issei was a warrior in every sense. But back on the battlefield, neither side was giving in, and while the wizards were losing in numbers, more and more continued to appear along with more monsters. And while Michael and Azazel were about to give them a little support to balance the balance, the atmosphere became lighter and more bearable compared to before, which meant that Gasper's power was controlled, therefore, time began to flow normally again. It didn't take long for Irina, Raynor, the Citri and Gremory nobility to head to the battlefield, helping the soldiers of the 3 factions against the magicians and monsters, who lost all support once everything returned to normal. The magic circle from which their allies emerged disappeared completely, and the number of attackers was considerably reduced as the minutes passed, being mostly more monsters than magicians, some of whom took advantage of this and fled. Meanwhile, Seraphol and Kateria were flying not far from each other, looking at each other with serious expressions. On one hand, Seraphol was breathing a little agitated, her clothes suffered little damage as well as her body, which was full of not so severe cuts. The only worrying wound was 2nd-degree burns on her left arm, nothing compared to Kateria. As for Kateria, the aforementioned was breathing heavily, the glasses she once had were destroyed, a trickle of blood was falling from her mouth, her clothing was so battered that her breasts were exposed, while her body had deep wounds, but the one that stood out the most was a hole in her abdomen that she covered with one of her hands. Seraphol. Give up, Kateria, you've lost. If you do, you might get your own place in the underworld in the long run. But for that, you'll have to reveal to us where the rest of the descendants of the Satans are hiding, she said somewhat seriously without letting her guard down, annoying Kateria with her words. Kateria. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that, she questioned angrily, causing Seraphol to close her eyes. Seraphol. I understand, she commented calmly, feeling foolish for wanting to give her enemy a second chance. Kateria, for her part, only looked angrily at Seraphol, and before she could take any action against her, the descendant of Leviathan felt a sharp pain in the front of her body. The reason, Seraphol with a blood sword, stabbed Kateria's torso with a deep diagonal cut. The Satan Leviathan did not blink even when Kateria's blood threatened to fall into her eyes, which did not end up happening. On the other hand, Kateria began to fall on her back, being watched condescendingly by Seraphol. Just when she thought it was all over, she saw Kateria smiling for some reason. Of course, that completely threw Seraphol off balance. Until she came back to her senses when she witnessed Kateria making a jar containing some kind of snake appear. Recognizing such an object, Seraphol desperately pointed her hand in Kateria's direction, but whatever she tried to do, it didn't work, surprising Seraphol, who witnessed how Kateria consumed what was in the flask. After that, a pillar of pure energy originated where Kateria was located, which lasted a few moments. Even so, that was enough for everyone, absolutely everyone, to focus their attention in that direction. Meanwhile, Seraphol looked for Kateria in different directions, not finding any trace of her, until suddenly, a water spear pierced her stomach, causing her to start spitting blood from her mouth. Kateria. Do you have something to say, Seraphol? Asked the amused voice from behind Seraphol, who turned with a surprised expression on her face to look at Kateria. A descendant of the original Satan Leviathan, fully recovered from her injuries, her hair had become more robust and spiky, the iris of her eyes acquired a torn shape like those of a reptile, and the aura that surrounded her was completely different, not only in color, but also in density. At that, Seraphil couldn't help but sharpen her gaze. The Kateria in front of her was completely different from the one a moment ago. If she couldn't see his previous attack, she was sure she wouldn't be able to see the next ones. In short, she had no chance of winning. Kateria, on the other hand, could perfectly read what Seraphil was thinking, thanks to the expression she had, and she couldn't help but rejoice at the advantage she had. Making Seraphil groan in frustration, who was forced to stop the bleeding in her stomach once Kateria made her enchantment disappear. But just when Seraphil gave up, she saw 3 figures pass by her, surprised to see that they were Surzich's, Michael and Azazel, who positioned themselves in front of her. Surzich's. Sona is fine, Seraphil. Come down, my sister's bishop will be able to heal you, he commented without diverting his attention from Kateria, to which, being aware that she could not do anything, Seraphil decided to abide by her friend's words. Seraphil. Good luck to all 3 of you, she wished sincerely as she began to descend. At the same time Seraphil left, Michael and Surzich's proceeded to take off their robes, while on the other hand, Azazel was stretching to get warm. Witnessing all of this, Kateria couldn't help but widen her smile. Kateria. Even if the 3 of them come together, they won't be able to stop me, she declared to the 4 winds in a confident manner. Azazel. Even with the power of office, it is not good to be overconfident, he advised, stretching his arm above his head. Kateria. Shut up, Azazel, you were so weak that you decided to retreat instead of fighting God and the demon kings at the end of the biblical war, she roared furiously, while Azazel only let out a smile. Azazel. That hurt, he commented sarcastically, stopping stretching. That's why I dedicated myself to making this, he explained, opening the top of his trench coat to take out a kind of golden dagger with a purple gem embedded in the tip of the handle. Kateria. Should I be surprised? She asked somewhat mockingly, while Azazel only limited himself to smiling, proceeding to hold the dagger so that the sharp tip was pointing downwards. Azazel. Balance breaker, he said calmly, to the surprise of the only 3 present. A powerful and blinding glow suddenly appeared, spreading across the place. Of course, that caught the attention of those who could see it. But with Vali, the aforementioned kept his attention fixed on the place, completely ignoring the basilisk behind him. Vali. Albion, do you recognize that presence? He asked curiously without looking away from where that glow came from, which was gradually ceasing. Yes. It belongs to one of the 5 dragon kings, Fafnir. I didn't think his soul was still in this world after Siegfried killed him, Albion answered with some surprise, while Vali decided to go back to his own thing. Elsewhere, Takeda was in a safe area of the battlefield. He also stopped to ask the dragon inside him about the presence he felt, which seemed very familiar to him. His name is Fafnir. And although he didn't go out much, the power he was born with was enough for him to be classified as a dragon king. In fact, I heard that if it weren't for his obsession with gold and staying locked up, if he had focused on getting stronger today, there would be 3 celestial dragons, Drake recounted to Takeda's surprise. Who kept his gaze in the direction where he felt the power for a few moments, to later help on the battlefield. Returning to the leaders, Michael and Surzich's looked in surprise at Azazel, who was now wearing a draconic-style armor just like Vali, with the difference that this one had a golden color like gold, the gems were purple, and left his 12 fallen angel wings visible, which were as dark as a starless night. Azazel. How about now? I may not be able to match up to God or Lucifer back then, and I can't match up to you now either. But with this wonder and those 2, you can rest assured that you will lose, he said with confidence in his words. Michael. You are speaking to us with great confidence, Azazel, he commented in a neutral tone of voice, releasing a dense golden aura. Surzich's. And we have not even signed the peace treaty, he said, pulling the sleeves of his shirt back while an intense red aura covered him. Azazel. Yes, I'm going to die, unless it's among companions or friends, he joked, and despite being protected by the armor, Michael and Surzich's suspected that he was smiling. Surzich's. Sigh, hearing you say that after such motivating words is discouraging, he commented, somewhat discouraged to the point of lowering his head. Michael. True. Although it's not bad that my brother opens up in his final moments, he said with a slight smile. A strange conversation began to emerge between the 3 biblical leaders. Kateria had a blank expression watching as the 3 men in front of her ignored her as if nothing had happened. She possessed the power of office, a being that was basically a fragment of power from the very concept of infinity, an entity that goes beyond any comprehension including the divine. She was being reduced to a simple dispute between men who talked about meaningless things and changed the subject every second. So fed up, Kateria expelled her power to get the attention of the leaders. Kateria. Stop fighting, and she was forced to stop speaking due to the sudden disappearance of the leaders. By the time she realized it, she had Azazel poised to attack her on her right flank with a massive spear of light, Surzich's on her left flank, expelling his power of destruction, and Michael above her holding a halberd and a shield of light. The leader of the angels and the leader of the demons had cold expressions, and although she was unable to see him directly, Kateria suspected that Azazel must have a serious expression as well. Returning to the battlefield, Raynor found herself flying, keeping her distance from a huge cyclops that was holding a huge piece of tree as if it were some kind of club. The fallen angel was frustrated to see how her attacks did nothing to the one-eyed monster, her spears unable to pierce it. However, as she was concentrating on the monster, she ended up caught in the crossfire, and while she was able to dodge most of the spells, she ended up receiving one that injured 2 of her 4 wings, completely losing her balance and falling crashing to the ground. More in pain from the damage to her wings than from the fall, Raynor endured the pain while trying to get up from the ground. Until a huge shadow covered her completely, feeling her instincts warn her of enormous danger. Raising her head in fear, Raynor witnessed the cyclops she was fighting standing in front of her, proceeding to lift a huge piece of tree ready to end her life. Doubting that anyone would come to rescue her, Raynor accepted her fate, knowing that she could do nothing to prevent it. However, a figure quickly passed by her to the point that she shook her hair forward. Raynor immediately realized that it was Issei, who, with 2 ice daggers, headed towards the cyclops, passing under him between his legs, getting his attention. But before the monster could do anything, with his daggers, Issei cut the tendon of the cyclops' right leg, causing it to kneel, and taking advantage of the opportunity, Issei proceeded to climb up the monster's back, using his daggers to make it easier, stabbing it in the back. Hanging from the nape of the cyclops' neck, Isay saw how the monster stretched out its huge hand in his direction about to grab him, but keeping calm, the brown-haired man with one of his daggers proceeded to bury it in the monster's eye. Causing him to scream in pain as huge torrents of blood escaped from that area, it didn't take long for the giant to fall face up, raising a huge amount of dust. Meanwhile, Raynor was surprised by what happened, witnessing how Issei, being on the cyclops' back, stood up as if nothing had happened with a stern expression. "Issei, are you okay?" he asked with a serious tone, causing Raynor to sit up. "Raynor? Why yes I am," she answered, somewhat surprised, while Issei nodded. Returning to the group of demons, angels and fallen, Issei continued to advance under the impressed gaze of Raynor, who could not believe what happened. After that, minutes and minutes went by, so that the battle finally ended, with the biblical factions as the winning side, who, while happy for the victory and for living one more day, that was not the case for the soldiers who died in battle, either because they were attacked by the magicians or were unexpectedly killed by the monsters. As for the attackers, they were reduced to nothing, not a single magician or monster was left alive, even though people like Sona, Riaz, Irina and Takeda refused to kill them as they were unable to do so, they could barely even attack them. Contrary to Issei, who was bathed in blood while holding the eye of a cyclops in his right hand, having in the rear the said monster that was on the ground face down forming a large pool of blood. Takeda was impressed by his brother's fighting ability, he was completely the opposite of him, he didn't hesitate, and he didn't pity him either, it was the same as how he acted at Kuo Academy a few days ago. As for Issei, he threw the cyclops eye to the ground as if it were nothing, in order to focus on the leader's fight, being able to know what was happening. Well, that was due to his enhanced senses, normally he wouldn't notice what was happening from miles away. The reason why he could at least get an idea of what was going on was thanks to the loud bangs that the leaders themselves were causing. Being able to hear that, bangs because he couldn't perceive anything else other than the air moving violently. Although Issei's concentration was affected when he felt something make contact with his face, immediately turning his face towards the person responsible for it, the Seraph Gabriel, who was wiping away the blood from his face with a white handkerchief. "Gabriel, you better wash the blood off. It won't be long before it starts to smell bad," he said with some confidence, giving his handkerchief to Issei. "Issei. Thanks I guess," he commented, somewhat surprised by the Seraph's action. "Issei. Do you think they'll win? The person they're fighting to become strong with?" he asked curiously as he wiped his face. "Gabriel. Kateria is strong, yes, even more so now that she has acquired the power of office. But she has 3 disadvantages. First, she is alone. Second, although she has fully recovered, both her mind and body are still processing the damage that Seraphol caused her. And third, she does not fully control that power," he said confidently, watching the battle with his arms crossed. "Issei. How do you know that he doesn't control his power yet?" he asked, bewildered and interested at the same time. "Gabriel. She wastes magic power foolishly. It is logical to think that if you have the power of infinity, you have unlimited energy, but it is not like that. Any magic or power you have will always have a limit, whether you are mortal or god. Besides, Surziches, Azazel and my brother do not stop attacking her, preventing her from thinking about something," she answered calmly, closing her eyes, being observed by a surprised Issei, until thanks to his hearing, he could hear something unrelated to the battle. Turning his head in that direction, Issei was able to hear something in the distance ascending towards the skies, although due to his inability, he did not know who it was. On the other hand, Gabriel, faced with the young human's action, fixed his gaze in the same direction, seeing how the White Emperor, Vali, was flying towards the sky with the help of the wings of his sacred gear. Gabriel. What is he thinking of doing? If he wanted to fight Kateria, he had more than one opportunity to do so before. Why now? He thought with a stern expression, trying to process the White Emperor's action. Returning to the battle, Michael and Azazel charged together against Kateria. Meanwhile, Surziches was in the distance with spheres of destruction on his back, giving support from a distance. Thanks to the abilities that both brothers had to handle the light element, the leader of the demons was aware that those two would do more damage than with his inherited power. On the other hand, Kateria was against the wall. Azazel and Michael had such synchronization that it seemed like they had never separated. When one was about to attack, the other would attack. When they had to defend themselves, one would block, while the other would return the attack. And while there might be a pattern, just as they acted together they could immediately fight individually. As if that weren't enough, Surziches was attentive to Kateria's movements, throwing ultra-fast spheres of destruction that the descendant of Leviathan was unable to avoid and was forced to continue the exchange of attacks with both brothers. Silently, Michael threw himself at Kateria, pushing her a couple of meters away with his shield of light, to which Azazel decided to take advantage of the opportunity to cause a diagonal cut to Kateria. Keeping their distance, Azazel along with Michael witnessed how Kateria immediately recovered from her wound, something that happened previously with the damage they caused her, which is why they were not so surprised. But they weren't that alarmed either, although they kept their guard up to stay out of the way. Kateria was breathing heavily and wasn't as energetic as before. The leaders and even Kateria herself were aware of the exhaustion both magically and mentally and physically. Her battle against Seraphil affected her, but what affected her the most was having consumed Office's power, which she didn't fully control. Even though she was aware that she was going to be defeated, Kateria stood firm on the idea of taking one of the leaders with her into the void, proceeding to expel all the power she still had stored away. Kateria was surrounded by a purple aura, which was capable of generating strong gusts of wind in the presence of the three biblical leaders who had stern expressions. Meanwhile, Kateria continued to expel her power at the same time that some kind of energy-based hands appeared on her back, which she sent towards her three enemies. At that, Surziches reacted quickly by conjuring a huge sphere of destruction, throwing it towards the magic limbs. Upon making contact, a loud bang occurred in the place. Surziches, Michael and Azazel saw the smoke screen in the middle, until they were surprised to see more hands come out of the smoke. With the feeling that something bad was going to happen if they were reached, the three quickly began to take distance, separating each other. However, more and more hands began to appear. Destroying them was no longer an option, and it was better to retreat. Until Azazel increased his speed, losing his energy hands, and then he quickly positioned himself in front of Kateria several meters away, an action that was noticed by Michael and Surziches. Michael? Azazel, what are you going to do? He questioned, looking worried as he watched his brother take position to throw his spear of light. At the action of the governor of the fallen angels, the hands that were chasing Michael and Surziches stopped spontaneously and then headed towards Azazel. Speaking of the aforementioned, he focused his gaze on a smiling Kateria because the energy hands were almost close to reaching him. But without even caring about that, Azazel threw his spear, managing to hit Kateria's chest, piercing through her. Even so, that didn't erase the smile from the descendant of Leviathan as she witnessed how, despite Azazel dodging most of his energy hands, some were able to reach his left arm. Kateria. Die with me, Azazel, she said happily, raising two fingers on one hand. Sooner than later, the energy limbs began to glow brightly, of course alarming Surziches and Michael in the distance, while Kateria couldn't help but rejoice. But just when they gave up on Azazel, the aforementioned made a spear of light appear, with which he cut off his left arm without blinking, leaving Kateria shocked. Azazel. Don't take it the wrong way, but I'm already committed to my research, he commented calmly, while Kateria continued without coming out of her stupor. A loud explosion occurred at the scene. Luckily, no one was affected by it. Those on land noticed that the fight ended with the victory of the leaders, which made many more than happy. There were even those who celebrated, like in the case of an already healed Seraphil in the middle of the battlefield. Meanwhile, Azazel lost that golden armor, although after that event, the only thing that appeared in front of him was a round purple gem instead of the entire dagger. Azazel. It seems there are still things I need to improve, he commented to nothing, proceeding to store the orb in a pocket dimension. Michael? Are you okay, Azazel? He asked, approaching his brother, as did Surziches. Azazel? Yes, I can replace my arm with a prosthesis, he answered neutrally, while stopping the bleeding on his severed limb with a magic circle. Surziches? Are you sure you're okay? You seem a bit empty, he asked curiously, causing Michael to fix his eyes on Azazel, who let out a sigh. Azazel? I usually speak my mind and am honest about it, but gosh, Kateria was definitely my type, too bad she was crazy, he commented in a disappointed manner, being looked at stoically by Michael and Surziches. Azazel. What? Is it wrong for me to want to feel the warmth of a woman? He asked reproachfully without receiving any answer. However, the leaders opened their eyes slightly as they noticed a presence approaching at great speed, but before they could react, their forces began to shrink considerably. Divide, 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 divide. Albion's voice was heard getting closer and closer, being responsible for stealing the power of the leaders. Azazel, on the other hand, upon hearing Albion's voice behind him, quickly turned around, although in doing so, he received a blow to the chest that was strong enough to push him until he crashed onto solid ground, causing a loud bang that disoriented more than one person. Although from all the dust raised, Azazel came out of there as if nothing had happened, only having some scratches and a little dirt either on his body or on his clothes, limiting himself only to raising his head to see Volley. Azazel. Good hit, Volley. You applied well what I taught you, he said calmly, watching Volley descend from the skies. At the same time, Michael and Surziches arrived on solid ground, positioning themselves at his side. Volley. Don't be offended, Azazel. But being on this side is more fun, he said calmly, to which Azazel let out a slight smile. Azazel. Before you do anything, would you help me confirm a doubt I have? He asked, disconcerting those who heard him. Volley. Tell me, he commented with some interest, fixing the yellow eyes of his armor on Azazel. Azazel. Isay, my vice president discovered about a terrorist organization that is gathering dangerous elements that could be a threat to the factions. The Chaos Brigade calls themselves, he said without erasing his smile. On the other hand, most of those present, if not all, were surprised to hear that. Surziches. The Chaos Brigade, he commented surprised, putting on a frustrated face. Michael. I know it's a stretch to say it, but Office may be their leader. Kateria had a fragment of her power, and she's one of the beings who can control those elements, he said somewhat unsurely, holding a hand under his chin. Volley. It's all true. I have joined forces with Office, but unlike her I have no interest in the world or its plans for domination. The people who joined us simply did so because they wanted to make use of our strength, he explained calmly, as if he had everything under control. Azazel. I see, and I thought that Kateria and you were working together to get the throne, he commented, slightly disconcerting everyone present. Seraphol. Throne. What do you mean by that? She questioned in dismay a few meters away from where the conversation was taking place. Azazel. Come on, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone, Volley Lucifer? He questioned with a slight smile, shocking many with such a revelation, especially when 4 pairs of demon wings emerged from Volley's back. Surziches. Without a doubt, he is the bearer of the strongest divine dividing of the past, present and future, he stated with a serious expression on his face, understanding how his power was so easily reduced by the White Emperor. Volley. I am Volley Lucifer, direct descendant of the original Lucifer. Product of the mixed relationship between a pure-blooded demon and a human, he revealed, while some still couldn't get over their stupor. Azazel. You're half demon and half human, that explains how you can possess the divine dividing. Although it's still a coincidence, he commented calmly, hearing a snort from Volley. Volley. The word miracle defines me best, he stated with a certain arrogance, while not far from where they were, Issei heard Volley's words perfectly. Issei. Then turn water into wine, imbecile, he commented somewhat annoyed, being looked at severely by Gabriel who was at his side. Gabriel. This is no time for jokes, he said seriously, while Issei made a face of disgust. Issei. If that one over there wants to compare himself to Jesus, at least he should turn water into wine. Or walk on water without using magic, let's see how miraculous it is, he commented, turning his attention forward, feeling a presence in front of him. Reaching out his hand, Issei felt something cold and hard like metal, beginning to touch different areas to discover what it was. On the other hand, many of those present were surprised that the White Emperor was in front of Issei, allowing him to touch him as if it were nothing. Although everything went too far until Issei brought his hand to what would be the genital area, touching it more than twice to raise his head. Issei. Daddy? He asked, being grabbed by the sweater by Volley, who quickly extended his free hand towards Gabriel. At that, the seraph frustratedly remained in place. On the other hand, Volley began to ascend towards the heavens, holding Issei, who tried to free himself, failing in the process under the gaze of everyone present. Volley. Even if you try to disguise it, it's useless. I've already realized the relationship you both have, he said calmly, surprising many with his words, but the rest knew what he was talking about. Volley. Will you come to rescue your brother, Takeda Haidu? He questioned to the surprise of many, who turned to see Takeda to see if what Volley was saying was true, finding that the Red Emperor seemed to be frustrated and angry. Takeda. Let him go, he has nothing to do with this, he shouted in anger, being completely ignored by Volley. Volley. Though on second thought, there's no point in you doing that. Compared to me, you're just a reincarnated devil who was lucky enough to be born with a boosted gear. The distance between us is as wide as the earth and the sky, no maybe it's even greater than that, he said in a stern tone to the point that he seemed to be disappointed. Nikita. You're supposed to give me time, he roared angrily, not even caring about the White Emperor's previous words. Vali. And I wasn't lying, although I would like to know how strong you would become with the idea of avenging your brother, he commented, forming a sphere of energy in his free hand and bringing it closer to Issei's face. Nikita. I won't allow it, he exclaimed firmly, being surrounded by an orange aura of power similar to fire. Vali. Yes, dude, he commented, satisfied, watching Nikita until he heard a strange sound next to him. Turning his head, Vali found Issei cutting the part of the sweater he was holding with an ice knife, and before he could do anything, the young human finished cutting that part and began to fall at the same time as he showed Vali his middle finger along with a smile. However, a pillar of energy caused Vali to divert his attention towards Nikita, witnessing how his rival, whom he was destined to fight to the death, was responsible for expelling all that power. Balance breaker. Welsh dragon overboosted drag uttered from the glove on Nikita's right hand. On the part of the eldest of the Haidu brothers, he was enveloped in energy, and when that energy dissipated, it revealed Nikita being covered in a deep red draconic armor with green gems embedded in it. Vali. Look at that, Albion. Just by making him angry, his power will increase in seconds, he said, somewhat fascinated and excited. Sacred gears are capable of taking the wearer's feelings and converting them into strength. I even dare say that boy surpasses you in terms of affinity, Albion calmly stated while inside the armor. Vali couldn't help but smile. Nikita. You will pay for what you said, he shouted in anger, quickly rushing towards Vali. Once face to face, Nikita proceeded to launch an attack, managing to land a blow on Vali's helmet, being able to crack it, and inside the armor, Vali spat out blood, which he didn't care about. Instead, he just let out a pleased smile. Nikita was about to give a second attack, which Vali easily evaded by counterattacking with a blow to his rival's helmet, which had no effect, to which Nikita was about to return the blow, until Vali gave one more, this time being stronger than the previous one. That same pattern was repeated over and over again. Nikita attacked in a crude and predictable manner due to anger, which worked to Vali's advantage as he evaded the blows with ease and counterattacked effectively. However, at one point, Nikita was about to deliver a blow that threatened to land on his opponent's chest, to which Vali was more than prepared to dodge, confident that nothing bad would happen, until a glow began to emanate from Nikita's own fist. As the light faded, Vali realized that it was the sharp blade of a sword, feeling his instincts warn him of great danger just by looking at it. Throwing his body back in order to evade the attack, although he was able to do so, Vali could see a cut on the chest of his armor, a kind of black smoke coming out from that area. Vali. I didn't think the angels would give you the sacred dragon-slaying sword, Ascalon, he commented, slightly surprised, observing the sword blade in his rival's fist. Nikita. You're going to get the next one full on, he warned with certainty in his words, making the leaf disappear. Vali. Let's see if you can do it, he said defiantly, lunging at his rival. While both wielders fought at an enormous speed, leaving behind beams of red and blue lights respectively, Issei tried to carefully follow the movements of the two, even having spirits to guide him in case it made things easier. Back to the fight, Vali kept attacking Nikita, who was defending himself as much as possible, although his armor had a lot of cracks in different areas. On the other hand, Vali was realizing that his rival's power was decreasing, so to give him a boost, he proceeded to cast a spell that was aimed at the Grimoire and Citri peerages. Of course, this worried Nikita, who realized that he was unable to get there to save them. Instead, the leaders stood in the way, forming a magical barrier that protected them all without any problems. Relieved by that but also angry, Nikita lunged at Vali, throwing fast and strong punches that generated slight gusts of air. At that, Vali couldn't help but get happy, although that emotion increased when he saw Issei without any kind of protection. Dodging Nikita's way, Vali then cast a spell towards Issei, which Nikita noticed. The Red Emperor quickly looked towards where Vali cast his spell, witnessing it heading towards his brother. And although Issei was able to keep a certain distance, the explosion that originated was able to reach him, and he was sent flying a couple of meters, causing Nikita to become completely enraged, expelling a lot of energy to the point that an orange aura surrounded him. Following that, he headed towards Vali, reaching him in a matter of seconds. Vali. For a mere human, your brother is very resilient, he commented excitedly, blocking Nikita's attacks, which cracked his armor, which he repaired almost instantly. Nikita. Don't bring him into this, not him, not my friends, he roared in anger without ceasing his attacks at any time. Vali. Why do you care so much about him? I could tell that you two don't have a good relationship, he said with some confusion, feeling how his rival's attacks were slowly losing strength and speed. Vali. Why is he called Murdoch instead of Haidu? What happened between you two? he asked curiously, stopping Takeda's attacks more easily. Takeda. That he whispered, catching Volley's attention as Takeda once again expelled more power. Takeda. It's none of your business, he declared in a loud angry shout, hitting Volley's face. Volley. Albion, how does your power decrease and grow again? He asked, surprised at the surprise attack he received. You've made him more than angry enough, Volley. Furthermore, with all the power he expels, he's only caused the energy in the air to be absorbed instead of his own divine dividing is at its limit. Even if I release it, you'll only have a couple of uses, Albion stated calmly, leaving Volley speechless. Volley. This is the least I expected from my rival, he said enthusiastically, cutting the connection with his dragon. Charging towards Volley, letting out a war cry in the process, Takeda pretended to want to hit him, instead proceeding to hold him down by stretching his arms out to reach the divine dividing's wings. Completely disconcerting Volley, the aforementioned began to hear Drake's voice repeating boost, which was transferred to the wings. Volley. He noticed that I'm at my limit. It'll only make me overload, he thought in surprise, trying to hit his rival in the abdomen to free himself. But that didn't stop Takeda, who continued to transfer more and more power to the point that Volley surpassed his limit, having no choice but to release the excessive energy, being unable to absorb it until he expelled a considerable amount. So taking advantage of that, Takeda proceeded to grab Volley behind the neck in order to imprison him. Once that was done, he proceeded to focus the power of Ascalon in his right fist, being able to land such a blow with force on Volley's chest. Because of that, Volley immediately lost his armor, beginning to plummet until he crashed onto solid ground, raising a huge amount of dust. On the other side, Takeda proceeded to descend from the sky, and once his feet made contact with the surface, he also lost his armor. Falling to his knees on one leg, Takeda was breathing heavily, blood was coming out of his mouth, and pain was spreading throughout his body. On the other side, a figure was seen in the raised dust. It was a Volley covered in dirt and scrapes, holding his chest in pain as blood escaped from his mouth. Volley. Not bad, you were able to destroy my entire armor. But it seems you've reached your limit, he commented with a slight smile, looking at a Takeda who had a serious expression. Volley. I guess it must be, or he was forced to stop speaking when he received a blow to the face that made him take a few steps back. The one responsible was none other than Issei, who was somewhat exhausted and injured, possibly due to the spell he received from Volley earlier. Having witnessed that event in surprise, Takeda did not expect his brother to do such an action. Issei. Get ready because I still plan to return that attack, bastard, he said angrily, receiving a simple smile from Volley. The blue glow completely covered the White Emperor, dissipating after a few seconds, revealing Volley again in his armor, to which Issei sharpened his gaze at the same time that Takeda was impressed by that. Takeda. He's able to enter balance breaker again, he commented in surprise as Volley began to advance slowly. Volley. Once you understand how it works, it's not hard to activate it a second, third, and even a fourth time. That's on my end though, I don't know about yours, I just know that balance breaker you have isn't even a fraction of the true power the dragon has inside, he explained calmly to divert his attention towards Issei. Volley. On the other hand, you are so insignificant that I didn't notice you approaching. I don't have much to say to you, he said with a certain disdain in his voice, to which Issei raised his right hand in the shape of a fist. Issei. The only thing you'll feel is my fist against your face again, he stated firmly in his tone, causing Volley to let out a small laugh. Volley. As if you were capable of scratching my armor, he commented somewhat arrogantly, pointing at the helmet surrounding his head with his thumb. Issei. I'll make sure to do more than that, he declared with confidence in his tone, lowering his fist, but not his guard. But without anyone being able to see them, several light and dark spirits appeared on the scene. At the same time, Mio and Ryu were at Issei's sides ready to help him in this battle. Chapter 4. Favor. Author narrates. Attacking Volley relentlessly, Issei tried to at least touch the armor of Lucifer's descendant, who easily dodged Issei's punches and kicks, leaving the aforementioned to only hit the air. Since they had been doing that for a while now, no one was surprised that Volley was playing with Issei, who failed to land a hit in Volley's case by dodging it. However, when the attack passed by the White Emperor, he felt something like a blow that made him turn his head. Volley immediately thought that someone had joined the fight, but upon looking around, there was no one nearby. The only one was Takeda, but the Red Emperor was still trying to catch his breath after having used an enormous amount of power previously. On the other hand, the leaders were in the distance protecting those who could not defend themselves from Volley's attacks. Returning to the fight, Issei continued throwing punches left and right, having all of Volley's attention, who at one point, while evading a kick, felt an attack connecting in his stomach. That caused Volley to lose all patience and try to attack Issei, but before he could do so, he was overwhelmed by a ton of attacks from all directions. The worst thing was that there was no one, it was as if he was being attacked by invisible and imperceptible people. On the other hand, Issei decided to take advantage of the gap that the spirits opened for him in order to connect a strong blow to Volley's helmet, being able to crack it and make the White Emperor take a few steps back. Issei. How about now? He questioned with a smile, and although he had to admit that the spirits did most of the work, he had to maintain the attitude he showed previously. Although he was tired and sore from the spell he received from Volley earlier, and his right hand was worse than before, he couldn't help but rejoice at having been able to crack his helmet, remembering that the White Emperor had hinted that he was incapable of even scratching him. Meanwhile, those who witnessed the fight were impressed by what Issei had achieved. Even the most veteran would dare to say that he was the first human being to be able to crack the balance breaker of a Longinus wielder. Returning to the scene of the fight, Volley stood up and stretched his left hand to the part where his protection had cracked. Volley. It seems I underestimated you more than necessary, human, he commented with a certain severity in his tone while immediately repairing his helmet. Issei. I'm still not satisfied, you know. He expressed, rushing towards Volley along with several spirits. Once face to face, Issei threw an attack ready to hit Volley in the chest, which he dodged by moving aside while he was about to counterattack. But by moving his head aside, Issei was able to dodge it without problems, while the spirit was in charge of giving a strong blow to Volley's helmet, being able to disorient him, so that Issei could deliver a second blow this time with his left hand. Issei. Damn, it hurts a lot more than Kakebiel's skin. Plus, I'm starting to get tired, he thought with some annoyance, both because of the pain and because he was reaching his limit. Still, Issei did not give up, and together with the spirits they kept the White Emperor cornered, who only limited himself to defending himself, since when he tried to attack Issei, his blows were deflected long before he could land them. Volley. What's going on? What kind of sacred Jia could this be? He questioned himself while receiving attacks from all directions. Volley, I've already expelled enough energy, I'm going to try something, Albion communicated, getting his bearer to return to the real world to witness what he was going to do. Divide, 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 Albion pronounced through the shiny wings of the divine dividing. It didn't take long for the forces of the spirits and Issei to be divided and absorbed by Volley, who upon noticing that the attacks had decreased, quickly continued using that same ability. Getting to the point where he overloaded again, not as much as before, but enough that Albion had to expel the excess energy. Still, that didn't stop Volley from taking advantage of the opportunity he had, proceeding to grab Issei by the head and drag him across the ground. After that, Volley lifted him up and began to brutally hit him in different parts of his body. Once he was satisfied, he threw Issei to the ground as if he were a rag doll. For his part, Issei only fell to the ground face down with blood escaping from his mouth, looking somewhat disoriented. Having witnessed the massacre that Issei received, some only limited themselves to lowering their gaze in shame, others such as Riaz, Sona, Asia and even Ruruko, tightly clenched their hands because of the helplessness they felt at being unable to help. As for the leaders and their seconds in command, they could only afford to stay in their places to defend those around them in case of an attack from Volley, as Azazel had warned them that he had not yet used much of his power and that he possessed an even more powerful and dangerous technique than just splitting and absorbing his opponent's energy. However, everyone witnessed how Issei slowly got up, trembling slightly in the process, until he was fully standing, proceeding to take a somewhat clumsy battle pose with too many openings. Issei. It's not over yet, not yet, he said in a weak, sore and exhausted tone, holding his hands at chest level. What did he want to achieve? What did he want to prove? Was he really so hell-bent on wanting to hit the White Emperor? The vast majority of those present questioned Issei's action, unable to decide if he was a brave idiot or a stubborn idiot. On the other hand, Volley had not taken his attention off Issei at any time, so he was somewhat bewildered and curious to witness how the young human in front of him stood up after having received a bad beating. Volley. Whether you noticed or not, it doesn't matter, I'll let you know anyway, he commented as the yellow eyes on his armor glowed. Volley. You can't beat me no matter what you do, you won't be able to do it, he declared confidently to the four winds. Volley. It will only take 2 hits to finish this, he said, raising his right fist. On the other hand, Issei let out a slight smile. Issei. Defeat you? When did I say that? He asked without erasing his smile, completely disconcerting Volley. But that confusion turned to surprise when he felt his instincts warning him about a danger in his rear, and without wasting time, Volley quickly stepped back while Takeda in his normal state slashed through the air with Ascalon. Still, a blood stain could be seen on the tip of the sword. On the other hand, Volley, despite having dodged the attack, ended up receiving a slight cut on his left side, where a kind of black smoke was escaping. Takeda. Issei, are you okay? He asked worriedly while looking at his brother. Issei. I'm Jewel, he replied weakly and sarcastically, making the okay gesture with his right hand. Takeda. Drake, can I activate balance breaker? He questioned, turning his gaze towards Volley, who stood a few meters away. While you have completely recovered energy out of nowhere, activating it will cause you to suffer great wear and tear that you will not be able to continue fighting once the armor is gone. And not only that, your body will also suffer damage, Drake answered with confidence in his words. Nikita. It's the same as before, he said frustratedly under his breath, proceeding to expel energy at the same time as a glow escaped from the green gem. Balance breaker. Welsh dragon overboosted, Drake uttered from the glove that covered Nikita's entire forearm. As for the aforementioned itself, it was covered by an aura of energy, being able to expel slight gales that were capable of shaking Issei's hair and clothes, who watched with a sharp expression. Issei. Mio, how much energy did you transfer to Nikita? He asked somewhat curiously as the spirit appeared next to him. Mio. Enough for him to stay standing and fight. But the duration of his balance breaker depends more on his body than anything else, she answered, making Issei somewhat thoughtful. Issei. Help Nikita, we must finish off that imbecile as soon as possible, he said, receiving a nod from Mio. Realizing that he couldn't do anything more than a spectator, Issei decided to sit on the ground out of both exhaustion and pain. On the other hand, Nikita rushed at Vali while hiding Ascalon, causing the White Emperor to go on the defensive in case he received a cut or a blow, charged with the energy of the dragon-slaying sword. Once both Longinus bearers were close, they began to exchange blows, which continued in the air, leaving beams of red and blue lights in their wake. And shortly after the fight began, the voices of both dragons could be heard using their respective powers. However, both Drake and Albion were restraining themselves, the former to make balance breaker last longer and not overload his host's body. Albion, for his part, was also trying to avoid reaching the limit, expelling more energy than absorbing it, although, for some reason, his ability did not seem to be affecting his lifelong opponent. Even Vali noticed this, having no choice but to go on the offensive, being able to land a blow to Nikita's helmet, followed by a kick to the chest, pushing Nikita a few meters. Still, the Red Emperor was able to get back up, but before he could do anything, Vali charged at him, starting to attack him, leaving him with no choice but to defend himself. Likewise, Vali was able to break through Nikita's defense with relative ease, causing the chestnut's armor to begin to crack in different areas. Taking advantage of the opportunity he had, Vali gave a final blow to Nikita's helmet, being able to destroy it and reach his rival's face, something that worried the Gremory nobility and Riaz herself, while the rest only watched with severe expressions what happened. However, by tightly gripping Vali's attacking arm, Nikita managed to imprison a surprised Vali, who noticed how his opponent focused Ascalon's energy into his free fist. Boost, 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 Drake uttered from the gem located on the armor's chest. Somewhat alarmed, Vali attempted to kick Nikita in the face, however, despite feeling that he had made contact with something, that something was not Nikita's face. Letting out a scream, Nikita proceeded to throw his punch that was aimed at Vali's face, leaving no escape for the descendant of Lucifer. And just like that, Nikita was able to land his attack, destroying Vali's helmet and directly hitting the White Emperor, whose eyes were wide open at what had happened. It wasn't long before Vali lost his armor, though Nikita eventually lost his as well, and unable to stop them, both dragon wielders began to plummet. By the time they reached land, they caused a slight rumble and raised a cloud of dust, prompting the spectators to quickly spread their wings to head in their direction. But upon witnessing a magic circle forming near where Nikita and Vali were located, they decided to stay put in case they were dealing with dangerous enemies. Meanwhile, in the place where that transportation spell appeared, a person emerged. It was a young woman with long black hair with parted bangs, and having two matching cat ears on top of her head. Her eyes were golden hazel color with pupils like those of a feline. Her attire consisted of a black kimono with a yellow sash and a set of gold eye sockets, and an ornately detailed headband. The inside of the kimono was red and was open at the shoulders, revealing her large breasts. Wow, I never expected to see you on the ground, Vali, the girl said with amusement, getting an annoyed look from the aforementioned man. Vali. Instead of talking, you should help me, Kuroka, he said, somewhat annoyed, trying to hide the pain he felt. Kuroka. What a party pooper, she commented disappointedly, approaching her partner. Nikita. What do you think you're doing? He questioned sternly as he watched Kuroka help Vali get up. Vali. I will go recover, but rest assured that for our next fight, I will be stronger than now, he stated firmly in his tone, while a magic circle appeared behind them. Kuroka. See you, she said goodbye with a slight smile, thus diverting her gaze to where the Gremory nobility was, but more specifically, to a short albino girl Shirin, she called without erasing her smile. After that, Kuroka and Vali headed towards the magic circle, disappearing almost immediately. On the other side, Nikita remained in his place lying on his back. All the members of the Gremory nobility quickly headed towards Nikita. On the other side, witnessing that in their places, the leaders accompanied by Seraphel and Gabriel saw the destruction in their surroundings. Surziches. The Chaos Brigade. Not only do they have office, but now they also have the White Emperor. I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of the descendants of the Satans are also united with that organization, he said somewhat sternly, clenching his hands tightly under the gaze of Seraphil and Gabriel. Azazel. Things will definitely be complicated from now on. Especially if we go on our own, he commented, drawing the attention of those who heard him. Michael. Are you implying forming an alliance? He asked curiously with a raised eyebrow, making his brother smile. Azazel. Of course. Unless you've gotten bored of continuing in this world, he answered in a carefree manner. Following his words, the two archangels and the two demon kings looked at each other shrewdly, after which they fixed their eyes on a smiling Azazel, as if they had already made a decision. In Azazel's luxurious apartment, 3 magic circles appeared, from which Issei and Rainer emerged, although the latter helped the brunette stay standing, because he was still injured after the beating Vali gave him. As for the remaining transportation spell, an Azazel with a slight satisfied smile emerged as he stretched his neck back and forth. Azazel. It certainly ended better than expected, he expressed satisfied, heading towards the minibar. Azazel. Vali is gone, but the alliance with the angels and demons is more important, he commented calmly, observing the large catalogue of liquors he had, undecided which one to choose for the occasion. At the same time that the governor of the fallen was carefully thinking about what to drink, Issei slowly regained consciousness under Rainer's presence. Issei. Leave me, I'll take care of the rest, he said, separating himself from the fallen angel, who kept her arms outstretched in case Issei collapsed. Rainer. Are you sure? She questioned doubtfully as she saw how the brunette was staggering, to the point of leaning against the wall to stay standing. Issei. Yes, he answered, noticing how exhausted he was, trying to catch as much breath as possible. Azazel. Don't you want some whiskey to ease the pain? He asked, pouring a brand-name whiskey called Blue Label into a short glass. Issei. Another day, I just want to get home, he answered weakly at the same time that Azazel finished pouring the liquor into his glass. Azazel. As you wish, he said calmly, snapping his fingers, making a magic circle appear under Issei's feet, who, after a while, disappeared from the room. Azazel. Damn, I forgot to give him a phoenix tear that I had saved, he commented with some surprise upon remembering that detail, although he only proceeded to shrug his shoulders. Azazel. It will be okay, he is a strong boy, he stated in a carefree manner, being observed by a blank expression by Rainer. Appearing at his house, it didn't take long for Issei to collapse face down, even so, being on the ground he proceeded to roll over on his back, breathing with some difficulty. At that, Mio was quick to make an appearance along with several luminous spirits to lift him off the ground and lay him down on the living room sofa. Mio. Send a message to Dr. Chisato, he ordered, to which a spirit did not hesitate to go look for Issei's cell phone. Mio. Help is on the way, Issei. Just hold on, she stated confidently in her words to a completely disoriented Issei. Taking a shower, Issei sat with his back against the wall, letting the hot water run over his completely damaged body and taking away the blood, decorating the white ceramic floor in red. After the shower, Issei came out of the bathroom wearing only boxers, revealing huge bruises all over his upper body, overshadowing the rest of the wounds he had on his body. What the hell happened to you? Did a truck hit you? Questioned the incredulous voice of a woman in the middle of the room. Issei. Almost 3 cars, Miss Hasegawa, he answered in pain, walking somewhat limpingly towards the woman. Hisato Hasegawa, a young woman with long brown hair, her eyes were an emerald green color. Her clothing consisted of a white robe, a green sweater underneath, a black skirt and long stockings of the same color. Hisato was Stan's neighbor and worked as a doctor at Kuo Central Hospital. In fact, she was the one responsible for having treated Issei on the 2 occasions in which he ended up at Stan's house. Who, despite having no problems helping Issei, ran several risks, including being recognized as an accomplice either by the police or those mobsters criminals whom Issei are in more than one business, in addition to having murdered possible relatives of them. So as not to involve Stan further, Chisato offered to go to Issei's house whenever he would call her on a cell phone unrelated to her personal life, having no problem helping Issei. Although she would only do it when she had free days or time to help him, that's not counting a good pay, although that was the least that could matter to Issei. Right now, Issei was sitting in a chair in silence. On the other side, Chisato, with a stern expression, was suturing the wounds that her patient had on his back. Once that was done, the doctor proceeded to completely bandage both the torso, arms and legs alike. The only thing that was saved was Issei's face that in different areas such as cheeks, left eye and forehead had pieces of gauze with tape on top so that they would not come out. Once the doctor finished her work, Issei went to his room, leaving Chisato in the living room, who was rummaging through her bag looking for something. When she found what she was looking for, she turned around to see a simple clothed Issei with 2 wads of cash in his hand. Issei. 100,000, you can check it if you want, he said, handing over the money, to which Chisato grabbed it to begin counting it, realizing that it was all there and it was real. Chisato. That's all, she calmly stated, putting the money in her bag. After that, she threw something to Issei, who was able to catch it without any problems. Chisato. You're not as hurt as you seem, he commented with some suspicion, carefully observing Issei's body. Issei. I adapt to the circumstance, he said calmly, shaking what he had in his hand, realizing that it was a bottle of pills. Chisato. They are narcotics, they will help you with the pain. If you go to the gym, take 1 pill. If they are for your nights out, I recommend 3, she advised while hanging her bag on her right shoulder. Issei. Do you want me to go to jail, Miss Hasegawa? He asked sarcastically, making the doctor sigh. Chisato. If they lock you up, make sure they don't kill you. And if not, make sure they don't kill you on the street, she requested with a complex expression, while Issei turned his attention towards the exit of her apartment. Issei. I'll walk her to the door, he commented calmly, making Chisato sigh. After having accompanied Chisato to the door and the aforementioned having left as calmly as possible, Issei returned to his house, proceeding to take one of the pills from the bottle of narcotics to go to sleep, entering the world of dreams as soon as he lay down. The next day. The sound of the alarm announcing 5:30 in the morning resonated in Issei's house. He quickly turned off the alarm to settle into his bed, although, due to the sounds of cars and people on the street, he couldn't help but sit up in bed. Issei. Damn, just when I want to sleep there is chaos around, he thought irritatedly, letting out a long sigh. Issei. The worst of all is that I have to go to school. If it weren't for the absences and for Asia, I would put earplugs in to continue sleeping, he thought with some displeasure, having no choice but to get up. After showering, brushing his teeth, eating breakfast and taking a narcotic, Issei set off towards Kuo Academy without even bothering to hide the wounds and bruises on his face. He just put on his sunglasses and left his house. After a few minutes, Issei arrived at the institute by taxi, being greeted by the curious glances of the students and murmurs. Not being in the mood to listen to conversations, Issei simply positioned himself in front of the entrance to be the first to enter. The moment the entrance bell rang, Issei didn't hesitate and began his way to his classroom. As he set foot in the classroom, he realized that he was the first and only one, having no choice but to take a seat at one of the desks in the first row, limiting himself to sitting and resting his head on the desk table. He didn't even deign to raise his head when his classmates entered, who were surprised to see Issei after 3 good days, although if they were honest with themselves, they didn't care at all since they had no relationship. The only one who did show concern was Haruko, but she had no idea how to act or if she should even greet him, having seen him in action both at the leaders' conference and in Kakebiel's attack on the academy. She could no longer see him as before. Although she could hear some footsteps behind her, Haruko turned around realizing that it was her teacher, so without thinking too much, she went to take a seat. Teacher. Good morning, he expressed the moment he entered the classroom until he set his sights on Issei. Professor. Oh, Issei, it's good to see you back. How are you feeling? He asked curiously, leaving his briefcase on the desk. On the other hand, Issei was puzzled by his question. Still, he raised his head and continued with the game. Issei. Good, much better, he answered with a light smile. Teacher. That's good to hear. Be more careful when going down the stairs next time, he commented, receiving a nod from his student. Issei. I'll have it, he expressed confidently without erasing his smile, while the teacher turned his back on him. Issei. What's going on here? He asked himself, not having remembered sending a report that he tripped or anything like that. After a couple of hours, the bell for the first break rang throughout the academy, and both students and teachers were quick to leave the classrooms to do their things. Although not being in the mood to even go eat, Issei just pressed his head against the desk wanting to sleep. Despite that, he turned his attention towards Haruko, noticing how the class president was approaching in his direction. Haruko. Murdoch, she called somewhat nervously, to which Issei only limited himself to standing up. Issei. What's wrong, Himura? He asked neutrally, turning his head in Haruko's direction, making her even more nervous than before. Haruko. And nothing. I was told that if you look for Asia, you can find her at the occult club, she answered, looking away from Issei. Issei. I understand. Thank you very much, he said so neutrally to the point of being expressionless, proceeding to stand up while unfolding his staff. Haruko. There is no, she stopped her sentence as she witnessed Issei setting off what she finished her lines, leaving her words hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Issei continued on his way with the help of 2 spirits who guided him to the Blessed Co, taking little time to arrive despite his injuries. Issei entered the old building not only with the help of the ghosts at his side, but also the presences he felt, noticing 2 that left him more than bewildered. Still, once Issei stood in front of the double doors, on the other side of which would be the central meeting room. The spirits who were with the chestnut prepared themselves in case a dispute would occur. On the other side, Issei inhaled deeply, followed by an equally deep exhalation. After that, he proceeded to knock on the door. Rias. "Go ahead," she said in a soft voice on the other side, to which Issei without further ado entered the room. Issei. "Excuse me," he expressed with a certain neutrality, being the main focus of everyone present. In the room there were a total of 9 people, of which 6 belonged to Ria's peerage, who, upon seeing Issei, couldn't help but lower her head in guilt and shyness, while most of her servants looked at Issei with analytical eyes. On the other hand, the 2 remaining were Azazel and Rainer. The latter was behind their leader, who was sitting comfortably behind a desk and surprisingly had his left arm recovered. "Azazel, hey Issei. You look better than last night," he said in a friendly manner with a wide smile. "Issei. What are you doing here, Azazel?" he questioned in dismay, advancing until he was in the middle of the room, ignoring everyone around him to focus on Azazel. "Azazel. Director Azazel, I am now the head of the academy. As well as being the advisor of the occult club and the student council," he answered calmly, resting his head against his hand. "Issei. I understand," he expressed somewhat thoughtfully, having the feeling that Azazel gave a false report to his teachers for his absences. "Azazel. Well, I guess you came for Asia," he commented almost as an affirmation, making Issei remember his main objective. Issei. "Yes, that's right," he said while Azazel directed his gaze towards the aforementioned. "Azazel. Asia, you will be the first to put your sacred gear into practice," he said with some enthusiasm, to which the aforementioned took a step forward. "Asia. What should I do?" she asked determinedly, making the governor of the fallen angels smile. "Azazel. Your duty is to heal Issei's bones. If you focus the magic power you gathered well, you will be able to do so. To make it easier, you will have to take off your clothes, Issei," he answered nonchalantly, making Asia blush upon hearing that. Issei. "Okay, I'll do it," he expressed determinedly, causing the blonde to turn redder than before. "Asia. How can you say that so lightly?" she asked embarrassedly while Issei turned his head expressionlessly. "Issei. As if we were going to make love," he answered impassively while Asia did not lose her blush until a fake cough was heard in the room. "Akeno. Please follow me," she requested friendly with a slight smile, positioned in front of the open doors of the co. At those words, Issei and Asia looked at each other almost at the same time, then nodded together, although before setting off, Issei left his briefcase in the room to follow Akeno accompanied by Asia. Walking down the long hallway of the old building, the 3 of them stopped in front of a door that was located a few steps away from the room they were in. Heading back to the topic, Akeno opened the door, stepping aside to let Issei in first, although when it was Asia's turn, Akeno changed her smiling face to a serious one, something that Asia understood almost instantly, and in that way, she entered the room. Once that was done, Akeno closed the door for more privacy. Inside, the light was turned on by Asia, who could notice that there were 6 single beds, as well as a piece of furniture with certain medications, bandages and cotton. But ignoring everything around her and watching Issei from behind, Asia witnessed how Issei took off his academy coat. After that, he began to unbutton his shirt. And although the blonde was willing to carry out her objectives, shame invaded her and she immediately turned around. "Issei. What? Were you raised in a church?" he questioned monotonously, turning around revealing that he had half of his shirt left to unbutton. Asia. "Yes, at least a big part of my childhood," she answered with some melancholy, making Issei stop what he was doing, followed by a deep sigh and letting out all the air from his lungs. Issei. "I'm sorry," he expressed sincerely sorry with his gaze down, but Asia shook her head even though her back was turned. "Asia. I didn't know. In fact, nobody knows, only my friends from the club," she commented calmly, making Issei sigh. "Issei. Whether I knew it or not, I should have at least had a little consideration," he said bitterly, to which Asia shook her head again. "Asia. Not only has he been injured since yesterday, but for days. Many would not be in a good mood in his state," she commented in an understanding manner, making the brunette smile ironically. Issei. "It's not a bad mood, it's idiocy. Believe me, it's more common in me than you think," he said without erasing his smile, making Asia smile. Asia. "So will he stop being an idiot?" she asked curiously, looking sideways at Issei's face. Issei. "Just for the moment," he answered and continued with his action of taking off his clothes. Asia, for her part, had a happy smile. Normally Issei didn't behave like that with her, very few were the times when they had a fruitful talk and Issei wasn't so expressionless. Maybe it was a dirty move to act hurt, but knowing that Issei could be considerate of the feelings of others made her happy. Issei. "I'm done," he announced while sitting on the bed that was in the center of the room. Without erasing her smile, Asia turned to attend to her friend, however, upon doing so, her smile immediately disappeared while her eyes widened in horror. Sitting with his back turned and almost naked, Issei left his battered body exposed, mainly his back where there were enormous amounts of scars of different types, long, short, in the form of stitches or cuts, burns, etc. With a lump in her throat, Asia slowly approached where Issei was, and once close, she extended her hand to touch his rear and run her hand through it. Issei. Asia, please stop, he requested with a soft tone, making the blonde stand up. Asia. Why yes, I'm sorry, she said sadly but still in surprise. Clasping her hands together and focusing on Issei's back, a green glow surrounded Asia's hands, who didn't divert her attention from the brunette's back. Although, the Gremory bishop couldn't help but remember a conversation she had with Takeda. Asia. So this is what they did to you, Issei, she thought with understanding, being aware that Takeda told everyone the reason for Issei's anger and hatred towards him, the rest of the family, Riaz, Sona and Arena. Issei. Asia, I appreciate that you're healing me. But my bones are more important, he commented, causing the blonde to return to real life. Asia. I'm sorry, she expressed sadly, focusing again on her main objective. This time, ignoring all kinds of thoughts or anything that distracted her, Asia focused completely on Issei, controlling her magic power so as not to waste it all at once. On the other hand, Issei remained silent so as not to interrupt Asia, which worked since she could feel how his entire spine and the back of his ribs were healing themselves. After a few seconds, Issei could feel how his back was completely recovered. He had a little muscle pain in that area, but that was the least of it. Asia. Go to bed, she commented, preparing herself for what she might see, while Issei complied with Asia's request. Lying down, Asia was able to see Issei's body in more detail, seeing how it had damage everywhere, from recent wounds to others that seemed to be starting to heal, not to mention noticeable bruises, mainly those that volley had caused him the day before, and as if that weren't enough, more and more scars. Asia. So it's true that he's the masked vigilante, she thought in surprise, putting aside the injuries she received during the attack at the conference and focusing on bullet wounds or scars. Ever since Issei revealed his identity after the conflict against Kakabiel, Asia has been investigating regarding the masked vigilante, having discovered that he was not only involved in Japan, but was also in Beijing, China and even the United States. There were rumors that the vigilante began in the latter country. It is not known in which of all the states. There was only a trail of corpses of all kinds of criminals: New York, Detroit, Miami, California and Massachusetts. Although leaving aside all that subject, not everything goes back to the same vigilante, but also, he found news from more than 10 years ago of another masked vigilante, who would be known as Daredevil or the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. Obviously, Asia found a relationship between that Daredevil and Issei, like his way of dressing and even fighting, although curiously, the last time she saw Daredevil was in Japan 5 years ago, and 5 years ago, Takeda told how Issei was thrown off the street. Asia. This can't be that much of a coincidence, she thought analytically, finding a lot of convenient things surrounding the Haidu family, mainly, Issei. But remembering her main job, Asia decided to put any thoughts aside. After all, she could continue researching whenever she wanted once classes were over. So proceeding to continue her duty, Asia continued healing Issei's bones, starting with his chest, followed by his head, both arms, his hands, his legs, and his feet. All that in less than 5 minutes, and while Issei was surprised to have all his bones completely healed, Asia was exhausted to the point where she had difficulty breathing. Issei. Thank you very much, Asia, he said sincerely, focusing all his attention on Asia. Asia. I don't know, worry, it's my job, she expressed tiredly, both in the magical and mental realm, causing Issei to aggravate his expression a little. Issei. Josh, transfers a little magic to Asia, he requested one of the luminous spirits at his side, who did not hesitate to approach the blonde. Asia. Huh. She expressed confused and somewhat surprised as she felt her magic power being restored a little. Issei. Consider that payment for the help, he said calmly, getting up from the bed. Followed by that, he went to his clothes that he left nearby. Asia. But how? What's more, if you can do that, I can heal the rest of your body, she said somewhat excitedly, but Issei shook his head. Issei. No need. Besides, if I come out of here fully recovered and you don't look exhausted, they'll think I did something to give you magic power, he said calmly as he put on his pants. Asia. Why? Why is he hiding like that? She questioned, bewildered, observing the brown-haired boy's back. Issei. I just want to go unnoticed, he answered nonchalantly, proceeding to put on his shoes. Asia. Don't you think it's a little late? She asked, crossing her arms, making Issei sigh. Issei. It's never too late to do or avoid something, he answered calmly without losing Asia's attention. Asia. Then why didn't he go away after what happened with Kakabiel? Why did he have to fight the White Emperor? She asked, confused without receiving answers from Issei, who put on his shirt. Asia. Azazel said that you can't stay still, is what he says true? She questioned, curiously observing Issei's face, which showed no expression whatsoever. Issei. Believe in what you want, Asia, he answered with disinterest, turning towards the aforementioned. Keeping silent, Asia along with Issei proceeded to leave the room to go to the main co-room. Upon finding it, they only found Azazel sitting behind the desk. Azazel. Wow, it took you longer than expected. I guess you did some things, he said suggestively, but both Issei and Asia were in no mood to play along. Asia. Where are the others? She asked, confused as she didn't see any of her noble friends, not even her own king. Azazel. You're in class, you didn't hear the bell because I formed a soundproof spell so it wouldn't interrupt your focus, Asia, he answered in a relaxed manner, leaning his back against the chair. Issei. What are we supposed to do? He asked with a raised eyebrow, to which Azazel shrugged. Azazel. Whatever they want, as long as the teachers or some school director don't discover them out there, they'll be free of trouble. Although I would like to hear in detail what you did, Asia, he said, fixing his eyes on the aforementioned girl. Asia. Okay, she commented, somewhat determined, it's not like she had to do anything else. Issei. I'm leaving, he said, grabbing his briefcase and turning around. Azazel. Before you leave, he commented, making Issei stop, who heard the leader of the fallen make a snap. Azazel. Ready, remove the seal I put on you. Our collaboration came this far, what do you say? He asked curiously, observing Issei shrewdly. Issei. Sounds good to me, he said calmly, continuing on his way. Issei. Goodbye, Asia, Azazel. Thank you for everything, he commented before leaving through the club's door. 1 week later. Sitting in the dark on a chair, Issei was in front of one of the windows, watching the dark, starry sky in a melancholic manner, receiving much of the moonlight on his face. Near his feet, his dog Stein lay sleeping peacefully. For his part, Issei had nothing to do, he had already done his schoolwork and he was not doing his vigilante activity, as he did not detect anyone asking for help or something that would make him patrol late. Letting out a sigh, Issei got up from his seat ready to go to sleep, however, he could feel 2 presences at the door of his house, and without having realized it long, the doorbell rang, hearing a ding-dong. Because of that sound, Stein woke up from his dream yawning deeply. On the other hand, Issei made a serious face as he recognized that they were demons, mainly, the Satan Lucifer, along with a person he did not recognize. Still, calming himself down, Issei proceeded to head towards the front door under the gaze of his dog who was sitting on the ground. Before reaching the door, Issei turned on the lights in his house, following that, he proceeded to open the door. Revealing that it was indeed Satan Lucifer himself. As for his companion, it was a beautiful woman with long silver hair slicked back and a long braid on each side with small blue bows at the ends. Her silver eyes also radiated a certain neutrality to the point of being expressionless. The clothes she wears are a blue and white French-made outfit with long sleeves and a white-made headband on her head, as well as red lipstick as a cosmetic accessory. Surziches, good evening, Issei. I'm sorry for coming unexpectedly, he said, somewhat embarrassed, to which Issei raised his hand with disinterest. Issei. Don't worry, please come in, he said respectfully, stepping aside so the couple could enter. Surziches. Thank you. Oh, my manners, this is my wife Grafia Lucifuge, he introduced with a light smile, slightly surprising Issei by that detail. Grafia. A pleasure, I brought a present, she said with some respect, bowing slightly and handing over a bag with a package inside. Issei. Thank you for your consideration, he also said with respect, accepting the gift, but not before also bowing. Once that was done, both spouses proceeded to calmly enter the house, noticing that everything was in order, there was nothing out of place, except that they didn't see any picture frames or anything like that. Meanwhile, Issei quickly met up with his guests after closing the door. Issei. Would you like something to drink? Water, coffee, tea? You can order whatever you want, he asked kindly, receiving a nod from Surziches. Surziches. Water is fine, Issei. Likewise, I'll try not to take up too much of your time, he replied with a light smile. Issei. Okay. Please take a seat, my house is your house, he said as he made his way to the kitchen. At the same time the couple sat together on a double sofa. Surziches. Do you live alone, Issei? He asked, interested from the main room, observing only a puppy sleeping as if nothing. Issei. More or less. I have a pet, but if we talk about people, yes, I live alone, he answered calmly, leaving the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. Walking until he was in front of both spouses, Issei handed them their respective glasses of water, to which Surziches, once he received it, proceeded to take it. On the other hand, Grafia watched in silence as Issei took a seat in front of them. Surziches. Thank you very much, he said honestly, leaving the empty glass on the table in front of him. Surziches. Very well, I'll be direct, he commented, catching Issei's attention, who noticed how Surziches stood up and kneeled in front of him on one leg. Surziches. I need you to do me a favor, Issei Murdoch. But I ask you as Surziches Gremory, not as Surziches Lucifer, he requested somewhat pleadingly with his head touching the ground, completely disconcerting Issei even more upon hearing his real name. Issei. Gremory. He asked almost unconsciously, still processing what had just happened. Surziches. That's right. Ria's Gremory is my younger sister. Maybe you know her from being in the same school, or when the incident with Kakabiel happened or at the conference, he said, raising his head. On the other hand, Issei was just able to get back up, but inside he was still surprised. Issei. Yes, I've heard things about her. But what is all this about? He asked, confused, while Surziches returned his gaze to the ground. Surziches. In 2 days my sister will be marrying a demon heir. The problem is that her fiancé, he's not a very good person, to say the least, he replied with a helpless expression. Issei. I understand. But if you are the demon king, can't you pull certain strings? He questioned, bewildered, receiving a shake of the head from Surziches. Surziches. If that were the case, I wouldn't be here. Although I lead the demons, my decisions and those of the other demon kings must be processed and accepted by the demon council, which existed long before my companions and I took office as demon kings, so it could be said that they have a lot of influence due to their longevity, he answered, leaving Issei somewhat thoughtful. Issei. In the hypothetical case that I accept your favor, what would be my role and what do I gain in return? He questioned, this time somewhat seriously, being aware that fighting against a high-class demon would not be an easy battle. Surziches. Your role will be to challenge Riser Phoenix in what we call a rating game, with the conditions that if you win, I will free Ria's Gremory from the marriage, he answered, which did not make the brown-haired boy very happy. Issei. What if I lose? He asked seriously, confident that his chances of winning were 5 or 10% or less. Surziches. That you'll have to decide, Issei, he answered sadly without raising his head, to which Issei remained silent for a while. Issei. Don't you have any subordinates of yours who will fight in my place? He asked this time curiously, to which Surziches nodded. Surziches. I have them, the problem is that they will know that I sent them, whoever it is. That includes you, with the difference that they will not know about our relationship, everything that is said will be nothing more than baseless words. Also, since you are young and human, they will underestimate you, therefore, you have the probability that they will accept the duel, and you can win, he said with confidence in his words, leaving Issei silent, who did not deign to speak at any time. Surziches. I know the risk is huge, but if you manage to win you will be able to ask me for everything you want whenever you want, he stated with total firmness in his words. Even so, Issei still did not speak. Surziches. I am the eldest brother of the Gremory family and as such, I seek the well-being and a good future for my younger sister, he explained sincerely. Having witnessed everything, Grafia stood up from her seat and approached her husband until she positioned herself next to him to kneel, surprising both Surziches and Issei. Grafia. Please help Miss Rias. She's not a bad girl, for years she's done nothing but help others except herself. That's why we can't allow such a commitment, she said with some pleading. Silence reigned in the room. Issei pondered what to decide, and although he didn't want to, the spirits also ended up getting involved. Some recommended him to accept due to the benefit he could have if he helped the Satan Lucifer. The rest advised him not to accept in order to make Gremory pay for having participated in his misfortune some time ago. On the other hand, the couple anxiously awaited the brunette's response, mainly Surziches, who felt his heart beating rapidly, until the sound of a sigh caught the attention of both demons, who raised their heads watching as Issei stood up. Issei. Get up, I'm tired of all this drama, he expressed, fed up, to which Surziches and Grafia proceeded to get up. Issei. I will fight Phoenix, he declared with confidence in his words, to the delight of Surziches and Grafia. Surziches. Thank you very much, Issei, he said sincerely while bowing. Issei. Do it after the fight, and if I come out as the winner, he commented with some severity at the same time that Surziches stood up straight. Surziches. I know, but the fact that you accepted is more than enough, he said with a light smile, making Issei sigh. Issei. That thing they call rating game, does it have regulations or what? He asked curiously, focusing his attention on the couple. Grafia. That's right. But due to your condition, you'll only be limited to not using sacred or blessed objects. I'll give you this for reference, she replied, handing a sheet of paper written in braille to Issei. Issei. Condition. Do you mean physics? He asked a little confused, to which both demons shook their heads. Surziches. No. Rating games are usually team versus team battles. Riser has 15 members in his peerage, so they won't be able to afford to make illegal moves unlike you who will be alone, he answered, to which Issei nodded in understanding. Issei. I understand. What is your victory and defeat record? He asked, interested while crossing his arms, being careful not to wrinkle the sheet of paper he had in his hand. Grafia. He has participated in 13 matches, of which he was victorious in 11 and lost 2, by the way, she answered firmly in her tone, causing Issei to deepen his gaze. Issei. What about your peerage? Do they do all the work? He questioned, his expression softening. Graphia, yes, Mr. Riser only appears when he has to give the final blow, she answered confidently in her words, while Issei remained somewhat thoughtful. Issei. Well, I just needed to know that, he said calmly, memorizing as much as possible everything he heard. Surziches. Are you sure? After this day we can't be in contact anymore so that they don't discover our collaboration. And while most will get the idea that I sent you, they won't be able to tell me anything without evidence, he explained, receiving a nod from Issei. Issei. Yes, in any case I will go to Azazel or someone else who is not a demon, he said calmly, making Satan Lucifer exhale. Surziches. Okay. Before I leave I would like to give you something, he commented, nodding to his wife, who proceeded to take out a mini box from a pocket dimension. After that, she approached Issei. Surziches. There is a phoenix tear for you to use now, and a pamphlet with which you can teleport to the place where the wedding will be. It will be held at 11 at night, he commented, while Issei had just opened the little box, revealing a pamphlet and underneath it a bottle with phoenix tears. Issei. Thank you, he expressed with some honesty, to which Surziches shook his head. Surziches. I wouldn't know who to turn to if I hadn't met you, he said somewhat gratefully with his hand on his chest, while Graphia prepared a teleportation spell. Surziches. We are retreating, Issei, he warned, to which Issei only nodded. Issei. See you later, I'm not sure I'll win, but I'll try, he said with some determination, making Surziches smile. Surziches. I'm counting on you. See you later, he said goodbye, and after those words, both demons disappeared without a trace. Letting out an exhausted sigh, Issei proceeded to grab the vial of phoenix tears and leave the sheet of regulations and the box with the pamphlet on top of the coffee table. Once that was done, Issei drank the contents of the vial, feeling all his wounds heal. On the other side, Mio and Ryu made an appearance. Ryu. Good thing you weren't going to get involved further in the supernatural world, he commented somewhat sarcastically, gaining Issei's attention. Issei. I'm not adapting to the damage, but I'm not adapting to it. That's how it was with Kakabiel, also with Volley, and now with this Riser Phoenix, he commented calmly, proceeding to read the rules of the rating game. Mio. What does it say? She asked curiously and somewhat worried. Issei. The fight can last between 1 to 2 hours, there will also be times of rest until they make a new battlefield. The only two ways to win is to defeat the opponent or make him surrender. In addition, there is an extensive list of sacred objects that cannot be used, that includes blessing them, he answered somewhat seriously, as he recognized that he was very limited, perhaps even more than Riser. Ryu. Are you in trouble? He asked interestedly, floating relaxed. Issei. A little, yes. I have a plan in mind, but I'm going to study it in more detail. Still, I know the preparations I must make, he answered calmly, heading towards a landline phone that was nearby. Ryu. Before you make your call, I would like to know, why didn't you ask Satan Lucifer about this Phoenix's abilities and his nobility? He questioned, somewhat interested, while Issei grabbed the phone. Issei. It's part of the plan. Although it's not very important, so whether it comes out or not, it won't change anything, he answered in a carefree manner, while dialing a number on the phone. Leo. You're not calling. She stopped speaking because Issei interrupted her by nodding calmly, thus focusing her attention on the call when she heard someone answer. Hello, who is this? A male voice asked from behind the phone. Hello, Masato, how have you been? Issei returned the question somewhat seriously. Well, who do you want me to find a report? He asked, sounding somewhat fearful. For the moment, no one. I just need you to prepare some things. I'll pay you a visit tomorrow, so don't run away because I'll find you anyway, Issei answered with confidence in his words and cut off the call. Chapter 5. Preparation. Author narrates. The recess bell had rang, most of the students of Kuo Academy as well as the teachers left their respective classrooms to do their typical daily things. But changing the routine, Issei did not head to the rooftop as he usually did. This is because he spent a large part of the night meticulously preparing the plan he had in mind, paying attention to even the smallest detail, in order to have everything in his favor. So, starting with the first phase of the happy plan, Issei needed to know more about Riser Phoenix, and he had in mind the right person to tell him that. Walking through the halls of the academy, heading towards classroom 2B, upon arriving, Issei positioned himself at the door, detecting Takeda and Asia were present, along with Zenobia Corda, ending up capturing the attention of both his brother and the rest of the Gremory nobility. Issei. Can I talk to you, Rainer? He asked directly, surprising all the students since none of them knew someone called Rainer. The boys and girls looked around to see who the aforementioned could be, while the three devils were surprised to hear that and were also wondering why Issei was looking for Rainer. And speaking of the aforementioned, she just got up from her desk to head towards where the brown-haired boy was, but in doing so, she ended up earning the murmurs of the students. Rainer. What do you want to talk about? She questioned in a low voice with a stern and annoyed tone. After all, the brown-haired boy revealed her real name since she studied at the academy under the alias of Amano Yuma. Issei. Let's talk in a more private place, he said calmly, starting to walk towards the roof of the academy, being followed by an annoyed Rainer. They both walked away from the room at a somewhat hurried pace, while everyone, but especially the demons, were curious and interested to know what the two of them were going to talk about. But we'll stop by with Rainer and Issei. Issei just guided the fallen angel to the rooftop, since there they would have the privacy she wanted. Although in the middle of the way, Rainer stood next to Issei looking at the brunette, as if she was waiting for him to tell her the reason why he wanted to talk to her. Issei. Is something wrong? He asked with a somewhat curious tone, pretending not to understand and continuing on his way. Rainer. Is something wrong? Well, how about we go over what happened? First you come to my classroom and reveal my real name as if it were nothing, second you ask to speak to me in private without even telling me what you want to talk about, and third, don't you care if your brother thinks we have a relationship? She expressed somewhat annoyed as she began to climb some stairs. Issei. No, I don't care, he said carefree, opening and crossing a door, followed by Rainer, having reached his destination. Rainer. Well, what do you want to talk to me about? She questioned somewhat seriously, wanting to finish everything as soon as possible. Issei. I need you to tell me everything you know about Riser Phoenix, he answered directly, which was strange to the fall, although in part he was curious about what the brown-haired boy was asking him. Rainer. What for? In fact, how do you know that demon? She asked bewildered without looking away from Issei. Issei. Instead of asking why don't you start talking, he stated sternly, since every second and minute that passed was valuable time. Rainer. You're not a gentleman at all, you know that. She commented, offended by how Issei treated her, causing the aforementioned to sigh tiredly. After a few hours of studying, all the students of the academy went to their respective houses, but if we talk about Rainer and Issei, the brown-haired boy was forced to take the fallen angel to the arcade for a few long minutes. After that, he took her to a restaurant for lunch. Right now, we see how Rainer had a huge childish smile, having in front of her a bowl of banana split. Rainer. This is what I meant, she commented in a childish manner and with a big happy smile, proceeding to eat her dessert. Issei. Well, I made sure you had fun and your stomach was full, now talk, he said seriously, making Rainer sigh. Rainer. Riser Phoenix is the next heir of the Phoenix clan and future husband of Ria's Gremory. I've heard that he is a self-centered and very confident type, thanks to being immortal, she expressed in a monotonous way to the point of disinterest. Issei. Is he immortal? Do you know anything about that? He questioned interestedly as he remembered the words of the Seraph Gabriel during the fight between the leaders against Kateria. Rainer. I only know that immortality is inherited by those born into the Phoenix clan, who are capable of instantly healing wounds and even regenerating limbs or organs. If that regeneration has a weakness or a disadvantage, I don't know, she said still in that monotonous tone, while Issei only limited himself to making a slight grimace of disgust upon hearing the last thing. Issei. Do you have any idea what magic he has? He asked curiously, receiving a nod from Rainer, who stopped to try a spoonful of her dessert. Rainer. I heard that the Phoenix clan handles the elements of wind and fire, although on Riser's part, I only heard that he only uses fire, she answered and continued eating her ice cream. Issei. Do you have anything else to tell me? Like the battles he won or lost, as is his nobility. Whatever you know, tell it, he said with some urgency, although while Surziches and Grafia informed him of everything, Rainer could be useful for the plan he had in mind. Rainer. Phoenix has 15 members in her peerage, she has won a total of 11 fights, but lost 2, which according to many, she did on purpose. Her last 2 victories were against Ria's Gremory and your brother, both with the intention of breaking up the marriage, but the re-deed had she informed calmly, surprising Issei upon hearing the last thing, since he was not warned about that. Issei. They both lost. But how? He questioned, disoriented, having believed that Takeda was the strongest Ria's had at her disposal, and the fight against Volley demonstrated his power and ingenuity. Rainer. I don't know, according to rumors Ria's Gremory didn't possess any battle spirit, she seemed like a little girl lost in a big city. As for your brother, on the 2 occasions he could have landed a hit on Riser that would have changed everything, he didn't. The reason, I don't know, she answered calmly, leaving Issei speechless. Rainer. That's all I know, so now let me eat my ice cream, she said honestly, while Issei stood up to get up from his seat and take out his wallet. Rainer. What are you doing? Are you going to ask for something to eat? She asked curiously, because in the short time she spent with the brown-haired boy he didn't eat or drink anything. Issei. No, I'm not going to eat anything, but I'll pay for yours and what your friends ordered, he answered somewhat seriously, leaving several bills on the table, sensing the energy of 2 fallen angels in the restaurant. Rainer. I can explain, she didn't finish speaking because Issei interrupted her. Issei. I don't care about that, just tell them to practice, whoever they are, they suck. Goodbye and thanks for everything, he said as he proceeded to leave the restaurant. After Issei left the restaurant, Rainer stood there alone and quietly eating her ice cream calmly until two people sat in front of her. The first was a tall woman with navy blue hair and brown eyes. The woman was wearing a maroon-colored trench coat-like blouse with a wide collar, a matching miniskirt, and black high heels. The top of the trench coat was open at chest level, revealing her breasts and cleavage. The other person is a girl with blonde hair tied in two pigtails and blue eyes. Her attire consists of a black Lolita dress with white ruffles, a large black bow on the front, and a green jewel embedded in the collar, white thigh-high socks and black shoes. She also wore a large black bow on the top of her hair. Is that the boy you told us about, Sister Rainer? The girl asked curiously, looking at Rainer who just nodded. Rainer? The same midlet, she answered calmly, watching where the brown-haired boy went. It doesn't seem like a big deal, although I'm surprised that he discovered us, the woman commented somewhat seriously, to which Rainer shook her head. Rainer? He may look like an ordinary human with nothing special. But he's more dangerous than he seems, she said with some seriousness, remembering how Issei didn't hesitate or speak when it came to killing, not to mention his other abilities. We are in the city of Tokyo, but we will focus on a not at all pretty and not at all clean area of this great city. However, we can see Issei in one of the alleys in that area. The aforementioned was no longer wearing the Kuo Academy uniform, but instead was wearing a simple red short-sleeved shirt and had a large bag hanging from his right shoulder. To go unnoticed, Issei took out some glasses from his bag pockets and without wasting time he began to walk, ready to go to the residence where Masato lived. After a few minutes of walking, the brown-haired boy arrived at his destination, which was nothing more than an apartment in very bad condition. He didn't think twice and proceeded to enter the apartment, heading towards the room Masato resided in. However, as Issei walked through the hallways, he managed to smell like the walls, floor and ceiling, practically everything was decomposing. But not only that, but he could also smell different things, including rotten food coming from some rooms, vomit, alcoholic beverages such as beer and sake, and he could even smell urine and manure. Although that was not the only thing, I could also hear the occasional complaint or loud argument between couples, as well as children, girls and even babies crying or screaming. The brown-haired boy knew very well what everyone in the department was going through, even though he was not so unlucky as to be born in such a place, he more or less understood them. After all, he had been in places similar to and worse than the department he was in. No matter what country, city or town you found yourself in, every place has its dark side, and Yokio was no exception. After a few minutes, Issei arrived at Masato's room, but before entering, he took off his glasses to put them in his bag. But when he did that, the brown-haired boy took out a scarf, with which he covered half of his face. Being ready and without thinking twice, Issei kicked open the door making a loud noise. But not hearing anyone approaching in his direction, he proceeded to enter the house. The brunette only headed towards the main room when he heard the breathing of two subjects. Once he arrived at said room, Issei found the two subjects he heard, both of them drugged and sitting on a sofa. One of the men looked at Issei and started laughing like crazy, revealing his rotten teeth. The brunette, for his part, just ignored him to look at the table, finding some syringes all with the same drug, being nothing more than heroin. However, Issei managed to notice how someone was approaching the room in a hurry, until a few seconds later a man of about 24 years old with brown hair and matching eyes appeared, wearing an outfit similar to Vali's. Masato. Hey you two morons, next time you try to break the door I'm going to. He didn't finish speaking because when he saw Issei, he had become paralyzed. Issei. Hello Masato, sorry for the delay, he expressed with a neutral tone. Well, Masato said nothing until one of the guys who were there started to vomit. Masato. What do you want? He asked somewhat frightened, looking nervously at the masked man. Issei. I need you to get me and do this, he answered calmly, taking a paper out of his bag to give it to Masato, who upon grabbing it, began to read what was written, being shocked by it. Masato. Do you want to start a damn war or what? He exclaimed startled while Issei remained calm. Issei. Listen to me carefully, Masato. I need all of that by tomorrow. I'll come pick it up between 8 or 9 at night and I don't want any complaints. Understood? He stated sternly. Masato. Do you have any idea what you're asking me to do? Not even a madman or a drunk would be able to do all this, much less by tomorrow, he said, aware of his limits. Issei. If that's the case, I advise you to hurry up, he commented nonchalantly just to throw the bag near Masato. Issei. In that bag there are 300,000 yen in cash and well counted, they are not fake or anything like that, he stated firmly in his word, surprising Masato, who approached and opened the bag, finding several bundles of money. Issei. This is an advance, hire trustworthy people to help you, talk to whoever you can to get that, and if you do everything right, I'll give you another 300,000, and maybe I'll consider increasing the amount, he said confidently, leaving Masato stupefied. Issei. But believe me, if you or some of your friends try to scam me, I won't let it go, he warned sternly, to which Masato quickly shook his hands. Masato. You are the last person my friends and I would scam, and I wouldn't even do it, you can trust my word, he expressed sincerely, being aware that Issei was always serious. Issei. Okay, he commented, turning around and ready to leave. After all, he noticed that Masato was telling the truth. Masato. Before you go, I would like to tell you something, he said somewhat nervously, making Issei stop walking. Issei. Speak, he said seriously, while Masato just sighed to try to calm down a little. Masato. Apparently many people, including mobsters, are fed up with what you do, so they put a price on your head, $5 million, he warned nervously, remembering how he heard that from some gang members. Issei. I appreciate the information. See you soon, Masato, he said, proceeding to leave the place, while Masato had a face of disbelief. Masato. Did that guy care about what I said? He asked himself, bewildered by the masked man's expressionlessness. After going shopping halfway, Issei had just entered his home, being greeted by his pet Stein, who bit his shoes as a welcome. Issei was forced to walk carefully to the kitchen, leaving the shopping bag on the table. After that, he went to a shelf to take out a bag of dog food. Issei just limited himself to serving Stein food in a bowl, to which the puppy diverted his attention to the food. On the other hand, Issei went to the main room, lying on the sofa face up. And unconsciously, as the minutes passed, Issei ended up falling asleep. The next day. Dusk was falling on Kuo Academy, both students and some workers had already returned home, unfortunately for them, others stayed working overtime. But focusing on Issei, the aforementioned was in the main room of his house, standing on his hands while doing push-ups in that same position. Issei. 47, 48, 49, 50, he thought and stopped, lowering both feet until they touched the ground, remaining in a plank position. Although after doing that, Issei proceeded to stand up, being all sweaty and red due to all the blood that went to his brain, but leaving aside the slight dizziness he felt, beyond that, Issei was better than ever. Issei. Both because of Asia and because of that phoenix tear, my body has recovered like never before. The only problem is fatigue, but far from that, it's the first time I feel so good after a while, he thought with some surprise, opening and closing his hands, especially his right one, because it was badly injured after hitting Volley's helmet. Controlling his breathing to stabilize his heart rate, once he was able to do that, Issei focused his senses on the wall clock nearby, noticing that it was 6:37 p.m. Issei. I still have some time, I'll take Stein for a walk. Anyway, I already have everything prepared, he thought calmly, proceeding to go take a shower. After taking a shower, Issei left his apartment with Stein on a leash. Both owner and pet continued on their way to Kuo's Central Park. Upon arriving, Issei freed Stein and allowed him to go play with other dogs. After all, he didn't train him to be hostile, at least not against someone who is. Taking a seat on a bench, being calm that Stein would go with him if he whistled, Issei sat there, with his head fixed in a single direction, forward, being more in his thoughts than in real life. Issei. Ria's Takeda, what happened to both of them? He thought somewhat curiously after what Rainer had told him. He was not stupid, he was aware of the power of both. The first was a pure demon of the high class, and to top it off, the younger sister of the Satan Lucifer, a very powerful being enough to be the leader of the demons, had everything to be someone strong too. As for Takeda, he witnessed his brother's power firsthand, not to mention that what he showed in his battle against Volley was only a fraction of Drake's true power, which was also Takeda's. However, Issei still didn't understand how they lost against Riser Phoenix, since Rias not only had the Red Emperor, but also a holy sword wielder and a vampire who was able to stop time. He also didn't doubt the power of the others. Asia, for example, was an exceptional healer. Although they didn't know of others who used healing magic, he was sure that Asia was above many, even above Phoenix's tears. Maybe it was due to a bad strategy, maybe it was due to a limitation that did not allow him to use his full powers, or maybe, Riser Phoenix and his peerage were stronger than he thought. Whatever all the options he had in mind, Issei was sure of one thing. Takeda, Rias, Sona, and even Irina could judge that they were holding back or something, and due to the pitched battle that took place during the conference, he could tell that. As for Kurumi, he couldn't say much, but if she had been, he was sure it would be the same story. Issei. Sigh, I'm thinking about unnecessary things. I must focus on the fight, he thought calmly, proceeding to whistle. At that, Stein did not take long to position himself in front of his owner, with his tongue hanging out waiting for some order, although the brown-haired boy only proceeded to hook the leash onto his collar. Issei. We're going home, friend, he commented in a soft tone as he proceeded to get up from the bench. And? Making his way to his apartment, upon arriving and entering, Issei left Stein free to do whatever he wanted while he set out to tidy up his house a bit in order to kill time. By the time it was 8:30 p.m., Issei wasted no time and dressed in his trusty black tracksuit. Once that was done, he formed a magic circle bound for Tokyo. Upon arriving, it appeared on top of the roof of some building, so taking advantage of his position, he headed in a specific direction. Arriving at his destination, Issei stopped in front of the back of a store, proceeding to approach a door that was there. He only knocked on it a few times. It didn't take long for the door to be opened. Having been a sleepy Masato, he was still more than conscious. Masato, on his side, upon recognizing Issei, quickly let him in. After that, he closed the door and began to guide the masked man through a hallway where different types of weapons were located, be it pistols, automatic rifles, machine guns, shotguns, etc. Although both stopped in front of a door, which was opened by Masato, revealing a room illuminated by a spotlight, although thanks to that spotlight, a slight mountain of something could be seen that was covered by a sheet. Masato. I did get everything, even though it was a bigger expense than usual. As for the manufactured bullets, we barely managed to make half of them, he said in a tired tone to the point of letting out a yawn. Issei. Yes, everything is in order, maybe I'll upload what we agreed on, he commented somewhat seriously, not having the need to check the things he ordered. Forming a magic circle beneath the pile of things, Issei stored all of that into a pocket dimension, which Masato was shocked to witness. But he thought it was some kind of hallucination due to the lack of sleep, beers, and cigarettes he consumed to stay awake up to this point. With all that ready, Issei left the store and climbed onto the terrace of a building to teleport to his house. Upon arrival, he felt a slight dizziness that was not a big deal compared to previous times. Getting back to the topic, Issei didn't even limit himself to changing his clothes, he only proceeded to grab an old backpack that he had among his belongings, in which he put everything he had bought the day before. From a first aid kit, a strange little box to forearm, elbow and knee pads, followed by that, he also loaded the bottle of narcotics, some thin ropes and a scarf to cover his face. He was already prepared, he had everything, the only thing he had to do was wait for the time, which didn't take long to arrive. It was 10:55 at night and Issei finished eating a sandwich. After wiping his mouth, Issei proceeded to grab a backpack and the brochure that would take him to where the wedding would be. Sighing, Issei proceeded to apply magic to the pamphlet, managing to perceive how a magic circle was created under his feet, which released a glow that illuminated the entire house, and then disappeared along with Issei. Having appeared in what seemed to be some kind of warehouse where they kept cleaning supplies, Issei left that place, thus letting himself be guided by the presences he felt, assuming that this was the wedding venue. Upon arriving and standing in front of a huge double door, Issei was able to sense the presence of very powerful beings, among them, the archangels Michael and Gabriel along with Irina. On the other hand, he also managed to sense the presence of Azazel and Rainer, who were accompanied by two other fallen ones. Issei. What are they doing here? He asked himself in dismay. Even so, he decided to leave that aside and focus on his objective. Issei. Sai, let's get this over with, he declared, determined to open the door. Ryu. Wait kid, you can't just come in like that. We have to do things right, he intervened, stopping Issei, which made him strange but also annoyed. Issei. What are you talking about, Ryu? He questioned, annoyed, since he didn't want to waste more time than he was losing. Ryu. To start, you must let the bishop say the phrase "speak now or forever hold your peace," and at that moment you enter to then say, "I object," he stated severely, causing Issei to put on an irritated face. Issei. I don't have time for this, he expressed, fed up, about to enter, but Ryu stopped him again. Ryu. Come on boy, don't be like that, show some class will you, he commented, making Issei sigh in annoyance, having no choice but to do what Ryu said. Issei. Okay, but when will he say that phrase? He asked, trying to calm down, having difficulties in hearing the wedding due to the thick walls and doors. Ryu. I'll warn you, he declared firmly in his words, crossing the door without any difficulty. Issei. Ryu, what are you looking at? He asked curiously, ready to enter at any moment. Ryu. Wow, your siblings and even your parents are here, and what would you say if I told you that your parents are demons? He asked, relaxed, causing Issei to sharpen his expression. Issei. Focus on the wedding, he said, tired of Ryu's going around in circles. Ryu. Okay. Gremory and Phoenix are at the altar. The bishop is asking for the votes. They both shook hands and holy crap, he already said the phrase, he warned, surprised by how fast everything happened. Issei. And here I am wasting my time, he said, annoyed as he entered the place, capturing the attention of everyone present. Issei. I regret to interrupt this sacred marriage, but I object, he declared firmly, in his tone accompanied by a light smile, leaving many speechless, mainly the Gremory and Citri heiresses along with their entourages, mainly Takeda and Kurumi. Some guards headed towards where Issei was, but some spirits held them back, preventing them from being able to move. Of course, the demons present wanted to know what was happening with the guards, fixing their eyes on Issei, who was positioned in front of the altar. What does this mean? A man roared in anger at the interruption of his wedding. That same man was Riser Phoenix, a tall young man with short blonde hair and dark blue eyes. His outfit consisted of a burgundy blazer with matching dress pants and shoes. Underneath his open blazer, he revealed a white dress shirt that was not fully buttoned, leaving his chest slightly exposed. Issei. That's very easy to see and hear, imbecile, he said seriously as he approached Riser until they were face to face, noticing the height between them. Issei. I came to break this marriage whether you like it or not, he declared with confidence in his words, with his head raised looking at Riser, who simply directed his gaze towards the Satan Lucifer. Riser. Mr. Lucifer, do you agree with this interruption? He questioned with a serious face, but with a respectful tone towards Satan. Surziches. I don't see anything wrong with him, Riser. Even though this young man is human, if he has feelings for Ria's Gremory, they shouldn't be ignored, he replied calmly, while Riser let out a slight smile. Riser. So human, huh? He expressed this time calmer and with a softened expression, the opposite of what happened with Issei. Issei. Riser Phoenix, I Issei do challenge you to a rating game, he declared with firmness in his tone, causing many to be surprised to hear his last name, mainly two people. Rias. I Issei, wait, don't, the Gremory was interrupted when Riser pushed her, causing her to take a few steps back. Riser. What are the conditions? He asked, brimming with confidence. Issei. If I win, you will free Ria's Gremory from the marriage. But if I lose, my life will belong to the Phoenix family, he answered firmly in his tone, making Riser smile, while a few were surprised by such a proposal. Riser. Sounds good to me, he commented relaxed, making Issei smile inside, but I would like my entire peerage to participate in this duel, he said as 15 girls proceeded to position themselves behind Riser, making Issei's gaze deepen even more. Issei. I guess there's no other way, he expressed without changing his expression, making Riser's smile grow. 16 demons against 1 human, such a match was inconceivable. Most of those present saw Issei as if he were crazy or lacking some brain cells, although, if they were honest with themselves, the ceremony was going too fast and was also very boring, so they were happy to witness that fight to entertain themselves a little. But if we go with the guests being the angels and the fallen, like the Haidu family along with the Gremory and Citri entourages, they were waiting for Issei to retract what he said or give indications that he was going to back down. However, that never happened. Issei was still firmly in the place he was. Surziches. Okay. But before we start, let's check that you don't have anything with you, Issei, he said in a calm tone, directing his gaze towards his wife, who proceeded to approach Issei. Rafia. Your backpack please, she requested politely once in front of Issei, who handed her bag into her hand. But that ready, Satan's wife proceeded to meticulously search for some sacred or blessed object, but she found nothing, not even a piece of a leaf from the Bible. The only relevant thing found in the backpack was the bottle of narcotics, causing many to look at the brunette in a bad way, including Grafia. After that, he showed the public the small box, which when opened, revealed that it contained a small tube of self-injectable adrenaline. Disorienting more than one, while others laughed quietly because of that. Grafia. It's clean, she declared with confidence in her words, returning the backpack to its owner, although in the process she looked disapprovingly at the brunette who noticed it. Still, she ignored him. Surziches. Very well, all preparations will be made for the raiding games, he warned, proceeding to leave the place with his wife. Riser. You will regret having come, human, he threatened in a whisper near Issei's ear, and then left the altar. Issei. Sigh, you don't have to tell me, he thought annoyed, heading to a corner of the wedding hall. Once there, Issei proceeded to open the backpack and take out what was inside, starting with the protections, placing them in the places they went. After that, he proceeded to take out the thin ropes, which he proceeded to wrap around one of his hands. Meanwhile, most of the demons looked on in a condescending manner, others with a certain mockery, as if they were not taking the brunette seriously. Although among them there were understanding people who did not want to witness the fight, despite that, they had no say in deciding what to do. On the other hand, there were those who were curious about the brunette. Rainer. Hey, she said, catching Issei's attention as he turned in her direction, do you have any idea what could happen to you? She questioned in a stern tone, watching as Issei tangled the rope that remained in her other hand. Issei. I know, but I'm here for a reason, don't you think? He calmly returned the question. After all, he was completely immersed in his role, and he already had everything prepared, he just had to execute the plan well. Rainer. This is unlike any you've ever faced. All you'll get is to go to the other world, she commented, somewhat annoyed by the attitude Issei was displaying, who put his backpack away in a pocket dimension. Issei. You're right. But all in all, Phoenix is not Kakabiel, much less the White Emperor, so I have a small chance, he said calmly and to a certain extent confident. Rainer. Do whatever you want, she said, looking irritated, heading towards where Azazel was. The brunette didn't say anything at that. Instead, he proceeded to put on the scarf to cover half of his face. With that ready, he sat down on the floor and leaned his back against the wall, deciding to wait. Looking like he was sleeping, Issei was seen by everything and everyone in the room, mainly by his parents Izumi and Goro Haidu. Both seeing that Issei was his true son and that Takeda confirmed it, both wanted to go with him, however, they did not have the courage to do so, not after what they did to him. Even Takeda, who was next to a dejected Kurumi, the Red Emperor, looked shrewdly at his younger brother. Takeda. You didn't use our last name at the conference, much less at the academy, why now, Issei? He asked himself. Instead of being upset or something like that, he was confused. After a few minutes, Surziches and his wife returned to the altar, catching the attention of everyone present, including Issei, who stood up from the floor. Riser was also standing along with the 15 females who were with him, most of them young women and others somewhat teenagers. Surziches. The dimension is made, are you ready? He asked curiously while observing the participants of this meeting. Riser. I'm always ready, Lord Lucifer, he replied, brimming with confidence, to which Surziches turned his gaze towards Issei. Searches. Are you ready, Issei? He asked in a calm Issei. Yes, he answered determinedly, so without further ado, Surziches focused on Grafia, giving her a nod. At that action, Grafia created 2 portals, one below Riser and his peerage, and another at Issei's feet, who remained still, disappearing little by little in an intense glow, until they disappeared completely. Appearing in what appeared to be a city, Riser along with his peerage looked around, mainly the latter feeling curious, while Riser seemed to be displeased by the scenery. From everyone's perspective, they only saw buildings and a train line. After that, they didn't find anything interesting. There were shops of different types, streetlights, asphalt and roads were what would be expected of a city. There was nothing new. Although the Phoenix nobility and Riser himself focused their attention on a magic screen that formed in the skies, seeing that it was Grafia herself. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is Grafia Lucifuge, maid of the Gremory House, and the announcer of this rating game, she stated with a neutral expression. This meeting will be held in a small area of Kuo City, Japan. On the west side are Lord Riser Phoenix and his peerage, meanwhile, the young Issei Haidu is on the north side, Grafia calmly reported, to which a few pieces of Riser proceeded to locate the north. The rules are simple. The rating game will last between an hour or 2. To win, Mr. Riser or his entourage must defeat young Issei, either by knocking him unconscious or making him surrender. In the case of young Issei, he must do the same, but only with Mr. Riser, no one else, Grafia explained, causing Riser to let out a triumphant smile. Also, illegal movements, the use of sacred or blessed items, will be penalized with the other's victory, Grafia commented, something that Riser didn't care too much about. The pawns can be promoted the moment they reach the enemy zone, although Mr. Riser or young Issei can take one of the buildings that are in their zones and use them as a base, and can even ask for a second half. With that already said, let the rating game begin, Grafia declared as the screen disappeared from the sky. Riser, for his part, couldn't be more relaxed. He just started walking, being followed by his peerage. Meanwhile, Issei was on top of a terrace, running towards the end of the building, taking a huge leap towards the roof of another building he had in mind. Being able to cross without problems, rolling on the floor to cushion the fall, he still immediately regained his composure and continued on his way, doing the same process over and over again, with the goal of heading towards Phoenix. As for the issue of the promotion of Riser's pawns, he wasn't that worried. He already had several spirits guarding the entire northern area so that they would be unable to cross it. Issei. I'll finish you off, Phoenix, he thought determinedly, clenching his fists tightly. Chapter 6. Rating Game Part 1. Good morning, afternoon or night depending on when you're reading this. Before starting with this chapter, I'll introduce you to Riser's pieces. Maybe most of you already know them either from watching the anime or other DxD fanfics, but I'm doing this for those who don't know who they are or don't remember them. And without anything else to say, I introduce you to Riser's entire entourage. Queen Peace, Baluna. Bishop Peace, Mihi. Bishop Peace, Ravel Phoenix. Power Peace, Isabella. Power Peace, Shulin. Horse Peace, S. Iris. Horse Peace, Carloman. Pawn Peace, Burent. Pawn Peace, Marion. Pawn Peace, Sharia. Pawn Peace, Look. Pawn Peace, Nai. Pawn Peace, Lee. Pawn Peace, Meru. Pawn Peace, Kira. But this done, I'll stop bothering you and without further ado, enjoy this chapter. Author's POV. We found ourselves in a completely black space, free of all possible light and noise. However, in that place there was a small source of light, which illuminated a completely wounded and exhausted Issei, standing there without knowing what to do. His face, arms, hands and even his shirt were stained with a large amount of blood, not only his own, but also that of his enemies. However, the brunette could hear the heartbeats of two people who were behind him, so without wasting time he decided to turn around. But when he did and managed to smell both people, a great feeling of denial flooded his entire body, heart and even his own soul, while his eyes became glassy, implying that he was about to cry. The reason he suddenly became like that was because he realized that the people in front of him were Matt Murdock and Karen Page themselves. The people who helped him cope with what he suffered at the hands of his biological family and friends, and who over time he began to consider his own parents. Several minutes ago. Currently we can see how each and every one of the wedding guests were in a kind of luxurious and elegant stance, watching the rating game of Issei against Riser and his entourage through various magic circles. But being all together on a balcony, we can see the leaders along with their companions sitting there, although there were also the Gremory and Phoenix patriarchs, along with the entourages of Sona, Riaz and the adult Haidu. However, almost the majority of those present did not pay even the slightest attention to the ranking game, while others wanted to know what the human was capable of doing. But those who paid the most attention to the game were the Haidu and Gremory families, but Azazel looked at Rainer, because the brunette seemed to be upset about something. Azazel. Is something wrong, Rainer? I notice you're upset, he asked curiously without taking his eyes off the rating game. Rainer. I don't understand. How can that kid not notice how inferior he is to Riser Phoenix and his nobility? I don't know if he's very brave, very stupid or just looking to get killed, she commented irritated, unable to understand the brown-haired boy's way of thinking. Azazel. Sigh, I don't know. The only thing that comes to mind is that Issei reminds me of some soldiers I fought with in the war. I guess you all see the same thing, right? He commented insightfully, shifting his gaze towards his fellow officers. They weren't the only ones though, as the Gremory and Phoenix patriarchs also became serious upon hearing the word war, having recalled the lives they lost and took back then. Confusing and raising questions in the Haidu patriarchs and the young people present. Gabriel. What do you mean by that, Azazel? He questioned with a stern expression, observing his fallen brother, until Michael placed his hand on the Seraph's shoulder, getting him to stop looking at Azazel in a bad way. Michael. Don't you think it's too early to consider young Issei a soldier, Azazel? He asked with some seriousness in his tone, to which the governor of the fallen angels shrugged. Azazel. I don't know, I'm just saying, he said nonchalantly, but looking sideways at Serziches as if he was judging him. Followed by that, he turned his gaze to a random direction. Azazel. Although I called an expert for that. He should be arriving soon, he commented calmly, causing everyone to wonder who that friend was, until the doors of the box opened. Oh, so there were brats from the factions in here, commented a male voice that caught everyone's attention. Standing behind Grafia was an elderly man with long gray hair and a matching beard, a chainless gold and white monocle covering his left eye. His attire consisted of a short blue robe, with a gold lining on the top and bottom of the collar. Along with the old man, there was a beautiful young woman with long, straight silver hair and blue eyes. Her clothing consisted of a simple gray business suit, and as an extra fact, her measurements were B96W61H89. Azazel. Just in time. I appreciate you showing up, old man, he greeted in a friendly manner with a smile adorning his face. On the other hand, everyone present stood up from their seats. All. Welcome, Lord Odin. The vast majority greeted respectfully, some remained calm, while others were nervous about the presence of the supreme Norse god. Odin. You should be like them, Raven, he commented as he entered the room with his companion. At the same time, maids entered with 2 chairs, which they placed near Azazel. Azazel. Even though we have known each other for centuries, he expressed carefree without erasing his smile, making Odin sigh. Odin. She is my bodyguard, Roswis, he introduced, pointing his thumb at the aforementioned, who simply bowed. Roswis. Nice to meet you, she said respectfully as she stood up straight. Azazel. Come on, the fight hasn't started yet. So I'll keep you all updated as soon as possible, he said in a friendly manner, and without further ado, Odin and Roswis sat down near Azazel. In the dimension. Right now we will focus on Riser, who was surrounded by his protective pieces, moving in the area that appeared when they were transported to the dimension. The Phoenix entourage only walked in a straight line for at least 10 minutes, until they found 2 paths, one that led them to the left and the other to the right. While Riser was in charge of which path to choose, the women and girls in his entourage were in charge of being alert in case they happened to see the masked man somewhere in the city by pure chance or luck. Riser. Ravel, you will be in charge of going down the right path. Meru, Kira, Burant, Sharia, Shui and Karlaman accompany her. The others will stay with me. We will go to the left, but first, he said, and then gave each of his pieces a small pink orb, which were nothing more than magical communicators. Riser. Before we separate, if any of you see the human, seriously injure him and capture him, but don't take him out of the game, understood?" He said asked in a serious and threatening tone towards each of his pieces, including Ravel, after they had put on their communicators. All. Understood Riser-sama Ani-sama they all said with a firm tone, but Ravel was the one who said Ani-sama. In order not to waste any more time, Riser's entourage split into two groups, each going their own way in search of Issei, although we will continue to focus on Riser, along with the women who were with him, who the latter could be somewhat stunned by the enormous amount of buildings and shops there were, and if what they were in was a small part of the city. They did not want to imagine it as a whole. "Ubeluna. Are you sure you left your sister alone?" Riser-sama he said asked in a respectful but somewhat curious tone towards his king. "Riser. Ravel knows how to defend herself and she's not alone. That human has no chance of defeating us," he said with an arrogant and confident tone, while his queen didn't say anything and just nodded with a smile on her face. They continued walking straight through the area they were in until they stopped after hearing the loud noise of metal hitting something, causing Riser and his pieces to look at the place where that noise came from. But they didn't see anything, and they didn't hear that noise from before again, the only thing they saw were the light poles that illuminated a path that led them into the fall city of Kuo. "Riser. Marion, may he go up and try to locate the north so that the others can promote to queen, we will take this path," he said in an authoritative tone, receiving a nod from his bishop and pawn, who wasted no time and spread their wings and then flew away. By the time they left, Riser began to enter the city without any fear whatsoever. He was not afraid of Issei, and if he was, why would a simple and pathetic human like Issei be afraid of him? He is Riser Phoenix from one of the most important and powerful clans in the underworld, being a high-class demon and future Phoenix patriarch. What can a human do against someone like him? Being followed by their pieces that were put on guard, they walked through that part of the city without realizing that someone was following them, much more stealthy than a cat. He saw them as if he were an eagle and hid in the shadows, as if he were a part of it. But without expecting it, Ubeluna got a little scare when she heard a voice calling her, it being none other than Mihi who contacted her through her communicator. "Ubeluna Mihi, what is it that they have?" she said asked curiously, but somewhat embarrassed by the little outburst she had. "Ubeluna. Are you sure it's not a barrier?" Or she didn't finish speaking, since Mihi interrupted her, causing the purple-haired girl to be surprised to hear what the bishop of the entourage said. "Riser. What's wrong Ubeluna?" he said asked in a serious and slightly confused tone, noticing the expression his queen had put on. "Ubeluna. Mihi and Marion managed to locate the north, but they say that something is not letting them cross," she said, confusing her king and her entourage companions, although Riser was going to talk to Mihi. However, before he could touch his communicator, something hit the phoenix's hand. It was nothing more than a metal bar. The demons, seeing this, quickly surrounded their king to protect him, trying to look for the person responsible for throwing the bar. Ubeluna went to see how Riser was doing, realizing that he only had a simple bruise on his backhand, nothing serious. But her eyes ended up focusing on the metal bar, which she decided to grab, being surprised to find out that it was impregnated with magic, informing Riser and her friends, making the latter surprised by that although the blonde only formed a small smile. "Riser. I suppose it was you who threw this bar at me, right?" "Human," he said asked looking around, trying to locate Issei not only in the streets, but also inside or on top of buildings, as much as his vision would allow. "Riser. However, this won't do you any good. You won't achieve anything if you're hiding, all you're doing is delaying your great humiliating and inevitable defeat," he said with an arrogant tone, but out of nowhere, the light bulb of a light pole breaks out of nowhere. That confused the demons a little, but they quickly turned their gaze towards a post when they saw how the light on it broke out of nowhere, although the sound of a light breaking behind them made them turn around. And they stayed like that for a little while, until all the lights on all the light posts on that street were broken, being almost in darkness if it weren't for the sky that illuminated the place. However, everyone heard the same noise as before again, the sound of metal hitting something. That noise came from an alley a block away where Riser and his pieces were. After a few seconds, Issei came out of that alley, holding a metal bar in his right hand, being responsible for having made the previous noises, in addition to having hurt Riser's hand and having broken all the lights that illuminated the avenue. Standing in the middle of the street without saying anything, Issei revealed that he was wearing an armored vest, something he didn't have before, as well as a gun and a knife which were inside their respective holsters hanging from a belt that he also didn't wear before. Without saying a single word or letter, the masked man entered a battle pose ready to fight, being copied by the pawns, Rook and Riser's knight who were also prepared to fight. A great hostile and tense atmosphere was present in that part of the dimension, something that Issei noticed, but in the same way he was willing to go fight against all of them, and vice versa. However, when the brown-haired boy was going towards them out of nowhere, he turned around and started running away from there, taking the path on the right the moment he reached the end of the block. Of course, that left Riser's maids and Riser himself bewildered, although the latter was quite upset by what Issei had done. Riser. Go for him now, he exclaimed in an annoyed and authoritative manner, pointing towards where Issei went, causing his pieces to regain their composure, and without wasting any more time they went after the masked man. Riser. You don't need to go, Yubaluna, let them take care of it, he said in a somewhat serious tone, to which his queen didn't say anything and just approached him. Meanwhile, with the demons chasing Issei, they were just taking the right path at the end of the block as the aforementioned had done, but they saw how the entire street was empty. However, when they were almost at the end of the block they managed to hear something on the right path, so they looked out seeing how Issei was destroying the light bulbs by throwing the metal bar he had in his hand, which returned to him as if by magic. But when they were going to launch themselves at him, the brown-haired boy began to run away from there, and once he was at the end of the avenue, he took the path that was on his left, being followed by the demon women who upon reaching the end of the avenue, and having taken the path on the left. They saw how Issei was doing the same as before, and then running away again taking the path on his left the moment he reached the end of the avenue. Without wasting any time, the 5 devils went after the masked man taking the same path that the aforementioned took previously, but without having expected it, they found the street empty. There was no trace of Issei, they even went to the end of the block, but he was not around any of the 4 sides, until they all managed to feel a strange and chilling sensation on their backs, causing them to turn around and find Issei who was 2 blocks away from them and holding an FN mini-me machine gun in his arms. Issei. I don't want to hurt you, so I will kindly ask you to withdraw from this fight, my only target is Riser Phoenix and no one else, he exclaimed with a serious tone, pointing his gun towards the demon women and putting the index finger of his right hand on the trigger. Isabella. You're a very sweet boy, are you going to take us out to dinner after this or what? I also advise you to be careful, that's a very big weapon for someone like you, she exclaimed in a mocking tone, making her companions laugh. Issei. No, the truth is that I don't plan on doing that, besides I don't have time to do that kind of things, besides, I prefer to spend my money on useful things like this beauty, and I appreciate the concern, but I am more than capable of using it, he exclaimed with a somewhat amused tone, while the women felt somewhat offended by what he said. Look. I'm sure you say that because you have that ridiculous thing covering your eyes, if you took that off and saw us, I'm sure you would be dying to take us on a date, plus we are much more useful than that thing you have in your arms, she exclaimed with an annoyed and somewhat offended tone, but Issei shook his head disinterestedly. Issei. Even if I could see them, I would still prefer to spend my money on weapons and ammunition, he exclaimed with a firm and confident tone, which confused the demons a little. Lee. What do you mean by even if I could see them? You say it as if I were blind, Naya, I exclaimed asked with a confused tone, making Issei sigh in an irritated and tired manner. Issei. I said it because I am and I really am blind, even if it doesn't seem like it, he exclaimed with a serious and somewhat irritated tone, because he was getting tired of repeating that he was blind, although the demons only looked at each other. Cirrus. Listen carefully, kid, we won't do anything to you, but you, on the other hand, must come with us without putting up a fight, okay? If you do, perhaps Riser-sama will have the compassion and kindness to not hurt you too much, he exclaimed in a firm tone, to which Issei formed a small mocking smile. Issei. And they said that I was the sweet one. I'm sorry but I'm not going to do it, I got myself into this, and there's no turning back, not for me, not for you and not for your king either, so from now on you are all my enemies, he exclaimed in a serious tone, pulling the trigger of the gun, once causing the first bullet to come out which went towards Isabella's face. Isabella. Human weapons don't work on us, she didn't finish speaking, because the projectile that was headed towards her grazed her right cheek, making a small cut. That left Isabella bewildered and incredulous as well as her companions, the tower only touched her cheek where she had the cut and then saw how there was blood on her fingers, without saying anything she just looked at Issei, who was pointing the FN at her. Issei. Were you saying something? He exclaimed asked with a serious tone, to pull the trigger of the machine gun again, maintaining an adequate posture, shooting the 5 demons between small bursts to prevent the recoil of the weapon from playing against him. Having no alternative, the demons quickly went to the building on their left, taking cover from the gunfire, realizing and feeling the enormous imminent danger if they were to receive any of those projectiles. Nai. I would like to know where you got that machine gun, you didn't have it when we were in the chapel, Naya, she exclaimed in an annoyed tone, because the noise of the shots made it difficult to hear her and the others well. Lee. That human must know something about magic and could have taken it out of a pocket dimension and impregnated the bullets with magic, Naya, she exclaimed, answering the doubt that her twin had. Cirrus. That makes sense, since the metal bar that hurt Riser-sama's hand was also impregnated with magic, he exclaimed, stepping back a little because a bullet bounced near his leg. Cirrus. And the worst of all is that he knows where we are and where to shoot. He will undoubtedly give us a lot of problems, and for that reason we must finish him as quickly as we can, before he manages to take any of us out of the game," he exclaimed with a somewhat angry tone, believing that Issei lied to them that he was blind. They remained covered while Issei continued to shoot at him, although Mira stood on the edge of the wall he was taking cover behind, only to create a powerful magic circle and send it towards the street, being destroyed in a few seconds by the magic bullets from the machine gun. "Look. It seems that the magic circles won't work as cover," she exclaimed in a somewhat serious tone, stepping back a little and informing her friends, however they stopped hearing the shots. "Isabella. I guess that must be our signal to attack," she said when she no longer heard the machine gun shots, realizing that the brunette was busy reloading his weapon, something she was going to take advantage of. However, when the tower came out of cover, several shots were heard, which surprised Isabella because she managed to see a large number of bullets heading towards her, but before anything could happen to her, Cirrus grabbed the brunette by her jacket and with great force, threw her to the ground, then threw herself down as well, having managed to dodge the projectiles. "Isabella. Thanks for that, Cirrus. For a moment I thought I was about to be kicked out," she said with a grateful tone, but also sad, because it would be a huge shame if she was kicked out of the raiding game without having done anything. "Cirrus. That doesn't matter, but be more careful next time. This human doesn't only have that weapon," he said in a serious tone, and using the reflection of his sword, seeing how Issei was 2 blocks away, on the corner on the right side of the sidewalk shooting at them with an MP5. Now we will move on to Isay, who was only shooting at the demons, running out of bullets a few seconds later, but Ryu handed him another MP5 with ammunition, which the brown-haired boy grabbed and gave the spirit the weapon he had in his hand. While on the other side of the street, there were 2 spirits of light who were reloading the machine gun. "Issei. Are they coming here, Ryu?" he asked curiously, without stopping shooting at the demons. "Ryu. That's right, but they're a few blocks away from here, and at the pace they're going, they'll arrive in about 5 minutes, 7 at most," he said, reloading the MP5 that Issei had given him earlier, then noticing that the spirits of light were making several signs to them, implying that they had just reloaded the weapon. "Ryu. They finished reloading the FN, I had to pick it up, I'll cover you," he said, to which Issei nodded and went to the other side of the street while Ryu took charge of shooting the demons. "Issei. I'm going to speed this up a bit, tell the others to get ready," he said, receiving the FN from the spirits, while Ryu stopped shooting to just put the 2 MP5s in a bag, in which there were 2 more weapons. "Ryu. Understood, boss," he said with a somewhat mocking tone, grabbing the bag and leaving the place along with the 2 spirits of light. Having his gun back in his hands, Issei shot at the demons again as he approached where they were, something they noticed because the angle of the bullets did not match before. "Cirrus. Girls, I need you to pay attention to me. Nai, Lee, Isabella, I need you to get on some buildings and watch the human, but if he tries to escape, I want you to inform me. Look, you go around this block and stay on a corner, while you're at it, contact Ravel-sama and tell them our location. Have them divide into 3 groups of 2 and come from those 3 paths. When the human is at that crossroads or passes it, together we can flank him from all directions without him having a chance of escaping," she said in a serious and authoritative tone, receiving a nod from her friends who understood her plan. "Cirrus. I will distract him by going from the front," he said in a determined tone, wielding his sword and then giving a deep sigh. "Cirrus. Let's do it now," he exclaimed in a serious tone, to which the tower and both pawns released their wings and flew away upwards, while Mira ran away from there going towards the end of the avenue, taking the path on her right and then starting to contact Ravel through her communicator. Taking a breath in courage, Cirrus tightly gripped her sword to only get out of her cover, using her weapon as a shield to defend herself from the projectiles, but the swordswoman did not stay still and proceeded to move forward, quickly heading towards a kiosk using it as cover. Having done that, Cirrus saw a clothing store on the right side of the sidewalk, so using her sword as a shield again, the swordswoman quickly went towards that store taking cover. To then use her sword as a shield again, going this time towards a building on the left side of the sidewalk, opening it suddenly and taking cover behind a door, noticing how Issei was getting closer and closer. Left with no alternative, the Phoenix Knight did this process more than 5 times until she almost reached the end of the block, managing to notice how the masked man had passed the crossroads, but was standing motionless on the corner of a restaurant that was on the left side of the sidewalk, while she was hidden in a low-quality appliance store, but on the same sidewalk as the brown-haired man. "Cirrus. Girls, is the human still in that corner?" he exclaimed, contacting Nai, Lee, Isabella and Mira, looking at the roofs of the buildings in case he saw the Nakamata sisters or the tower. "Lee. I can't see him since there's an umbrella covering him. But the shots are definitely coming from there, Naya," she exclaimed with a confident tone, leaning out as much as she could from the rooftop with the help of her sister to try to see Issei, but nothing. "Isabella. I can't see him directly either because there's a tree blocking my view, but I have no doubt that he's there, she also exclaimed in a confident tone, managing to see Issei's pants and sneakers, and she was also attentive at all times in case he managed to escape. Cirrus. Look, did you do what I said? He said, asked, contacting the blue-haired pawn, being the only one who didn't answer him until now. Look. That's right, now I'm with Meru and Kira going down the path on their left, Shuri and Burant are coming from the middle behind the human, Carlaman and Shulin are on the path to their right, and Ravel Sama will arrive from heaven to watch from there, he said in a confident tone, making Cirrus smile in victory. Cirrus. You lost, human, she said in a confident tone, that her enemy was currently being beaten by her friends. A machine gun shot stopped, causing Cirrus to leave the store and head towards the corner, where Issei was surely receiving a great beating from his friends. But when he arrived, he was surprised to find that the FN was mounted on a tripod, having a huge strip of bullets which continued until reaching a large bag on the floor, and as if that were not enough, there was a mannequin very close to the machine gun, wearing the same pants and sneakers as Issei. Cirrus. That bastard, did he escape? He said, asked in an annoyed and somewhat angry tone, cutting off the mannequin's head out of anger. After doing that, Nai, Lee and Isabella got off the buildings where they were meeting with their companions, even Ravel, who was in the sky, landed to join them. Ravel. Girls, how are you? And where is the human? He said, asked, looking at Cirrus, Isabella and his brother's 3 pawns. Isabella. We are fine, Ravel Sama, but it seems that the human escaped without us noticing, she said with an annoyed tone, but somewhat embarrassed since she only had one job to do and failed. Ravel. Okay, that doesn't matter, we better go back to Oni-sama and tell him everything we know, plus we have to go north for you to be promoted to queen, she said in an authoritative tone, looking sideways at each of the pawns until. What are you all doing here together? She said in a curious tone, a girl's voice, as everyone looked up at the sky, seeing Marion and Mihi, who landed near them. Nai. Shouldn't you guys be trying to find a way to get into our enemy's zone? Naya, he said, asked with a confused tone, seeing Marion and Mihi. Marion. About that, none of us will be able to promote, she said with a serious and somewhat disappointed tone, taking all her classmates by surprise. Burant. What do you mean by that? Marion, she said, asked with a bewildered tone, since what her friend said seemed illogical and impossible. Mihi. What you heard, Marion and I have tried to do everything to get through and for her to get promoted, but we couldn't do anything. It's like there's something that's not letting us get through the north, she said in a confident tone, agreeing with her entourage partner. Shulin. Are you sure it's not a barrier, or did you get confused with the boundaries of the arena? She said, asked in a somewhat serious tone, making Mihi upset. Mihi. Don't treat us like we're newbies in magic or raiding games, Shulin. We're pretty sure that the place we were in was the north and that there was no barrier protecting the place, she said in an annoyed tone, but maintaining a calm attitude. Ravel. If that's true, this is very strange and somewhat problematic, he said in a serious tone, trying to communicate with his brother. Cirrus. By the way, what are you doing here? I don't remember asking Mira to contact you, or did you do it? She said, asked, somewhat confused, looking at her entourage companions who denied what she asked. Marion. We were following a black figure that led us here, we thought it was the human, and that you managed to catch him, she said, to which Mihi nodded in confirmation of what she said. Something was not right, and that is something that they all sensed, but preferred not to say anything. Ravel was trying to contact her older brother, her queen, but no one answered. Until out of nowhere, the sound of a cell phone ringing alarmed everyone, who began to look around for the damn device. Finding it on top of the bag of bullets, which almost everyone realized was that the device was not there before, but slowly and carefully approaching the cell phone, Cirrus went to grab said device, and once she had it in her hands, she answered the call. Issei. Play it loud, was what the swordswoman heard, to which she chose to do what the masked man asked. Issei. You know, if all of you were men, I wouldn't hesitate for a single second, and I would finish you off without even thinking about it, and even if it doesn't seem like it, and it's up to you whether you believe me or not, but I don't want to hurt you. I have codes, and one of those codes is, don't touch even a single hair on a woman, no matter how slutty she is or seems to be, he said in a serious but sincere tone on the other end of the phone, while the demons just paid attention. Issei. However, I see myself and am forced to swallow that code every time I have to face women like you, since I do not intend to die without first putting up a fight, so you can rest assured that I will not hesitate to finish you off, even if it means shooting you in the head, he said in a firm and determined tone, cutting off the call. Not knowing what to do or say, all the women and girls were about to leave that place to inform Riser of everything, but before they could take a single step away, a huge explosion sent them all flying, while inside a building Issei saw what happened from a window, and having a cell phone in hand, being the one responsible for having caused the explosion. But in order not to waste any more time, the brown-haired boy decided to put his scarf over his face and then grabbed 2 wooden clubs that were on a table, proceeding to leave the room and the building he was in. Chapter 7. Rating Game Part 2. Authors POV. We watched as Issei had already left the building he was hiding in before he turned his sight towards the pieces of riser who were rising from the ground being somewhat dirty and with their clothes a little burned by the explosion. Although for having stood there he was seen by the demons, so without wasting time Issei began to run as fast as he could being chased by the demons, some being upset and others angry. However, to the surprise of everyone except Cirrus, Isabella, Mira, Nai and Lee, saw how Issei had formed a magic circle throwing a spell at them, which Mihi was able to easily repel using a protection enchantment, not only having protected herself, but also her friends. But they all could notice how the spell that the masked man threw at them was not as powerful as they thought, besides being basic, making them realize that the brown-haired man was not a magician type, or that the magic he used was not the right one. And speaking of the brown-haired man, he kept running while continuing to throw spell after spell left and right, despite the fact that Mihi repelled them with ease, until he ended up running out of enough magic to cast another enchantment. Something that somewhat annoyed him a little, but he continued running without looking back until he could perceive something heading towards him, so by pure instinct the masked man threw himself on the sidewalk having dodged a spell. Managing to hear a large and powerful explosion in the distance along with a building collapsing, realizing that he was going to have a pretty bad time if he were to receive that or any other spell directly. "Get up, Issei, it's not time for breaks," replied a spirit of light, helping the brown-haired boy get up from the ground. "Issei. The building that was destroyed, were they there?" he said asked, running again, being followed by the spirit and hunted by the demons. "That's right, it will take them a few minutes to change position and prepare, therefore you will have to change your plan," he replied, making Issei not very happy to hear that. "But I advise you to enter the building that is at the end of this block on the right, all the doors and windows are open, and there are spirits waiting for you. I know very well that something will occur to you when you arrive," he said with a confident tone, and giving the directions to the brown-haired boy, which he could see. "Issei. I appreciate the information, Josh, you can leave and go help them," he expressed gratefully, receiving a nod from the aforementioned who only fainted. After a few short minutes, Issei managed to reach the end of the avenue and took the path on the right, going to the corner and meeting a spirit of darkness who guided him into the building that Josh spoke of, being nothing more than a very poor quality hotel with a total of 12 floors. Although a few seconds after Issei entered the building, the women and devil girls reached the end of the block, managing to see the hotel door open, so without wasting time they entered the place. 7 headed towards the upper floors while the other 7 stayed on the first floors to check the houses in case the masked man hid in one of them. We have Carloman, Shulin, Mihi, Sharia, Mira, Maru and Kira on the upper floors, while Isabella, Ravel, Cirrus, Marion, Burant, Nai and Lee were on the lower floors. But we will focus on the first ones mentioned above, who were on the 7th floor, because they had the duty of checking from the 7th to the 12th floor, while their other companions checked the 1st to the 6th floor. But despite having searched all the rooms on the 7th floor carefully, they could not find a trace of the masked man, so they opted to go directly to the 8th floor using the stairs. Once there, they only separated in a group of 2, leaving Shulin alone. Leaving that aside, the demons only inspected each room again carefully, having discovered nothing. So they went up to the 9th floor also finding nothing, and they did that successively until they had arrived and checked all the rooms on the 12th floor, not being able to find anything, not even a small trace of Issei, so they decided to join together. "Sharia. Do you think he could be on the roof?" he said asked in a doubtful tone, leaving the roof to be checked. "Look, it's most likely, but we should be careful, he may be waiting for us with something prepared," he said in a serious tone, realizing that the masked man was not to be taken lightly. "Parliament. I will inform Ravel Sama about going to the roof together, I am sure that she and the others will have finished checking the floors below," she said, and was about to contact her king's younger sister, but Shulin stopped her. "Shulin. Don't do it, Carloman," she said in a serious tone, disconcerting and generating questions in her companions. "Maru. What do you mean by that, Shulin-san?" asked with a confused tone, one of the twin Lawless. "Shulin. If we gather either on the stairs or in the hallways, we'll be limited to using our abilities and possibly hurting each other, since we entered this building we're at a disadvantage. Also, as Mira said, it's likely that the human has something planned to finish us all off. And I don't think we met by coincidence or luck," she said in a serious tone, making her companions realize that and agree with her. With that in mind, they were all going to go down to meet up with their companions and leave the building, keeping in mind to create a contingency plan to finish off the masked man, but before they could leave the hallway, suddenly the lights began to turn on and off, as if nothing had happened until they finally went out. Clearly the demons ignored that because they thought it was a problem with the hotel, however a noise at the end of the hallway made them stop, then focus their sight towards where the noise came from, seeing absolutely nothing and no one either. Putting themselves on guard and walking slowly, the seven together proceeded to head towards the place where the noise they heard originated, although from a house that was behind them, a black silhouette came out and entered the house that was in front, something that was noticed and seen by Kira. Kira. Girls, I saw someone pass by there a moment ago, she whispered alarmingly and pointed to the room where she saw that silhouette enter, drawing the attention of her companions who quickly turned around and looked where the loli was pointing. However, the moment they turned around, they could all feel someone passing behind them, so they quickly turned around, finding nothing. Standing still and looking to both sides of the hallway, the demons were waiting for that figure or figures to appear again, but so far nothing happened. Parliament. Look, Kira and Mary, you guys go check those rooms. Sharia, Shulin and Mihi with me, she whispered authoritatively, receiving a nod from her comrades. Without saying anything else, they separated and proceeded to check the houses, still staying on guard in case something happened. While her friends were ahead of her, Sharia peeked her head into one of the rooms to her right because she thought she saw something moving, but in the house on the left side of the farmhand, someone suddenly came out and tackled her. Rafia. A pawn of Riser Sama is leaving the game, she announced, exclaimed, causing more than one person to be surprised to hear that. Being surprised by the news, Carloman, Shulin and Mihi turned to look behind them, finding that Sharia was missing, while Mira and both Lawless left the room in which the three of them were together, also looking surprised by the announcement they heard. But they did not waste time and began to search for the address where their partner could have been defeated, not having found anything after entering room 166, where they could find some drops of blood, implying that Sharia was defeated there. Although they had not expected it, the door of the house they were in slammed shut, so they decided to leave quickly. When they did, they began to walk down the hallway, seeing how the lights turned on and off again with more intensity than before, and how the doors of all the rooms opened and closed suddenly, as if all of this had been taken from some kind of cheap horror movie. Rafia. A pawn of Riser Sama is leaving the game, she suddenly announced, exclaimed, surprising the demons again. The demons didn't wait and turned to look behind them in search of who was missing, realizing that Mira was not with them, which somewhat angered them a little, although they chose to gather together looking at both sides of the hallway, waiting for the masked man to make an appearance. And as if he could read his thoughts or had realized his objective, at the end of the hallway with a window there, Issei came out of a room wielding his batons in both hands, being seen by Carloman and Shulin. Carloman. Meru, Kira, Mihi in position, she exclaimed authoritatively towards her companions, who turned to see their opponent. Without hesitating for a single second, Carloman unsheathed her sword and immersed it in fire, Shulin also enveloped her fists and feet in fire, Meru and Kira lit their chainsaws, and Mihi created several magic circles, so that everyone except the bishop got into a battle stance. Issei, for his part, responded in the same way, getting into a battle stance, tightly wielding his two weapons, focusing a little magic on them, and most of it on his fists, sharpening his senses and limiting himself to being on the defensive, as well as being completely attentive to the instructions that the spirits in the hallway were going to give him. The place just fell silent, neither side dared to say anything, until the first to take the initiative were the demons, who launched themselves against the masked man, who did the same, going towards them at a slow pace, using one of his batons to break a light bulb. Ready to strike first, Carloman was about to strike at an inclined slash, but when she did, she didn't wait for Issei to slide across the ground beneath her and then be knocked down by him due to a foot sweep. But the moment Issei tried to get up, Shulin attacked him with a fire kick. The brunette managed to cover himself with his arms in the last seconds, although he felt great pain at the moment he did that. Shulin was ready to give Issei another kick, but in doing so her foot ended up going through a wall, giving the brunette enough time to dodge it and get up, giving a high kick to the tower which she dodged by crouching, but Issei didn't fall short and attacked her with his batons, being dodged and blocked by the demon. Realizing that he had no other alternative, Issei opted to tackle Shulin, causing them both to fall to the ground. However, the masked man wasted no time and quickly crouched on top of the tower and began to hit it hard with his batons in different parts of its body. But suddenly, Issei dropped on top of Shulin, causing his face to be sandwiched between Rook's breasts, having dodged a sword slash courtesy of Carloman and a chainsaw slash courtesy of Meru. But without wasting any time, Issei crouched down again, hitting Meru's legs with his right female club, managing to knock her to the ground. To then get out from on top of the tower and quickly stand against the wall, having dodged another cut from the knight, who stopped at the last moment because she was about to hurt a Shulin, embarrassed and indignant at what Issei had done, although it could be noticed how the aforementioned cheeks were a deep red color. Although taking advantage of the knight's distraction, Issei dropped his batons to just throw himself at Carloman, slamming her against the wall, then hitting her in the face and forcefully slamming her head against the wall. But the brunette quickly dodged a blow from Shulin, however Kira appeared behind him making a deep cut on the back of his left knee, and despite that the loli received a strong blow to the face, courtesy of Issei who blocked an attack from the tower, then grabbed her by the arm and proceeded to throw her to the ground. Hearing someone approaching him, Issei stepped aside at the last second, having dodged a direct attack from Meru, to which the loli suddenly turned around and tried to cut the masked man, being dodged by him, retreating as quickly as possible to avoid contact with the pawn's chainsaw. However, the wound on his leg ended up playing against him, causing him to accidentally fall, which Meru took advantage of by throwing herself on top of the brunette in order to cut his chest. Which he was able to do, beginning to tear apart the armored vest he was wearing, but just when the loli noticed that she had cut Issei's skin, he extended his left hand, receiving a truncheon courtesy of a spirit, and with that he hit Meru's neck hard, managing to knock her unconscious, and then removing the chainsaw from him. Rafia. Another of Riser-sama's pawns is leaving the game, she announced, exclaimed, as Meru's body began to disappear into particles of light. Despite the enormous pain he felt in his leg, Issei still got up from the ground to continue fighting, although as he did so, Carloman calmly passed by his right side, making several cuts in different parts of his body in the blink of an eye, including his chest and abdomen, having pierced the armored vest as if it were nothing. A large amount of blood began to come out of the masked man's body, and even though they were not very deep he could perfectly feel the pain, but going quickly and directly towards him, Shulin attacked the masked man with a knee to his stomach and then gave him a strong blow to the aforementioned man's private parts. Issei. Face ho, he whispered weakly, feeling a horrible pain in his crotch, being able to luckily breathe, being unable to avoid rubbing them to try to relieve the pain a little. Shulin. You deserve it for putting your face on my breasts, she said with an angry tone, but with a touch of shame. Issei. Yes, you're right, I deserve it, he said, still with that weak tone but also embarrassed, since he couldn't forget the softness and texture of the tower's breasts. However, with his best speed, Issei managed to knock down Shulin with a kick to his feet, then throw his baton against a wall, causing it to bounce and hit Carloman in the face, stunning her a little, while the baton bounced off another wall heading towards Issei, to which he grabbed it before it hit him too. Although an annoyed Kira threw herself at Issei trying to make some cuts, something she barely managed to do since the aforementioned dodged them with difficulty due to the pain he felt and the wound on his leg. Until out of nowhere, Issei entered a room throwing himself there as if nothing happened, something that took the loli by surprise, who ended up passing by for having tried to attack the masked man directly. Meanwhile, Carloman and Shulin didn't waste any time and quickly went to the house where Issei had entered, but when they were close the door slammed shut, not being able to enter for anything in the world, so without hesitation, Shulin kicked the door down. But when they both entered the room, they were surprised not to see the masked man anywhere, so they set out to check under the bed, in the bathroom, and even split the closet in two, but nothing. Issei had disappeared as if by magic, until Carloman could notice blood on the window frame in the room. Rafiamahi. A pawn of Riser-sama is leaving the game. Shulin, Carloman, is here, both exclaimed almost at the same time, taking the aforementioned by surprise, who quickly left the house. Arriving just in time to see how the masked man was fighting with Mihi at the end of the hallway, although the latter was being beaten by Issei because he had no knowledge of hand-to-hand combat. In just a few seconds, the knight and the rook arrived at the end of the hallway about to attack the brunette, but he was faster, grabbing Mihi by the neck and drawing his gun, putting it to the bishop's head. Issei. Back off, if you don't I'll shoot you, he said threateningly, while lowering the gun's hammer and putting his index finger on the trigger. With no other choice, both demons reluctantly backed away, and Issei also backed away, heading towards the stairs to leave. The door opened thanks to a spirit, but in doing so, he revealed the other pieces of Riser. They reacted quickly and were about to attack the brunette, but they all noticed the gun that was on their friend's head. This is the gun that Issei has, it's a crappy 92 FS. Issei. It goes for you too, back off or I'll shoot, he said with a serious and firm tone, with the intention of pulling the trigger. Ravel. Wait, don't do it, he said, exclaimed in an alarming manner, holding both his hands out in a stop sign. Ravel. We will do what you ask, we will back off, he said with a sincere and authoritative tone, the latter he said to his brother's pieces, who began to back off reluctantly. While they were going down the stairs, Issei did the same without even taking his finger off the trigger and being aware of what they could do. However, the brunette suddenly threw Mihi down the stairs, shooting her about 3 times, then shooting the others, and after that he returned to the 12th floor. Meeting up with Carloman and Shulin, he shot at both of them with his remaining bullets until they ran out, not having done anything to them, even though several minutes ago the FN bullets were able to at least make a cut on Isabella's cheek. Carloman. You should have run away, human, she said in a serious tone, going to attack the brown-haired boy directly. giving him a cut which Issei dodged, but he couldn't dodge a blow to his face courtesy of Shulin, which made him step back until he was against the wall, although he quickly had to move to the side evading Carloman's sword, causing the knight's weapon to get stuck in the wall. Using that to his advantage, Issei hit the knight's head with the hilt of his gun, making her drop her sword and his gun. Then he pulled Carloman out of her clothes and pushed her against Shulin, causing both of them to collide with each other, and without wasting time the brunette went straight towards them, jumping in the middle of their path. Something like this. They just give Carloman a flying kick causing her to fall with him to the ground, but Shulin was not affected by that and took advantage of the fact that Issei was on the ground to attack him, although when trying to step on him, he grabbed her foot using as much force as possible. However, the tower was far superior to the brown-haired boy in terms of strength, so he kicked Shulin's other foot, causing her to fall and hit her head hard against the floor. Although having her at his side, Issei did not hesitate for a second and began to elbow Shulin in the face several times, then get up rolling backwards, dodging an attack from Carloman, who was going to do it with a dagger she had in her hand. But Issei ended up receiving another blow thanks to a spirit, to which he took it and then threw it hard against the ground, causing it to bounce and hit the face of the knight, who had previously gotten up from the floor. Without hesitating for a single second, Issei threw himself at Carloman, tackling her and proceeding to hold her tightly by the neck, to which she tried to do everything possible to get out of the masked man's grip, but little by little she was losing air and with it her strength, until she was unconscious. Rafia. Riser Sama's horse is leaving the game, she announced, exclaimed, while Carloman was taken out of the raiding game. With only one left to defeat, the chestnut-haired boy struggled to get up from the ground, very tired and wounded, and the loss of blood was not helping him at all. Shulin, on the other hand, was also getting up from the ground, feeling a little tired and clearly feeling the damage that her king's opponent had caused her. By the time the two were standing, they approached until they were in front of each other and got into a battle pose, staying silent until the tower managed to hear the screams of their companions, who could not enter because of some spirits of light, so they only gave them words of encouragement to defeat the masked man. Shulin. You bastard, I must admit that you have some interesting tricks and skills, she said in a somewhat challenging tone, forming a small, defiant smile on her face. Issei. For your information, I have other tricks, but I don't think I can do them now. Shulin. For a pervert, you got my attention, she said honestly, still keeping that challenging smile and agreeing with Sharia. Because since they entered the building, they were all at a disadvantage. Issei. I needed to do that, I had no other way to dodge your companion's attacks. Although to be honest and with all due respect, you have a very soft front end, he said with a sincere tone and with his cheeks burning with embarrassment, referring to Shulin's breasts. Shulin. Pervert, she exclaimed in an embarrassed and indignant manner, quickly attacking the brown-haired boy who only limited himself to dodging the blows from the tower. Without further ado, both began their fight, having no restrictions or anyone to interrupt them, but to the tower's great surprise, it saw how Issei was maintaining a good pace despite his fatigue and injuries. Shulin. How can he keep moving? How is he still standing? She thought, asked herself, being surprised and confused, but not stopping attacking the brown-haired boy for a moment, who only dodged her blows. The tower decided to increase the speed of its attacks, putting pressure on and putting the masked man in a tight spot, although he made use of the narrow corridor, causing Shulin's kicks and punches to get stuck or go through the walls, giving the brown-haired man enough time to attack or dodge his attacks. It could be said that both were having a fair fight. Shulin kept attacking, and Issei kept moving, dodging all her blows, waiting for the right moments to counterattack. However, Issei knew very well that he had to finish off the tower as quickly as possible, before it finished him off. Heading into attack mode, Issei began to attack Shulin with punches and kicks that were somewhat slow, but charged with enormous force, managing to make the demon start to back away, but she still continued to attack him. Both made excessive use of their respective martial arts that they learned and practiced for a long time, until in a failed attack, Issei ended up passing by, something that Shulin used to his advantage, grabbing him by his vest and lifting him up ready to throw him to the floor. However, in a quick movement the brown-haired boy exchanged roles, tightly grabbing Shulin's arm, spinning in midair. Then proceeding to throw the tower to the ground. Climbing on top of her, the masked man began to hit her savagely in different parts of her body including her face, although the demon did not sit idly by and began to hit Issei's sides so that he would get off of her, but all the blows she gave did not stop the aforementioned for a single second. Feeling how he was slowly losing consciousness as well as his strength, Issei continued hitting Shulin without stopping until his fist ended up hitting the ground while the tower was fading into small part of Rafia. Riser Sama's tower is removed from the game. Exhaling exhaustedly and standing up with great difficulty, Issei could feel how some of his bones and ribs were fractured, so to speak, broken, and as if that were not enough, he felt like his arms, as well as his legs were heavy and shattered, and he did not forget the blood he lost and was losing now. "Here you go," said a spirit of darkness, passing him his clubs and the beretta, although the brown-haired man only grabbed the firearm. "Issei. Take those and let the others enter," he said in a weak tone, while holstering his gun. The spirit for his part nodded and then disappeared. A few seconds later Issei heard the footsteps of the other demonesses approaching, having them all ahead of him at the end of the hallway. Well, they looked at him realizing how hurt and tired he was, something they were going to use to their advantage to finish him off here and now. Although the masked man quickly turned around and started running, being chased by the demons, who realized that he had no way out to escape, the only way out was the window at the end of the hallway, which made them think that Issei did not have the courage to jump. However, they all ended up being wrong, because the brunette had jumped out the window without even hesitating. They all quickly looked out the window, but they only ended up piling up without even being able to see anything, until they settled down properly and managed to see how the brown-haired boy was walking with great difficulty, crossing the street and then entering an alley. They wondered how he could go down so quickly to the street, until they noticed the fire escapes that were on the outside of the building, having answered the question they had. But they chose to stop wasting time, and in turns, they threw themselves out the window using their wings to glide towards the alley, where they saw the masked man enter, but by the time they all arrived Issei was no longer there. "What are you all doing here?" said asked in a serious tone of a woman above the demons, to which they all looked towards the sky, meeting Yubaluna. Meanwhile somewhere else. Now we will go with Issei, who was walking with a limp and entering another alley until halfway along his path, he managed to hear how a door to his left opened courtesy of a spirit, who proceeded to help the brown-haired boy by making him enter the place being nothing more than the kitchen of a restaurant, to which once inside Issei did not waste time and began to take off all his clothes until he was left in boxers, not even caring that many people were seeing him. With all the magic he had left, he created a magic circle, took out his backpack and opened it, obtaining the first aid kit and the bottle of narcotics, and then received a piece of cloth that the spirit had passed him, putting it in his mouth and using it as a gag. Taking out a small bottle of medicinal alcohol, Issei opened it, starting to breathe heavily to only wet the wound on his left leg, feeling a tremendous burning sensation which made him grunt loudly, but gathering more courage, he proceeded to wet his other wounds in alcohol, regretting doing that a lot. After a few minutes full of suffering, the burning sensation he felt calmed down, so he decided to suture himself, taking his time. When he finished, he opened the bottle of narcotics and took out 2 pills, which he swallowed without thinking. Leaning against what seemed to be an oven or a deep fryer, Issei decided to take a little break, managing to feel how in the next few minutes, his muscles were relaxing and he stopped feeling the pain, at least a little. "Ryu. Wow, you look like a drug addict on his first trip, boy," he said with a somewhat amused tone, appearing in front of the brunette. "Issei. You arrived at the right time, Ryu, could you help me a little?" he said asked with a somewhat exhausted tone, passing some bandages to the spirit who simply grabbed them. "Ryu. Sure, where do I sell you?" he said asked a little curious, to which Issei got up with a little difficulty. "Issei. On my chest, abdomen and on my leg, make it a little tight, okay?" he said, to which Ryu just started to bandage him. "Ryu. Do you want me to tell you something? You look much better than other times," he said, bandaging Issei's chest, while the aforementioned had his arms raised. "Issei. For now, later on I will be just as or more destroyed as always," he said with a rather sure tone that he was going to end up in shit when everything ends. "Ryu. Hey, what's wrong with those discouraging words? At least you got rid of 6 meddlers, because if you hadn't done it now, they would surely have given you problems later on," he said, making Issei see the positive aftertaste from the beating he received. Issei. Yes. But this was not part of the plan. "Now that I am like this, it will be difficult for me to fight," he said with a somewhat serious tone, hopefully being able to raise his arms. "Ryu. And what about us? There are only 9 women left and 10 with Riser Phoenix, none of them will know who, where or what finished them off. Well, except for the cat sisters, only they can sense us and attack us, although they won't be able to take on all of us," he said with a confident tone, something that partly surprised and confused the brown-haired boy, but he just shook his head. "Issei. There's no need for you to fight, you're already helping me too much with what you do," he said, planning to finish off Riser Phoenix and his nobility himself. "Ryu. Okay, do whatever you want. By the way, Mio and the others are already in position, they are about 5 blocks from here, more specifically in the eastern area over there," he said with a somewhat carefree tone, pointing to his left, something that Issei noticed. Issei. Okay, are you done? Ryu. Sure, but I hope you have the energy and ability to run, he said, having finished bandaging Issei, who only proceeded to get dressed as quickly as he could. Issei. I hope the same. However, Issei could hear and smell the demons approaching his position at the other end of the restaurant, so he continued getting dressed, and when he finished he proceeded to put the first aid kit, bandages, narcotics and alcohol in his backpack, then close it and take 2 pistol magazines that were in the pocket of the bag. Issei Ryu informed them that I will be on my way, the plan is still in place, but do not do anything until I arrive and give a signal, he said in a somewhat serious tone, reloading his pistol and putting the only magazine he had in the front of his waist. Ryu. Well, you two stay with him, he said in a somewhat authoritarian tone and then left, while 2 spirits of darkness appeared taking Ryu's place. Issei. Henry, do me a favor and take the backpack with you and take care of it, I have something very important in there, he said in a somewhat kind tone, to which the spirit just grabbed the backpack and left. Issei. Judith, I need you in the air and for you to help me get to the eastern zone, that's all I ask of you, he said receiving an okay from the spectrum. But the riser pieces. Now we will go with risers, women and girls who were in front of the restaurant where Issei was hidden, being nothing more than a McDonald's having found it thanks to the bloody left on the road. However, none of those present had the intention of entering the place because they had a plan that they had to carry out altogether. Ravel. Get ready, she ordered with a serious tone towards her brother's pieces, to which they proceeded to spread their wings flying towards the sky, except for Mihi and Yubaluna who stayed with her. All. We are in position, Ravel-sama, they all exclaimed confidently, informing the blonde through their communicators. Ravel. Okay, it's your turn, Yubaluna-san, she said, looking at the purple-haired girl, who just nodded and created a huge magic circle above the restaurant. From this magic came a powerful spell which completely destroyed the McDonald's, causing a huge explosion, but not hearing Graphia's voice announcing the masked man's retreat, Yubaluna, Ravel and Mihi spread their wings going to a specific direction, while the phoenix tried to communicate with her companions. Ravel. Girls, I'm starting the plan. Just do what we agreed on, understood? He said in a somewhat serious tone, flying towards the place where the 3 of them were supposed to go. All. Understood, Ravel-sama, they all exclaimed in a confident and firm tone, to which Ravel cut off the communication. Being completely attentive, all the women were looking for Issei with their eyes looking at every place near them, remembering how tired and hurt the aforementioned was, knowing with all that he was not going to get very far until several seconds later Burant managed to locate him. Burant. Girls, he's over there, he exclaimed, pointing at an Issei who was walking with difficulty along the sidewalk about 2 blocks from where they were, catching the attention of his companions. Those who saw the masked man did not say anything, and together they went to where he was, throwing several spells at him from a distance which Issei could barely dodge, receiving a lot of damage in the process, but in the same way the brown-haired man got up and began to run, ready to reach the eastern area. But his goal to be fulfilled was interrupted by the demons who continued to throw spells at him, causing him to change direction repeatedly and not being able to hear Judith clearly. Even when he went into the shops or any building to avoid the enchantments, but the hand-to-hand combatants went for him, being beaten by them and then left alone as if nothing had happened. However, after a while and between the explosions almost at point-blank range, the damage he received, his wounds that opened, and the fatigue began to take their toll on Issei, feeling like he was about to succumb to defeat because the idea of giving up crossed his mind until he realized something. For some reason he was no longer taking any damage, he couldn't hear or smell the demons anywhere, even though they had been hot on his heels for a long time, but after a few seconds he realized that he couldn't do that either, hear or smell anything. Issei began to walk around him trying to hear the wind, the electricity running through the light poles, his heartbeats, and he even tried to smell his own, but nothing, and without him knowing it, desperation and fear were taking over him. Issei. Mio, Ryu, can you hear me? I need you to help me, he exclaimed desperately and scared, but he couldn't even hear his own voice. Issei. Guys, I need you, please help me, he exclaimed, turning around trying to find something to lean on, but he couldn't find anything at all. Issei. Judith, Franklin, Allison, I need your help, he exclaimed desperately, without having any idea of what to do to hear or smell again. But while Issei was going through that desperate situation, he was seen by the demons who said nothing and only remained serious and expressionless, although they were not alone, but Riser himself was accompanying them, having a mocking and arrogant smile, looking at the brown-haired man. Riser. Very well done, girls, although I think it took you quite a while to do something so simple, don't you think? He said in a serious tone, looking at his pieces and remembering how 6 of them were defeated by a human. Ravel. That human is not ordinary Ani-sama, besides, he is not alone, she said with a somewhat serious and annoyed tone, remembering how in the hotel they had difficulties to go to the 12th floor because something or someone did not let them advance, and that question answered itself when hearing how Issei not only shouted different names like Amanda, Barry, Jacqueline, Caleb among others. Riser. Well, that doesn't matter, destroy it, he said authoritatively towards his pieces, who did not hesitate and launched themselves towards the brown-haired boy. The first to attack was Mihi, throwing a spell at the brunette, who received it squarely in his chest, causing him to fall to the ground. Desperately, Issei got on his knees and drew his pistol, shooting in different directions without managing to hurt or harm anyone, only uselessly and unnecessarily wasting his ammunition. By the time he ran out of bullets, Issei threw away his gun and proceeded to get up and get into a battle stance, although he had no idea where or how they were going to attack him, until out of nowhere, he received a powerful spell on his back, which made him return to the ground. But he quickly got up from the ground again, and when he did, someone made a deep cut on his arm, and then he received another cut, but this time on his left side, trying to guess the place or where they were going to attack him. The brown-haired boy did not expect to receive a strong blow to his face, and then receive a wave of punches and kicks. "Issei Lost," he shouted while spinning and hitting nothing. While doing that, he continued receiving increasingly powerful spells, cuts, punches and kicks from Riser's pieces, who were surprised to see how the brown-haired man remained standing, but on the other hand, Riser enjoyed seeing the beating his opponent was receiving from his nobility, already wanting to do the same to him. "Issei. Phoenix, get out of wherever you are," he exclaimed furiously mixed with tiredness, trying to locate the pieces of the phoenix and the phoenix itself. "Issei. Stop hiding in the skirts of some women, don't you have the balls to face me?" he exclaimed, asked still with that furious tone, which annoyed Riser when he heard that. However, in a moment of carelessness on the part of Marion, the brown-haired boy was able to grab her by her clothes in time before she could leave. He went towards her and proceeded to throw her forcefully to the ground and then strangle her. Although the brown-haired boy ended up receiving a strong blow to the face, causing him to get on top of Marion and being kicked by the aforementioned girl the moment he regained his breath. Holding him by the back and lifting him up, Lee held Issei while her companions and sister were in charge of beating him brutally, not only for what he did to Marion, but they were also doing it for their companions who were taken out of the game. "Issei. Son of a hitch, when I find you I will," he didn't finish speaking, because Isabella began to hit him savagely, making it impossible for him to finish saying anything. Without thinking, Lee released the brunette who received a final blow to the face courtesy of Isabella, falling face up on the ground while a large amount of blood came out of his mouth. The 8 demons except Ravel surrounded Issei, continuing to hit and kick him, despite the fact that the aforementioned was more than finished. But while they were doing that, Riser slowly approached them, circling around, looking with amusement and superiority at the state of his enemy, and then approached him while his pieces stepped aside, letting him continue on his way. "Riser Ravel, get rid of this barrier," he said authoritatively towards his sister, who without objecting anything did what her brother asked, allowing Issei to hear and smell again. "Riser. Take this garbage off," he said in a somewhat annoyed tone, taking off Issei's scarf and seeing how his opponent's face was completely stained with the blood coming out of his mouth. "Riser. Takeda Hayadu and Issei Hayadu, I guess you two must be brothers. Since that explains why, you look just like him right now," he said with an arrogant tone and a mocking smile, remembering the state he left Takeda in the day they fought. "Riser. Both of you are so pathetic and miserable that you are pitiful, but you are definitely more pitiful and sad. Just look at yourself, you are such a mess that it makes me nauseous just looking at you," he said in a mocking tone and looking with disgust, but at the same time with superiority at Issei, stepping hard on his chest, causing him to agonize with pain. "Riser. You want this to end, right? If that's what you want, fine with me. I can't stand watching anymore and I want to enjoy my wife's body right now," he said in a malicious tone, raising his right fist and enveloping it in flames. Issei could barely move and stay conscious, even despite his state he couldn't help but let out a small silly smile, realizing that he didn't have any kind of chance of defeating a high-class devil, and along with it he knew that he wasn't going to be able to survive for long if he wanted to enter the supernatural world. Riser, for his part, did not hesitate for a single second and attacked the brown-haired boy, but before he could touch him, several shots were heard, causing the phoenix pieces to be on guard and look around for the shooter, but they could not locate him anywhere. However, they heard their king give a loud moan of pain, to which they all looked at him, seeing how he had a hole in his right hand and that he had lost his middle finger, while blood began to come out of his right leg. Ubaluna and Ravel went to attend to their king brother, while the others were in charge of protecting them and also focusing on finding the person responsible for injuring the phoenix, although we will concentrate on Mio, who was on the terrace of a building, being about 4 blocks from where Riser was with his peerage and Issei. The spirit was using a MK-14 enhanced battle rifle with a telescopic sight and a bipod, targeting Ubaluna and Mihi. "Mio. Attack in 3 2 1 now," he said in a serious tone, pulling the trigger of the gun repeatedly shooting at his targets. Those shots were heard by Riser and his peerage, who witnessed how Ubeluna and Mihi fell to the ground while blood came out of their abdomen, feeling immense pain, but not only because they had received the bullets, but they also felt something else, but they did not know what it was. Rafia. A queen and a bishop of Riser-sama are withdrawing from the game, she announced, exclaimed, while both of them were taken out of the game in particles of light. The moment everyone heard that announcement, several shots began to be heard, causing Riser and his peerage to become confused and try to look for the shooters, but they couldn't find them until suddenly Riser fell out of nowhere, ending up on top of Issei, and then tried to get up as quickly as possible. However, the brown-haired boy quickly grabbed him by the head and forcefully bit the phoenix's neck, tearing off a piece of flesh and then spitting it out and throwing the blonde aside, who was screaming in pain. Riser. Finish that bastard, he exclaimed with a tone full of pain and anger, covering the wound on his neck which was regenerating, but for some reason the wound on his hand and leg were not. Following their king's order, they all launched themselves at the chestnut tree, but some bullets stopped them, managing to dodge them in the middle of the road and dispersing, still having the objective of finishing off Issei until the previous thing happened again, preventing them from reaching their opponent. Ryu. Hey kid, are you okay? He said, appearing in front of a kneeling Issei. Issei. You, what do you think, Ryu? He said, with a very annoyed tone, not being in the mood and not in a good state to deal with stupid questions. Ryu. Well, that doesn't matter, let's go up, he said, helping the brown-haired boy get up, causing great pain to the aforementioned. Ryu. Perfect, now have this for your entertainment, he said, giving an MP5 to Issei, who gladly accepted it and then unsheathed his knife, which was a gold one. Having taken several long deep sighs, Issei threw himself against the pieces of Riser, feeling a great adrenaline and fury run through his entire body, replacing the pain as well as the tiredness he had a few moments ago. His first target was none other than Burant, going towards the pawn, who also did the same, entering into hand-to-hand combat, although Issei did everything possible to dodge his blows. But taking advantage of the fact that he had a weapon in his hand, he shot the demon in her legs, injuring her and causing her to stumble and fall to the ground. She tried to get up but couldn't until she saw how Issei approached her to just stab her in the chest, to which a small but noticeable thread of steam was seen at the moment he did so. Burant. Is that she didn't finish speaking because Issei hit her hard on the head with the submachine gun, leaving her unconscious. Rafia. A pawn of Riser-sama is leaving the game, she announced, exclaimed, causing Burant to disappear into particles of light. The brown-haired boy tried to move but ended up kneeling, feeling tremendous pain throughout his body, but he still got up from the ground with great difficulty, but in doing so he was attacked by the Nico twins, receiving all kinds of combos of punches and kicks from both of them, until a few moments later, he was able to dodge some of their attacks together. However, they increased the speed of their attacks, ending up giving him a blow to the face and another to the stomach courtesy of Nai, and then receiving another blow to the face that made him step back courtesy of Lee, but they quickly separated, letting Cirrus pass, who ended up cutting Issei on his right side. Believing that he was finished, Cirrus lowered her guard, but when she did, Issei shot her several times in the abdomen and chest, to which Lee went against him, although he ended up hitting her in the leg with the MP5 and then making a deep cut in her stomach with the knife. Nai quickly went to attack the brunette, however he deflected it and got up, proceeding to make a cut in her chest and then stab her there. Rafia. One knight and two pawns of Riser-sama are withdrawing from the game, she announced, exclaimed, to which the three were removed from the raiding game. Hearing someone approaching him, Issei managed to react in time and stepped back, having dodged a high kick from Marion, so without hesitation, the brown-haired boy aimed at the pawn and started shooting at her. But she protected herself in time using a magic circle, which repelled the bullets from the gun, so Marion chose to maintain the enchantment by attacking Issei with spells which he dodged and counterattacked by shooting, but the latter did not affect the pawn at all. Issei Ryu, I need help, he said, knowing that he did not have the ability to destroy the magic circle. Ryu. Don't worry, we'll take care of it, but first take this, he said, throwing him an MP5 magazine, which Issei didn't hesitate for a second and changed the magazine. Meanwhile with Ryu, he and other spirits went against Marion without being seen by her and proceeded to destroy the magic circle with blows, which they managed to do until they broke it into pieces, disconcerting the pawn, giving her enough time for Issei to arrive against her, making a cut on her face, then turning around and kicking her in the leg, dislocating it. As a final blow, Issei stabbed her in the stomach with his knife and then hit her hard behind the neck with the MP5, causing her to fall to the ground and being more than enough to knock her unconscious. Rafia. Another of Riser-sama's pawns is leaving the game, she announced, exclaimed, while Marion was taken out of the dimension by light particles. However, without noticing his heartbeat or smell, Isabella appeared, hitting Issei's chest hard and then grabbing the wrist where he was holding the submachine gun, leaving the brown-haired boy with no choice but to drop his weapon and then try to stab the tower. But she was faster and grabbed the hand that held the knife, however Issei wouldn't let go for anything in the world, so he took advantage of having his other hand free to hit the tower with all his might. Although his blows did almost nothing to it, and she counterattacked by hitting its abdomen and left side, and then hitting it in the jaw, causing it to dislocate and causing incredible pain to the brown-haired boy, although he quickly put it aside and grabbed the tower's head, giving it a strong headbutt across the face. However, the tower held her hand tighter, leaving Issei with no alternative, who grabbed Isabella by her right leg to lift her up and throw himself to the ground with her on top of him, using what he had at his disposal to stab her with his knife, but she stopped him, so the brown-haired boy began to apply force, as did the tower, the latter having the advantage. Until several spirits appeared helping Issei so that he could do his job, achieving it little by little, so Isabella, using all her strength, tried at all costs to avoid the knife from sticking into her, but between the specters and Issei, they ended up overcoming her. Feeling a great and immense pain and burning in her chest at the moment that the knife completely stuck into her without being able to avoid spitting blood. Rafia. A riser Sama tower is removed from the game, she announced, exclaimed, to which Isabella was taken out of the game without anything else to say. Ryu. This isn't over yet, boy, you only have 2 left, he said, making the brunette nod and get up from the ground with too much difficulty, grabbing the MP5 from the ground, and without wasting time he started walking in the direction that both phoenixes were escaping, wanting to end it all at once. Issei. Phoenix, I'm coming for you, he exclaimed with complete euphoria, chasing both brothers. Ravel, for her part, managed to hear Issei's scream, so she chose to speed up her pace while helping her brother walk, because for some strange reason bullet wounds regenerated slowly. However, both blondes collided with something in the middle of their path, seeing how several wide and dark silhouettes stood there doing nothing. Ravel. Come on, Ani-sama, we have to continue, she said alarmingly, helping her brother to stand up as she heard the screams of her enemy getting closer and closer. Listening to his sister, Riser stood up, and so they both prepared to continue on their way, but every time they tried to do so the silhouettes did not allow them to do so, causing the 2 blondes to despair and try to throw all kinds of physical or magical attacks at the figures, not affecting them at all. Issei. Phoenix, he exclaimed furiously, drawing the attention of both brothers, who turned around and saw a very angry Issei advancing towards them until he was half a block away. Ravel. Leave us alone, he exclaimed, throwing a fireball at the brown-haired boy, who quickly threw himself to the ground, dodging the attack. Issei. Don't get involved in this, if you don't want to end up like your friends, get out of here, he exclaimed seriously as he advanced, but Ravel threw another fireball at him, forcing him to hide behind a garbage container. Ravel. And you, why the hell are you doing this? He exclaimed, asked seriously, going to hide behind a building with his brother, putting the ladder against the wall, and then preparing another fireball. Issei. Don't give me that now, girl, he exclaimed in an annoyed manner, advancing until he got inside a kiosk. Ravel. Why are you risking your life in this game? Is Ria's Gremory that important to you? She exclaimed, throwing the fireball very close to the tent where Issei was hiding. Issei. What do you care about that, he exclaimed with a very annoyed and angry tone, hearing a rather annoying beep that was caused by the explosion of the fireball. Ravel. I care a lot, that's why I'm asking you, he exclaimed, making the brown-haired boy sigh irritated. Issei. I don't know, he exclaimed, playing dumb, trying to locate a suitable surface for the bullets to bounce off and hit Ravel. Ravel. What did you say? Issei. I said I don't know, okay, maybe because I didn't deserve it well, or maybe because I'm an idiot who only knows and likes to get into trouble, he exclaimed with a somewhat sincere tone, having located the perfect object to fulfill his objective. Issei. But I advise you, girl, if you don't want to get hurt, give up and get out of here, he exclaimed with a serious and firm tone, pointing his gun at a metal grate of a window that was on the other side of the street. Ravel. I'm not going to do that, she also exclaimed with a serious and firm tone, spreading her wings of fire ready to fight. Issei. As you wish, he said with a serious tone to himself, proceeding to shoot. Ravel, upon hearing the gunshots, quickly created a magic circle to defend herself, but to her surprise, she did not expect the bullets to hit her in the back of her hip, feeling the same intense pain and burning that her friends and brother felt when they received the shots or a cut from Issei's knife. Riser R. Ravel, he didn't finish speaking because his sister interrupted him. Ravel. Ani-sama, these bullets, they are blessed, but they have something else, she said with an agonized tone, unable to avoid shedding tears of pain. Riser was about to get up, but Ravel stopped him, which confused the Phoenix, and he only saw how his sister took a small vial out of her dress and handed it to him, realizing that they were Phoenix tears. However, before Riser could drink the liquid from the vial, Issei appeared, approaching Ravel at a slow pace and proceeding to stab her mercilessly in the stomach. Rafia. A bishop of Riser Sama is withdrawing from the game, she announced, exclaimed, while Ravel disappeared into particles of light. Riser. "You bastard, you wanted and planned this," he said with a serious and annoyed tone, hiding the phoenix tear while he looked with hatred at the brown-haired boy who only approached him by crouching down. Issei. "No, I didn't want it and I didn't plan it either, but I would be lying to you if I didn't count on this," he said seriously, putting the MP5 to the blonde's head and almost pulling the trigger. "Riser. I ask for the second half," he exclaimed desperately and closed his eyes, but Issei pulled the trigger of the gun. But the bullets ended up embedding themselves in the wall, a few meters close to Riser's head. Riser opened his eyes and found himself facing Graphia, who had one of her hands on the submachine gun, having been responsible for saving the Phoenix heir from certain defeat, something that bothered Issei too much. "Issei. Why the hell did he do that?" he exclaimed in an annoyed and angry way, getting up and facing Graphia, even though the maid could finish him off without him noticing. "Graphia. I can't allow you to do that, Issei-sama. Riser-sama asked for the second half, it's part of the rules, and what you were about to do was against them," she said in a serious tone, but the brown-haired boy ignored what she said and pointed at the blonde's head. The maid looked at Issei seriously and chose to expel a large part of her power, but the brunette did not lower his gun for any reason and without hesitation pulled the trigger, although the bullets grazed the phoenix's head, embedding themselves in the wall behind it. Reluctantly, Issei lowered his gun and proceeded to walk away from there without any direction and with the enormous possibility of ending up fainting on his walk. Riser for his part was upset and angry, a simple human, and some strange figures defeated his entire nobility, forcing him to ask for the second half, although he was willing to make his opponent pay for the humiliation he made him go through. But Graphia on the other hand, saw how Issei was leaving, wanting to know how that innocent child became the disrespectful and barbaric teenager he is today. "Graphia. This is Graphia Lucifuge to announce that Riser-sama and Issei-sama will be going into break time. They will have a total of 20 minutes available to heal and rest. When the time is up, the second round of this rating game will begin," she said, announced through a magic circle towards the people watching the rating game from the stands. Soon. We watched as Issei found himself half naked in a bathroom. His entire body, face, chest, back, arms and legs were covered in blood and wounds, which were being sutured by several ghosts. "Let's go home. Please, Issei, give up. You don't have to continue with this," said Mio, gently and carefully caressing the brown-haired boy's left cheek. "Take charge of your actions and responsibilities, Issei. Searches-sama, the rating game has to end right now, that kid over there is cheating," exclaimed with a serious tone, one of the elders of the demonic council. Graphia do it Searches called to his wife who was behind him. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to conclusive evidence against Issei-sama, he will be Graphia could not finish announcing because someone or something pushed her back and in the process the screen disappeared from the sky. "I guess this is no longer part of the game," Azazel said, thinking that this could be a plan by Searches or Issei. "Tsubasa, what's wrong?" Sona exclaimed in a worried tone towards her rook piece. "There are too many, Sona-sama, there are too many," he said in an agonizing manner, feeling as if his head was literally going to explode from the exaggerated amount of specters he saw. Apart from her and the supreme god, Odin, no one else could see them, at most they were able to sense them. However, 4 people could sense them with complete clarity, and among those 4, 2 had the ability to hear them. "What is it you seek here, Spectre?" Searches asked demandingly. Nothing. But my friend who is there inside that dimension," said Ryu, clearly referring to Issei. "He wants to talk to you, in person," he said, leaving almost everyone baffled, except for one. "Very well, Issei, you have our attention. What do you want?" Searches asked in a serious tone, looking at the young brunette who was now dressed and in the box. "I want to make a deal," said Issei without hesitating for a single second, leaving more than one confused and with questions, but causing mocking laughter from the advisors. "And what will you do if we refuse, boy?" asked one of the elders, after having finished laughing. "Then I will give the order to kill Graphia Lucifuge," he said with a serious and determined tone, causing several to jump. "You're very serious, Azazel, what's wrong?" Michael asked curiously, looking at his brother. "There are several things that still don't add up, Michael," he said in a serious tone, looking at one of the magic screens. "Are you saying that because of the reaction that young Issei had, or because of the change of scenery that Riser requested?" said Michael, remembering the violent attitude that the brown-haired boy had a few minutes ago and the confidence in the blonde devil's words when he wanted to change the scenery that he initially requested. Both answered the leader of the Fallen, having more questions in his mind than those two. "Now everything makes sense," said Azazel, having realized everything, catching everyone's attention and making Odin smile. "What do you mean by that, Azazel Dono?" the matriarch of the Phoenix clan asked, confused. "Everything Issei has done was part of his plan from the beginning," revealed the Fallen One, leaving those present stunned when they realized that they were deceived by a child. "Now tell me, Phoenix, how do you know about this place?" Issei asked in a serious tone to a riser who was protected by a wall that surrounded him, while the left side of the Phoenix Heir's face was disfigured and took a long time to regenerate. I assumed so. Between the ammunition you have and those things that help and protect you, I have no chance of winning against you like that, said Riser, letting out a large amount of magic and pressure, surprising the brown-haired boy too much. Due to what happened, Riser Sama will be removed from the game. Therefore, Issei Sama is the he couldn't finish announcing because a black blur appeared in front of Issei. That person was none other than Riser himself, only he was completely burned and had several organs outside, and some were even missing. You thought I wouldn't be prepared if this situation were to occur, human? Exclaimed a totally confident and already healed Riser, but with 2 wings of fire with feathers coming from his back, plus he had more bird-like legs instead of his own. You're going to pay for everything, human, Riser declared, going to attack the brown-haired boy. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.